These guys are the Emperor's personal executioners. The Imperial Guard exists for one reason and one reason only: to brutally slaughter anyone who threatens the Akresha Empire. They are heavily armored, completely ruthless, and armed to the teeth with advanced weaponry. Their entire existence revolves around protecting the Emperor and his subjects by eliminating any enemies in their path. And they don't just defeat their targets, they obliterate them, leaving nothing but severed heads and wide, maniacal grins in their wake. Our boy Luca is training to become one of these elite killing machines. But how does an orphaned kid from the slums end up auditioning for the most dangerous military force in the galaxy? To understand the stakes, you have to look at the state of the universe. Centuries ago, Earth's technology reached dazzling heights, but humanity bled the planet dry. Resource exhaustion led to endless wars, and just as they started colonizing other planets, an unknown alien civilization blindsided them and completely destroyed Earth. The few human survivors drifted through the cold void of space until they finally discovered a massive, ice-covered planet with a breathable atmosphere. They named it Novus, their new home, and broadcasted its coordinates across the universe, calling all scattered remnants of humanity to rebuild civilization. The peace didn't last long, and the planet was eventually split into three massive powers. First is the Bellado Federation, a grand society where Earthlings and numerous alien races coexist. Then there's the Akresha Empire, a ruthless military state boasting an unstoppable army of cyborgs. And finally, the Korra Alliance, led by priests who weaponize force energy with their powerful minds. With three massive factions sharing one planet, Novus's resources are rapidly running out. And naturally, a brutal, all-out war to monopolize what's left is already brewing. Right in the heart of the Akresha Empire's mech lab, the pressure is on. The Imperial Guard cadets are lining up for their final evaluation, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The instructors warn the trainees that the Emperor himself is watching today's performance, meaning one wrong move could ruin their lives, while a perfect score could elevate them to the highest ranks of the Empire. Following up on that brutal execution, Captain Hollis Custoria warns Luca that he's got rotten luck. Going next means the Emperor will be judging him directly against that flawless performance. But our hero just smirks. He tells the captain it's way too early to count him out, prompting Hollis to warn him that he better back up that big talk. Stepping into the testing arena, Luca mentally runs through his prep. As an Imperial Guard trainee, he spent countless hours in grueling virtual death simulations, deliberately rewiring his own nervous system to max out his spatial perception. His targets are 5 death row inmates pumped full of cheap cybernetics. Figuring 10 seconds is more than enough time to clear the room, Luca lunges forward, but the cyborgs immediately open fire. Luca realizes that just surviving this test isn't enough. If he wants to climb the ranks, he needs to leave a permanent impression on the Emperor. He decides to attempt the same hyperlethal combat style the previous warrior just used. He's never actually tried it outside of simulations, but it's now or never. Pushing his enhanced senses to the absolute breaking point, he charges straight into the hail of bullets. Massive gamble pays off. Time seems to slow down as Luca flawlessly deflects the incoming gunfire, closing the gap and violently slashing through the inmates in a blur of steel. Captain Hollis watches from above with a proud, menacing smile. Covered in blood and panting heavily, Luca realizes he just shattered his own physical limits. As applause rings out through the facility, our hero knows he just skyrocketed his worth in the Empire. Martial arts instructor Kinuan approaches our hero. He's genuinely surprised that Luca managed to use guided ballistics without even reaching that part of the curriculum yet. Luca casually admits he just copied the noble kid who went before him. Kinuan laughs, pointing out that noble kids have a massive head start over street orphans, but he likes Luca's style so much that he offers him a special present. Without warning, the instructor lunges forward and brutally plucks out Luca's eye, but our boy doesn't even flinch. Kinuan is stunned by his insane pain tolerance, immediately declaring that Luca is exactly his kind of cadet. Smirking through the blood, Luca calmly points out that the damaged eye was going to be removed anyway. He then smoothly requests a high-tech replacement with a built-in ballistic prediction system. Now that is how you negotiate. Later, back at the dorms, Luca gets an unexpected visitor. It's cadet number 12, Ile Kartika, the very same noble prodigy Luca copied earlier. Ile politely asks if it's a bad time, and despite wanting nothing more than to crash, Luca invites him in. Ile praises Luca's terrifying performance during training. Luca instantly recognizes the natural dignity rolling off the guy. Ile is a direct descendant of the renowned Kartika noble line. Realizing it's a terrible idea to make an enemy of high society, Luca keeps his guard up. But Ile surprises him by offering a rare, high-grade blue gem designed to relax the nervous system and guarantee perfect rest. Luca tries to refuse, but Ile insists, warning him that sheer willpower won't beat physical fatigue in tomorrow's brutal training. Luca caves and takes it, instantly feeling the difference from the cheap slum knockoffs he's used to. Deflecting the attention, Luca praises Ile's skills, admitting he only copied his moves. But Ile shakes his head, revealing that his cybernetic battle eye does all the heavy ballistic math for him. Ile points out that Luca pulling off the exact same maneuvers using just his raw senses is way more impressive. He even mentions that the captain is so fascinated by Luca's irregular talent that he's personally funding his new cybernetic eye. Luca plays it humble, claiming lower-class kids like him just have to try harder than the superior nobility, but Ile immediately flips the script. He hints that the elite often forge their test results to stay ahead, whereas an orphan like Luca, with zero money for bribes, made it this far purely on undeniable, terrifying skill. Lake Kartika, a high-ranking noble cadet, reaches out to shake Luca's hand, openly admitting that his own social class is full of incompetence. He tells our hero that he's rooting for him, believing that true skill should rise to the top. Luca confidently accepts the handshake, stating that success was always his plan regardless. But as Ile adds that this is all for the sake of the Empire, Luca can't help but wonder what the noble is really plotting. After all, Luca isn't just a survivor. He's a boy raised in the tyrannical Acrescia Empire to be the ultimate weapon of war. During a live-fire training drill, our hero drops from the ceiling, his cybernetic right eye glowing as it calculates the perfect trajectory. In a flash, he unloads his weapon, drilling perfect headshots into every single target from a massive distance. Checking the targets, Ile is seriously impressed. He points out that it's completely unfair for Luca to be a close combat specialist and a master marksman who easily secures the highest grade. But Luca doesn't miss a beat. He reminds Ile that an Imperial Guard must master every weapon, then roasts the noble for slacking off. After all, Ile only got the second highest grade, even though he managed to fire every single bullet through the exact same hole. Luca warns him that if he keeps up this lazy attitude, he'll leave him in the dust. Instead of getting defensive, Ile just smiles, insisting the Empire desperately needs irregulars like him. Right now, wealth and status are just shields for incompetence, and he hopes skilled fighters like Luca will finally expose the corrupt system. Luca glares at him, warning that those words are outright treason. If he reported this, not even the powerful Kartika family name could save him. But Ile just grins, knowing Luca won't say a word because deep down he's a good person. Luca just sighs, realizing this noble is going to be a massive nuisance. Fast forward to the third quarter of their second year, and the physical test escalates into a brutal live-fire drill. The instructor promotes Luca and Ile to platoon leaders and gives them a dark objective: wipe out an illegal Korite outpost in their territory and leave absolutely zero survivors. As the cadets deploy into the scorched canyon, reality sets in. This is their first time fighting another human faction, and Ile hesitates, remembering that the Korra Alliance shares their Earthling ancestry. But Luca immediately shuts down that sentiment, pointing out the massive senior Imperial guards shadowing their every move. Those towering black mechs aren't there for backup. Luca realizes they are executioners, sent to kill any cadet weak enough to get captured. He reminds his friend of their Empire's teachings, that the other factions are just parasites draining the planet's resources, and Ile reluctantly falls in line. The platoon storms the fiery outpost, and it quickly turns into an absolute massacre. Luca cuts through the enemy ranks, noting that the Korites are barely armed and expecting the slaughter to end in minutes. But the battlefield suddenly goes quiet when he finds himself staring down a terrified, unarmed little boy crying for his mother. The brutal reality of the Empire's orders hits hard, and the squad realizes pulling the trigger would be a whole lot easier if the kid was holding a gun. The instructor's voice echoes in Luca's mind, demanding they take no prisoners. Forcing himself to bury his humanity, our hero rationalizes that the boy is just another parasite stealing their resources, and he brings his blade down without a single moment of hesitation. Out on a live battlefield, the grim reality of war hits Ile hard. Confronted by a terrified child in the burning wreckage, he hesitates, knowing that showing mercy to an enemy is high treason that could cost him his life. Before his momentary freeze can get him killed, Luca steps in and obliterates the threat. Sweating bullets, Ile panics that Luca might report him for breaking protocol, but quickly realizes his friend just covered his tracks and saved his life. But there's no time to breathe. A massive explosion suddenly rips through the outpost, and emerging from the flames is a wild-haired enemy wizard screaming curses at the Acrescian forces. Luca immediately assesses the threat. The mage just leveled the area without a single visible weapon. As a barrage of blue magical energy rains down, Luca realizes they are dealing with a deadly force user. The furious wizard screams that they are attacking a civilian settlement, not a military base, and that the people the Acrescians slaughtered were just trying to survive. Luca curses their captain for sending them in blind without warning them about a force user. The surprise attack leaves Ile battered on the ground, racked with guilt because his earlier hesitation left the squad vulnerable. Promising to make up for his mistake, Ile tries to push through the pain, but Luca tells him to stay down. Flipping the script, our hero orders the rest of the unit to scatter and secure the outpost while he handles the mage alone. As the soldiers split up, the wizard panics and tries to stop them, proving Luca's tactical theory. The mage is only fighting to buy time for the civilians to escape. With the battlefield now a one-on-one duel, Luca locks onto his target, already exploiting a fatal flaw in the enemy's magic. Force users have to physically move before they can cast a spell. Realizing his enemy relies on hand gestures to cast explosive force magic, Luca quickly figures out a counter. By tracking the momentary spatial flickers around the caster's hands, our hero can predict exactly where the blast will hit. He wants to drag this out into an endurance fight, but his enhanced nervous system is burning out. If he keeps up these high-speed maneuvers, his body will shut down first. He has to end this right now while he can still hit max speed. Pushing past his limits, Luca blurs into a streak of pure light, dodging a massive explosion and lunging straight through the fire. The enemy swings his blade, but Luca slips past the strike and lands a brutal counterattack. Ripping the enemy's armored helmet clean off, Luca exposes the man's face. The fanatic braces for death, but the moment he locks eyes with Luca, he freezes in pure shock. Staring at our hero, the man realizes he's fighting a literal kid. But Luca doesn't share that same hesitation. He ruthlessly grabs the man and delivers a crushing kick, launching the enemy through the air until he is brutally impaled on a jagged spire. Gasping for air, Luca knows he just got incredibly lucky. Korites are supposed to be merciless fanatics who slaughter anyone with different beliefs, so that split second of pity makes no sense. If the man hadn't hesitated, Luca would be dead. But he pushes the thought away, reminding himself of the Imperial Guard's absolute mandate: suppress all emotions and eliminate every threat to the Emperor, even if the enemy is begging for their life. Later, the adrenaline finally wears off and Luca wakes up submerged inside a medical pod in the accretion recovery ward. As he regains consciousness, a voice cuts through the silence, asking him exactly how it felt to be standing right at death's door. Luca wakes up in a medical recovery pod, floating in glowing blue liquid right next to his friend, Ile. They both barely survived the last mission, but in this empire, near-death just means free upgrades. Ile shows off his brand new mechanical arms, while Luca reveals his shattered back was completely replaced with a titanium spine and artificial skin. For our hero, it's barely a setback. He figures his entire body will be completely mechanized in a few decades anyway, so getting a head start is just good business. Loading in his tank, Ile starts putting the pieces together. He realizes Captain Hollis definitely knew they were walking into a trap with a high-level force user, using the ambush as a brutal live fire test while the senior guards watched. But something else is bothering Ile. Neither of them actually died, despite taking direct hits from devastating energy blasts. He realizes the enemy force user was holding back the entire time and never actually intended to kill them. Luca remembers the enemy's tear-streaked face when the man realized he was fighting a child. But to Luca, that hesitation is just pathetic weakness. He's a forged soldier, and he vows that the enemy's soft-hearted mercy will only lead to a mountain of dead comrades. He hopes the man watches from the afterlife in pure regret as Luca slaughters his people. Ile drops a bombshell question, asking Luca why he let the young Korite survive alive. Luca freezes, his eyes widening in panic. He quickly deflects, mocking Ile for talking too much and joking that the doctors must have installed an extra mouth instead of an arm. But as Luca turns away in the glowing tank, the guilt of his own hesitation eats at him. He silently admits he made a mistake, swearing to himself that he'll never show mercy again. Fast forward, and the boys have officially survived their second year of the brutal 4-year Imperial Guard training program. An instructor praises them as the top 2 cadets in their class, teasing that they might even become centurions one day. For a slum-born orphan like Luca, that title is everything. The Guard is made up of 1,000 elites divided into 10 units, with Captain Hollis at the very top. Once Luca is fully mechanized, he'll start at the bottom in the 10th unit, but if he can claw his way up to become its centurion, his future in the Empire is absolutely guaranteed. Back in the training arena, Luca and Ile put their new upgrades to the test in a high-speed sparring match. Ile is noticeably stronger and hits like a truck with his new metallic arms, throwing a barrage of heavy strikes, but it's not even close. Luca effortlessly weaves through the onslaught, slipping past Ile's guard to deliver a blindingly fast counterattack. Before Ile can even process the movement, Luca is already behind him, moving at a speed his friend can't even comprehend. Luca smirks, reminding Ile of their sparring score, 124-0. As they catch their breath under the night sky, Ile complains about the grueling training, wondering why they don't just buy better cybernetic parts. He notices Luca has been pushing himself to the absolute limit ever since the instructor dangled the rank of centurion in front of them. Luca doesn't deny it. Becoming an Imperial Guard elite is his only way up. Unlike Ile, he doesn't have a cushy noble estate to fall back on, and if he fails, it's straight back to the slums. Luca demands to know why a privileged noble like Ile is even bothering with the Guard if he isn't going to take it seriously. Ile drops his guard and confesses his real dream. He always wanted to be an archaeologist studying the ancient arcane civilizations. But since the Empire strictly outlaws independent arcane research, his family of hardcore generals forced him into the military. Luca rolls his eyes, telling the rich kid to cry him a river while people in the slums starve to death. Ile just laughs, admitting he only shared his treasonous little secret because they're friends. Luca instantly turns cold, warning Ile that expressing anti-Empire sentiments could get him executed. He swears that his loyalty belongs solely to the Emperor, and threatens that if Ile ever becomes an enemy of the Empire, he won't hesitate to strike him down. But Ile sees right through the tough guy act, smirking and calling his bluff. Ile points out that if Luca was truly a mindless, obedient dog to the Empire, he would have killed him on the spot for his confession. Telling his friend not to be so hard on himself, Ile walks off, leaving Luca stunned. Luca can only mutter to himself that the noble's naive foolishness is going to get him killed one day. Fast forward to their 3rd year of training, and the cadets are deployed on an active recon mission into unexplored neutral territory. They uncover massive, ancient arcane ruins still humming with energy, and Ile immediately geeks out over the pre-human architecture. But Luca is on high alert, scolding his friend to stay focused. If they run into a rival faction out here, it's going to be an all-out bloodbath, but Ile casually brushes off the danger, assuming their senior guards will handle any heavy hitters. Suddenly, another cloaked cadet steps up to defend Ile's obsession with history. This is Claude Ramons, the son of another prestigious military family, though not quite on the level of the Kardakas. With a calm smile, Claude turns to Luca, asking him a pointed question. Claude Ramons approaches Luca, admitting he likes our hero's style and casually offering to set him up with his younger sister. Luca instantly gets defensive, pointing out the massive gap in their status since he's just an orphan, but Claude brushes it off, noting that with Luca's insane skills, he will probably end up being their boss anyway. As Illy teases Luca about his sudden popularity, the lighthearted moment is abruptly shattered. Luca's cybernetic sensors suddenly blare with a life sign warning, forcing him to snap into combat mode. He barks orders for Illy's team to cover the rear while he and Claude take the front, but as they push forward into the mist, a towering, heavily armored figure emerges from the shadows. Panic instantly sets in as they realize exactly what they are up against, a deadly Korate paladin. Before anyone can even scream to run, the paladin moves with terrifying speed, unleashing a blinding flash of blue energy. Luca watches in absolute horror as the paladin's glowing blade strikes with merciless precision. The memory of Claude's warm smile and his offer to introduce his sister flashes through Luca's mind right as the devastating attack lands. In a single gruesome instant, the spear connects, and Claude's entire torso is instantly obliterated. But relying on tech is a double-edged sword. Right when a massive armored figure launches a surprise attack, Luca's battle eye implant starts flashing critical errors. Blinded by the glitch, he realizes he has to predict the path of the enemy's spear using nothing but his raw instincts. Gunfire erupts through the misty forest as Illy snaps Luca out of his daze, shouting that they need to buy time. They quickly realize outrunning a paladin is a death sentence. Their only shot at survival is to hold their ground. If they can just survive for 10 brutal seconds, the Imperial guards monitoring the area will arrive as backup. The countdown begins. The armored knight lunges forward, wielding a spear radiating with lethal blue energy. But surviving 10 seconds is easier said than done. The paladin unleashes a devastating strike, and Luca barely raises his armored arm in time to deflect the blow, the sheer force of the impact shattering the air around them. Staring death in the face, Luca doubts he can hold out against such a monster. But then the brutal lessons of his training echo in his mind: run away like a pig to the slaughter and you'll just get shot in the back. If the enemy swings a sword, you swing back harder because the guard has no room for weaklings. Pushing past his limits, Luca forces himself to move before the spear can find its mark. As the timer hits 3 seconds, he throws himself directly into the clash, parrying a blinding explosion of energy as Illy screams his name over the deafening blast. 6 seconds down, Luca catches his breath, realizing the massive impact completely destroyed his mechanical hand. But it was a worthy sacrifice. He successfully blocked the fatal strike. Bloodied but unbroken, he locks eyes with the paladin and braces himself for the next onslaught. But their brief moment of camaraderie is violently cut short. As a hidden timer ticks down, the sinister figure in ornate white armor finally makes their move, unleashing a massive, expanding wave of blue energy that engulfs the fiery forest. Luca barely reacts in time, grimacing as the lethal blue blade slices through the air right past him, tearing through metal and debris in a flurry of sparks. As the dust settles, a horrifying realization hits him. The assassin wasn't aiming for him at all. Luca's eyes go wide with panic, screaming Illy's name as he watches the armored killer stomp forward to execute the noble cadet. Seeing his friend in the crosshairs, Luca's battle implant eye flares a furious, glowing red, and he lets out a raw, desperate roar of absolute rage. Suddenly, the sky darkens as a colossal, dark-armored mechanical leg descends from above, shaking the very earth. A towering figure clad in heavy, glowing dark armor emerges from the fiery wreckage, unleashing a devastating point-blank energy blast that detonates the entire battlefield into a chaotic, fiery explosion. From the blinding smoke, a warrior draped in a red cape rockets forward at blinding speed, leaving a trail of pure energy in their wake. The red cape powerhouse and the white-armored assassin lock onto each other, charging head-on through the roaring flames until their glowing weapons clash in a blinding shockwave that leaves Luca screaming in the crossfire. The sheer scale of the titans towering over him is terrifying. In a blur of motion, the dark-armored powerhouse leaps into the abyss and comes crashing down with earth-shattering force, slamming the white knight straight into the ground. Mechanical hands lock onto their target, mercilessly pummeling the assassin with a relentless, brutal barrage of heavy metal strikes. The assault begins without warning as a blinding flash of light is instantly followed by a catastrophic explosion that obliterates the facility. Deep in the surrounding forest, a lone survivor pants in terror as the mist parts to reveal the true nightmare. A squad of towering, black mechas with glowing red eyes advances through the wreckage, hunting down anyone left alive. Overcome by the sheer scale of the destruction, one man breaks down in tears, screaming to the heavens in disbelief that he somehow survived. But when empires go to war, it's always the grunts who pay the price in blood. The real slaughter has only just started as colossal armored giants step onto the crumbling battlefield, their advanced blue and gold energy suits crackling with lethal power. The chaos funnels into a legendary showdown between two absolute titans. An Imperial Guard steps up to the plate, piloting the Empire's ultimate dark-armored weapon known as the Legion. Standing in his way is a force-wielding Korite paladin clad in brilliant white armor, ready to pit ancient magic against raw mechanical devastation. Two warriors lunge at each other, their weapons colliding with enough force to shatter the sky itself. Blinding energy erupts from the impact, cracking the paladin's helmet and sending fiery shockwaves across the monolithic ruins. As red and blue energy violently clashes, the battle triggers a massive explosion, awakening a monstrous, glowing-eyed creature looming in the shadows of the sunset. But their debate is instantly cut short by a monstrous clash near a towering obelisk. A heavily armored invader with glowing red eyes locks blades with an Imperial Guard, moving so fast they're nothing but a blur. Seeing the terrifying reality of high-level combat up close, the cadets can only watch in awe, praying their protector comes out on top. But things go south fast. The colossal enemy overpowers the guard, shattering his armor and sending him flying. Before the guard can recover, the dark robotic warrior unleashes a massive beam of red energy, slamming a giant mechanical fist down and completely pinning the white-armored soldier to the dirt. Watching from the sidelines, Luca breaks into a cold sweat. Thanks to his battle eye implant, he's already experienced the enemy's terrifying speed and force, but he realizes the pinned guard has no idea what's coming next. If the guard takes the hit, he dies, and if their only protector falls, Luca knows he and the other cadets are dead meat. He has to step in. Throwing caution to the wind, our hero stomps the ground and plunges his glowing blue energy sword into the earth. The impact shatters the terrain, sending a blinding beam of blue energy shooting upward in a desperate bid to distract the robotic killer and force its lethal strike to miss. Split-second distraction is exactly what they needed. As the dark figure lunges, the sudden burst of blue energy throws off its lethal rhythm. Seizing the tiny opening, a golden dagger is snatched up and the battlefield erupts into total chaos. Glowing fists and energy blades collide in a blinding flash, culminating in an earth-shattering explosion that completely obliterates the landscape. As the smoke clears from the massive blast, Luca lies broken on the scorched earth, gasping for air. He knows that if the enemy paladin survived the explosion, he's a dead man. Heavy armored footsteps shake the ground and a towering figure looms over him. But it's not the enemy, it's an Imperial Guard. The colossal soldier praises Luca for his help in taking down the knight and reaches out a hand to help him up. But as Luca looks up, his battle eye implant catches a horrifying detail. The Empire's Legion mech suits are supposed to be every trainee's ultimate dream, the pinnacle of combat strength. But this guard's head has been completely blown off. Terrified, Luca asks the soldier how he's still moving, questioning if he's even human anymore. Hearing this, the headless guard reaches up, feeling the empty space where his head used to be. Letting out a blood-curdling mechanical scream, the monstrous suit finally shuts down and collapses into the dirt. Shivering from blood loss and shock, Luca stares at the metal corpse. The prestigious, glorious Imperial Guard he had spent his whole life trying to become was nothing but a hollow, nightmarish machine. As his vision blurs, he wonders if this horrific truth is the last thing he'll see before he bleeds out. Just then, a familiar voice calls out, "It's Ile." Luca manages a weak smile, relieved that his friend survived the slaughter, though Ile grimly reveals they are the only two left. Knowing his stomach wounds are fatal, Luca uses his last ounce of strength to point his friend toward the horizon, out toward the enemy territories of Cora and Bellato. He tells Ile that the freedom he's been searching for isn't here in the corrupt empire, urging the noble to leave him behind and finally chase his own life. Battered and bleeding in the ruins, Ile urges Luca to leave him behind before enemy reinforcements arrive. He reflects on how bright Luca's dream of success once seemed, genuinely hoping our hero survives to achieve the life he desires. But Luca isn't about to abandon his friend. Triggering an emergency beacon, he drags Ile up, refusing to let him die out here because the guilt would destroy him. Ile can only sigh at Luca's stubbornness as an Imperial rescue ship finally descends from the sky. Safely back in the Empire, Luca recovers from his injuries and flips through a catalog for a replacement cybernetic arm. Ile sneaks up on him, casually recommending a high-spec model so he can quickly return to duty. Their disastrous mission is officially dubbed the Korite Paladin Encounter Incident, and as soon as Luca heals, he's dragged into a string of intense military investigations. Surprisingly, the higher-ups aren't just investigating the casualties. Ile reveals that a mysterious spinning artifact was discovered at the ruins, the exact prize their enemy was hunting. Now an elite retrieval team is being assembled, and a massive political struggle is brewing. Ile warns that if the Cora Alliance refuses to hand the artifact over, it could spark an all-out war, which would only play right into the hands of the rival Bellato Federation. But Luca shuts down the political talk immediately. He doesn't care about rival factions or Federation schemes, he just fights where he's ordered to, because to him, that is the only true duty of an Imperial Guard. Meanwhile, a grizzled veteran reflects on a disturbing encounter with one of these elite armored guards. He recalls how the soldier kept talking and reacting even after getting his head blown clean off. The top brass brushed it off as a simple phantom phenomenon caused by residual cybernetic signals, but the veteran knows the truth, that was no glitch. Still, he decides to keep his mouth shut, knowing better than to dig for answers the Empire wants buried. Back at the cadet training facilities, Luca finds himself in the luxurious visitors' room. Growing up as an orphan in the slums, he never expected to get a visitor, but the person waiting for him is a total shock. It's Lillian Ramons, the younger sister of his recently deceased squadmate Claude. Luca immediately tenses up, wondering if she's here to interrogate him since he was the one in command when her brother was killed. Lillian quickly clears the air, assuring him that her noble family always knew the deadly risks of the Imperial Guard, and she isn't here to point fingers. Instead, she reveals that Claude used to talk about Luca constantly, praising his skills and suggesting the two of them should get to know each other. She adds that Luca's lack of noble status is actually a bonus, meaning they can skip the exhausting aristocratic formalities. Luca realizes she's essentially offering him a chance to court her, completely bypassing the Empire's strict class divide. Lillian pushes the offer, pointing out that everyone would envy him and it's exactly what her brother wanted. Luca admits she's right, knowing that any lower-class cadet would kill for the chance to marry into a high-ranking noble family and secure their future. He has spent his whole life clawing his way up from the gutter, willing to do absolutely anything to succeed, and now the ultimate golden ticket has just fallen right into his lap. But despite all that, a dark feeling gnaws at him. Trusting his gut, Luca flat-out rejects her offer and walks away, leaving the noble girl completely stunned. As he leaves, Luca reflects that he used to think his friend Ile was an idiot for wanting to throw away a life of luxury, but now he's doing the exact same thing based on a mere hunch. He just hopes Lillian's powerful family won't retaliate against him for the insult. But there's no time to dwell on noble politics. In the shadows, alliances are forged as human and robotic hands meet, and the highly anticipated combat drill finally kicks off with a massive clash. Back at the academy, Giselle Custoria decides to change her tactics with her newly adopted brother, putting on a sweet smile and offering to start completely over as friends. Luca is caught completely off guard by the sudden handshake, sweating nervously as he tries to explain himself, but Giselle cheerfully cuts him off and promises to visit him again. Left speechless, Luca watches her walk away, entirely unaware that Giselle's friendly act is just a mask as she realizes getting rid of him is going to be much harder than she thought. Meanwhile, Luca heads straight to the physical training facility to seek out Kinuan, the academy's martial arts instructor, asking to learn some new moves. Kinuan is surprised, pointing out that Luca's skills are already unmatched by almost any cadet in history, but our hero knows that being the best in his class just isn't enough. He calculates that since Kinuan uses an older, low-powered robotic body, his own new cybernetic arm is easily 10 times stronger, though his fleshy human parts remain a massive vulnerability. Luca knows that if he can't beat a retired guard like Kinuan, he stands no chance against the true monsters of the Empire, so he insists on a spar until the instructor finally agrees and dares him to attack. Luca instantly lunges forward, clashing fists with his instructor in a blinding burst of energy, fully aware that basic strikes won't be enough to take down a veteran. Using a flurry of punches to close the gap, he slides in tight, grabs Kinuan's uniform with his reinforced metallic hand, and twists his torso to deliver a devastating point-blank swing. He thinks he has the instructor dead to rights, but in a split second, Kinuan's eye glows, and before Luca can even register what happened, he is launched helplessly into the air and slammed hard into the dirt. Thrown violently through the air, Luca is completely disoriented. He tries to brace himself, thinking a single throw isn't enough to take him out, but Kinuan is already on top of him, moving with terrifying speed. Hitting the ground hard, Luca looks up in pure shock. His instructor steps forward, coldly reminding the cadet that underestimating an opponent is bad enough, but getting distracted mid-fight is a fatal mistake. Launched into the air yet again, Luca frantically tries to process what just happened. His initial strike was perfectly aimed at Kinuan's jaw, but the second the older man touched his arm, our hero's entire body violently lurched out of control. It felt like his own kinetic energy had been hijacked and rebounded straight into his bones. Blown away by the sheer power of the move, Luca begs his instructor to teach him. But Kinuan just holds up his mechanical hand, blood dripping onto the floor, and warns the boy that every shortcut comes with a heavy price. When asked what he felt during the clash, Luca admits it was like being under a spell, completely stripped of his bodily autonomy. Kinuan finally reveals the name of the technique, Akai's Victima, better known as the Akai's tactic. Luca is stunned, having thought it was just a cheap self-defense trick used by street thugs, but Kinuan's version is devastatingly refined. Kinuan explains that the Empire actually considered adopting it, but the tactic comes with 3 massive drawbacks. Luca immediately guesses 2 of them. It's incredibly difficult to master, and it causes severe neural damage. Desperate for power, our hero declares he's willing to take the risk, but Kinuan shuts him down. Reminding the boy that he's a highly funded asset of the Empire, Kinuan violently launches Luca backward one more time, demanding to know if he'll swear to stop using the tactic the second his brain starts taking damage. Suspended in midair, Luca realizes there is no point in lying to a veteran watcher. Looking his instructor dead in the eye, he admits he can't promise to stop, but he'll try, a fiercely honest answer that finally brings a smirk to Kinuan's face. Luca's new mentor, the watcher Kinuan, doesn't believe in holding hands. During their training, Kinuan praises Luca's honesty with a smile, only to instantly sweep his legs out from under him. As Luca hits the dirt in shock, Kinwon warns him that as long as they're together, he needs to expect a lethal attack at any given second. Smirking, the veteran tells our hero to get up, making it clear that his curriculum is brutal and fast-paced. Fast forward a month, and the relentless daily sessions have left Luca with heavy bags under his eyes. When Illy checks in on him, Luca brushes it off, hiding the brutal reality of his training. Kinwon refuses to explicitly teach him, forcing Luca to learn the Akai's tactic purely through imitation and survival. Our hero finally realizes that Akai's isn't just a martial art, it's an advanced brain utilization system. Instead of teaching specific moves, it forces his mind to process combat at its absolute limit, allowing him to instantly formulate perfect strategies using whatever weapons he has on hand. Luca asks about Illy's recent missions. The blonde noble complains that everything has been boring child's play. He assumes the brass is on edge because of their Cold War with the Kora Republic, which explains why Captain Hollis has been completely off the grid. But Illy drops a bombshell he overheard at home. The captain is actually busy dealing with a massive internal revolt. Luca scoffs, calling it ridiculous to start a rebellion during a Cold War, but Illy snaps back, arguing that ignoring the Empire's flaws will only let corruption rot them from the inside out. That strikes a dangerous nerve. Luca instantly slams his friend against the wall, warning Illy that while he can tolerate a little rebellious attitude, he won't hesitate to take him down if he becomes an actual enemy of the Empire. Sweating, Illy defends his loyalty, swearing he only speaks like this because he cares about the Empire's future, and that he'd never say it around anyone else. Luca coldly tells him to watch his mouth before he ends up on a traitor list, completely brushing off Illy's attempts to lighten the mood with weekend plans. Instead of hanging out, Luca's weekend takes him back to the very place he clawed his way out of, the Akresha lower-class zone. Staring at the sprawling, grimy slums, a bitter voice breaks the silence, noting that they both hail from these very streets. The speaker confesses a dark vow made the day they became an Imperial Guard cadet, to never return and breathe the same air as the miserable, pathetic people they left behind. Far from the battlefield, Kinwon drags Luca into the Akresha lower-class zone. The geothermal pollution immediately burns Luca's eyes, bringing back bitter memories of his childhood. He had sworn never to return to these slums after becoming a cadet, hating the suffocating feeling that he'd be a loser for his entire life. As Kinwon leads him deep into the neon-lit black market, Luca is stunned that his veteran instructor knows these deadly streets better than he does. But what really puts him on edge is his own body. Before they left, Kinwon forced him to equip low-powered cybernetic arms and legs, leaving him severely handicapped. They soon arrive at a heavily guarded staff entrance where the bouncers block their path. Kinwon casually demands a meeting with their manager, Aleph, despite not actually knowing the man. When the thugs draw their weapons, Kinwon blitzes them in a heartbeat, effortlessly disarming a guard and pinning a gun to his head to ensure his message gets delivered. Stepping inside the massive facility, Kinwon smirks and introduces the place the hottest spot in the Empire, the arena. They are escorted to Aleph, a massive underworld boss, where Kinwon drops a terrifying bombshell. He demands that Luca be thrown into the fighting pits, adding that he doesn't want a diamond prize money and completely doesn't care if his student dies. Hearing this brutal negotiation, Luca finally realizes exactly why his master crippled his limbs today. Inside the arena's back office, the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Aleph, the new manager, flicks his cigarette and points a gun right at Kinwon, threatening to dispose of him rather than listen to his demands. But Kinwon doesn't even blink. His eyes glow as he quickly calculates the odds: 3 armed goons in front, 2 more outside. In a fraction of a second, the veteran watcher runs a high-speed mental simulation. He visualizes stepping forward, snatching a weapon, and completely obliterating every single guard in a flash of deadly precision before they can even pull their triggers. Simulation over. He knows exactly how easily he could slaughter them all. Back in reality, Kinwon casually asks what happened to Tora, the previous arena boss. Aleph admits he killed him for rigging matches to take over the lucrative business. Kinwon brushes it off, noting Tora was an old friend, but betrayal is just the nature of the streets. Furious at the disrespect, Aleph jams his gun right against Kinwon's head, demanding to know who he's dealing with. Kinwon just calmly warns the manager to stand down unless he wants to end up exactly like his predecessor. The sheer killing intent radiating off the watcher is suffocating. Sweating bullets, Aleph realizes he's completely outmatched and reluctantly lowers his weapon. Defeated, Aleph agrees to throw Gabriel into the arena, even though the cyborg kid is rocking low-powered civilian limbs and a fragile flesh and blood torso, but he demands to know his payout. Kinwon flips the script, revealing he knows exactly where Tora's hidden vault is, and since Aleph looted Tora's biometric eyes, he can finally open it. Shocked, Aleph asks who he is, but Kinwon just smirks, calling himself a trifling ghost of the past. Aleph tries to suck up by offering VIP seats with drinks and women, but Kinwon only wants the drinks. He gives one final ruthless order: don't hold back, and pitch the kid against the arena's absolute best fighter. Watching from the sidelines, Luca is in awe. He realizes he still has a massive way to go, marveling at how his master completely dominated the room without throwing a single punch. Before stepping into the ring for that deadly clash, Kinwon preps our boy in the arena locker room. He gives Luca 2 hours to warm up, revealing that Aleph only agreed to help them because the hidden stash inside Tora's vault is worth enough to change the manager's entire life. But before Luca can worry about the vault, he has to survive his first match. Kinuan pulls up the profile of his opponent, Iron-Fisted Gabriel. This guy is a walking tank who gambled his own life on ridiculous, illegal cybernetic alterations just to get stronger. Kinuan doesn't sugarcoat it. One clean blow from Gabriel will instantly kill Luca in his current state. To survive, Kinuan reminds him of the golden rule of the Akai's technique: conform to whatever is given to you. When Luca argues that conformity means defeat, Kinuan drops some master-level wisdom, explaining that water is never defeated because it simply changes its form. Kinuan admits he's been watching Luca ever since he fired those shots without a ballistic system, amazed by his raw potential. When Luca asks why he's suddenly being showered with compliments, Kinuan flashes a grim smirk and tells him it's because these could very well be his last moments on Earth. Stepping out into the blinding lights of the arena, the announcer hypes up the crowd by introducing Luca with the humiliating ring name, Good Boy. The bloodthirsty audience immediately boos, screaming that the rookie is going to be slaughtered and ripped limb from limb. But instead of being intimidated by the dark, twisted desire of the crowd, Luca feels a familiar rush of excitement. Tossing off his hood with a smirk, he realizes he's finally back in his hometown, ready to show these losers exactly who they're dealing with. For Luca, this brutal environment is exactly where he came from. Growing up in the slums, he never even knew what it felt like to have a full stomach. Even when the Empire delivered rations to his orphanage, the corrupt director would steal half of the food to sell on the black market. For the abandoned kids left behind, slowly starving to death wasn't a tragedy, it was just normal life. As Luca fights for his life in the present, his mind flashes back to his brutal childhood in these very slums. While the other starving orphans mocked him for wasting his energy, our hero relentlessly trained with rusty dumbbells. He had learned early on that the world ran on survival of the fittest, deciding that if he ever got hungry, he would just take what he needed by force. Ignoring the losers around him, Luca clawed his way out of the gutters. By 12, he passed the Imperial Guard screening, and at 15, he became an official cadet. He had buried the memories of this wretched place, never expecting that his missions would drag him right back to the lower-class zone. Being back in the dirt triggers another memory: his brutal days fighting in the underground arena. The deafening roar of the crowd echoes in his mind as they chant for Iron-Fisted Gabriel. The massive cyborg had scoffed at being matched against a kid, blaming the arena manager Olaf for the joke. Luca, however, wasn't intimidated. He immediately analyzed the giant's mismatched, unbalanced cybernetics, noting the bent spine and chronic swelling that required constant painkillers. Gabriel was a walking medical disaster, but undeniably powerful. Looming over him, Gabriel sneered and offered to make the kid his servant boy. But Luca just smirked right back, warning the cyborg that he'd need a full-time caretaker because our hero was about to hospitalize him for good. As the announcer hyped up the brutal dog-eat-dog match to the screaming crowd, Gabriel laughed, promising to crush the arrogant cadet into the dirt. As the bell rings and the crowd roars, Luca faces off against Gabriel, a massive cyborg built entirely for the arena. Our hero quickly realizes the terrifying reality of this fight. His own replacement limbs weren't made for combat, meaning a single hit from Gabriel's giant mechanical fists will instantly kill him. Gabriel unleashes a barrage of devastating slams, forcing Luca to frantically dodge just to stay alive. Gabriel relentlessly chases him down, swinging with enough force to burst his head like a melon. The arena is way too small for Luca to keep retreating forever, and he's rapidly running out of space to maneuver. Make matters worse, the bloodthirsty spectators are completely against him, screaming for Gabriel to bash his skull and so they can move on to the next match. Luca knows his own attacks are completely useless against the cyborg's heavy armor. Desperate and outgunned, he remembers Kinuan's most crucial lesson about the Akai's tactic. You have to conform to whatever you're given and fight with what you have, no matter how pathetic it seems. It suddenly clicks. Kinuan might have crippled his arms and legs, but he left him his robotic eye for a reason. He isn't supposed to rely on brute force to win this. By tapping into the Akai's tactic to maximize his visual processing, Luca starts reading Gabriel's movements like an open book. He realizes the giant cyborg's fist is just a cannonball, his gaze is the barrel, and his arm length is the range. And compared to dodging a real bullet, Gabriel's windup is slow, and his trajectory is completely obvious. Watching from the sidelines, Kinuan breaks into a wide, menacing smirk. He knows Luca is an absolute genius who has already brushed against the true power of the Akai's tactic just by relying on his own raw talent in past battles. The arena crowd starts losing their minds, screaming at Gabriel to stop messing around and just kill the rookie. But Luca is completely dialed in. His focus is so razor-sharp that he can practically predict the cyborg's attacks before they even happen. Putting his heightened senses to the test, Luca moves like an absolute blur. He slips past Gabriel's guard, flipping the massive fighter and slamming him with a blistering barrage of strikes. A manic grin spreads across our hero's face as he realizes this overwhelming rush of power is exactly how his instructor, Kinuan, must have felt when he used to beat Luca down in training. Gabriel refuses to go down that easily. Revving up his mechanical arms, the cyborg boasts that whatever magic trick Luca is using, those weak strikes will never dent his heavy armor. He triggers a massive explosion, absolutely certain that the rookie lacks the raw firepower to hurt him, but Luca just smirks, knowing that heavy armor is useless if you can't land a hit. Luca knows his own cybernetics are low-powered compared to a beast like Gabriel, so he makes up for it with pure, terrifying technique. Channeling dark energy into a devastating Akai's tactic strike, Luca drops from above, grabs the hulking cyborg by the neck, and violently spins him midair before slamming him into the arena floor with bone-crushing force. Staring out at the stunned crowd of elites who wanted to see him fail, Luca makes a silent vow. Let them pray for his downfall. He is going to keep climbing until he reaches a height where he can't even hear their voices anymore. With Gabriel lying completely defeated, Luca finally catches his breath. He admits to himself that if this were a chaotic battlefield with countless variables, he never would have been able to dial in his focus like this. But in the controlled environment of the arena, it was literally like seeing the future. Stepping off the platform, our hero gives the unconscious cyborg some silent respect, acknowledging that he really had to work for this victory. After dominating the arena, Luca's mentor, Kinwin, congratulates him on his initiation into the Akai's Victima and hands him a massive credit chip. But the payout isn't for our hero to keep. Kinwin orders him to use the fight money to pay the medical bills for Gabriel, the cyborg fighter Luca just put in the hospital. When Luca protests that he's training to be a soldier, not a philanthropist, his instructor drops some heavy wisdom. He explains that calculated kindness isn't charity, it's an investment. By building a network of favors bit by bit, a true soldier creates a favorable environment they can exploit when the time comes. Taking the credit chip, Luca has a chilling realization about the Watcher. He used to think Kinwin trained him out of pity or because they shared a similar background, but now the truth is obvious. Kinwin is treating Luca the exact same way, investing in him for a massive future return, and doing it so perfectly that our hero has no choice but to play along. Meanwhile, Gabriel is getting some terrible news in the medical ward. Because he bought cheap, mismatched parts when he was broke, his current cybernetics are completely incompatible with his body, and the doctors warn him that he risks total paralysis. They recommend upgrading to the state-of-the-art Hyper-Lindel 9 model, but the cyborg is completely broke, and the hospital refuses to buy his worthless scrap metal arms to cover the cost. Right on cue, Luca strolls into the ward, sarcastically remarking on how full of life his former opponent looks. Gabriel instantly loses his mind, screaming that he's going to kill the kid who put him in this bed. Luca just smiles coldly, reminding the cyborg that he warned him exactly how their fight would end. But after a moment, our hero remembers Kinwin's advice about building allies and realizes taunting the guy isn't exactly a great investment strategy. Flipping the script, Luca turns to the doctor and tosses over the arena credit chip, asking if it's enough to cover the top-tier cybernetics. The doctor confirms it's more than enough. Gabriel is absolutely stunned, demanding to know why his enemy is footing his massive medical bill. Playing it cool, Luca just shrugs and says he felt like it. Overwhelmed by the sudden mercy, the cyborg asks for his savior's real name. Hearing the name Luca, Gabriel sheds a tear of gratitude and swears that if the cadet ever needs a favor, he'll be there to answer the call. The investment just paid off. As Ile solemnly promises to repay the massive debt he owes him, Luca can't help but smirk, realizing that having a high-ranking noble in his pocket doesn't feel too bad. Later at the Akresha Physical Training Center, the two friends clash in a high-speed sparring match. Luca pushes his cybernetic arms to the absolute limit, chaining together brutal flips, lifts, and bone-rattling slams that completely overwhelm his noble friend. Bruised and breathless, Ile is shocked that Luca actually learned the Akai's tactic from instructor Kinwin, calling it nothing more than dirty street fighting. But Luca explains that his brutal time in the underground arena stripped away all the flashy nonsense, condensing his technique into pure lethal efficiency. Admitting he doesn't stand a chance in hand-to-hand combat anymore, Ile nervously asks our hero for a favor. A favor turns out to be an ambush. Ile drags Luca to the cadet visitor's room to meet Lillian Ramons, the beautiful noble girl who will eventually become Ile's tragic love. Right now, though, she only has eyes for Luca. Ile apologizes, explaining that his family's deep ties to the Ramons made it impossible to refuse her. When Lillian demands to know why Luca has been ignoring her visit requests, he doesn't pull his punches, bluntly stating he isn't interested. Ile begs him to be a little gentler, but Luca just snaps at him to shut up. Deterred, Lillian asks what he dislikes about her. Luca lays it out cold. As an orphan, he can't afford a single mistake, let alone the distraction of a relationship. When she suggests that dating a powerful noble would actually boost his career, Luca completely flips the script. He refuses to become a pet at the mercy of a noble's whims, swearing he will climb to the top using his own power. Lillian tries to call out his hypocrisy, pointing out his friendship with Ile. But Luca shuts her down instantly. He isn't friends with Ile because of the Kartika family name, but because Ile is a comrade he would trust with his life. Left speechless by his unshakable conviction, Lillian quietly asks if he won't even give her a single chance, leaving the room suffocating in awkward tension. Following their deep conversation, Ile asks why Luca is so coldly rejecting Lillian Ramons. Luca bluntly states that pushing her away is the only option, highly suspicious of her motives. He knows she only approached him because her dead brother, Claude, recommended him, and he refuses to be a pawn in whatever game she's playing. When Ile tries to defend her, Luca completely flips the script and calls out Ile's obvious crush on the girl. Thanks to his Akai's Victima training, Luca's perception is off the charts, easily picking up on Ile's shallow breathing and nervous fidgeting whenever Lillian is around. Luca urges his friend to stop messing around and make a move, but a heartbroken Ile admits that he just can't. Later, Luca plunges into a fiery mental landscape. undergoing intense meditation training with his martial arts instructor, Kinuan. Testing his student's tactical mind, Kinuan asks what Luca would have done if a shootout had erupted during their recent meeting in Alep's arena office. Luca admits his only plan was to dive under the table and let Kinuan handle the armed gangsters. Luca assumes Kinuan would have taken Aleph hostage, but the master quickly shuts that down, explaining that lower-class thugs would gladly shoot their own boss just to take his place. Instead, Kinuan reveals he had already planned to slaughter the guards and carry Luca out through a secret exit. Stunned by the superhuman foresight, Luca learns that the Akai's Victima tactic pushes the brain's perception to its absolute limit, a terrifying edge that explains the severe mental backlash the technique causes. Luca finally realizes a fatal flaw in his brutal training. The Akai's tactic demands 100% of his brain's resources to sharpen his perception, but there's a massive catch. The Empire's cutting-edge full-mech suit Legion requires so much bandwidth that users have to invest all their brain power just to operate it. If Luca equips Legion, his brain won't have any capacity left to use Akai's. Realizing Kinuan knew this all along, our hero feels like an absolute idiot. Since every Imperial Guard gets a Legion suit, he assumes mastering the tactic is entirely pointless. Frustrated, he officially quits his training, though Kinuan calmly tells him to come back if he ever changes his mind. 3 months pass. Luca is summoned to the office of Hala's Custoria, the captain of the Imperial Guard and his adoptive father. Hala's notes that Luca hasn't been assigned any field missions lately simply because his skills are already high enough to join the active ranks. But this isn't just a friendly check-in. The captain casually brings up Luca's frequent contact with Kinuan, making our hero's blood run cold. He realizes the higher-ups have been watching his every move, likely tracking his secret black market deals and brutal arena fights. Hala asks if Luca is still learning the Akai's technique. Luca admits he called it off, explaining the incompatibility with the Legion suit. Hala isn't surprised in the slightest. He reveals that this is exactly why no one besides Kinuan has ever fully mastered the art. Unqualified students are kicked to the curb, and the strong ones quickly realize it's completely useless for a future guard. Sensing a hidden agenda, Luca carefully asks if he should resume his training. Hala drops the hammer, directly ordering Luca to stay close to Kinuan and continue learning the tactic. Luca's mind races. Why is the captain secretly keeping tabs on a veteran instructor? But in the Empire, asking the wrong questions gets you killed. Swallowing his fear, Luca instantly agrees to obey. Hala flashes a menacing, scarred smile, praising Luca's obedience and promising that people who know their place are the ones who find real success in this world. With his new order set, Luca swallows his pride and heads straight back to the training grounds. Kinuan isn't the least bit surprised to see him return so soon. True to his word, the veteran instructor doesn't interrogate him about his sudden change of heart, simply welcoming his student back to the brutal grind. Taking a break from the academy, Luca heads down to the lower-class zone and hits up a street vendor, completely buying out their entire stock of mechanical toys and leaving the merchant absolutely speechless. He hauls the massive haul to Orphanage 47, but he isn't carrying it himself. He's roped in Gabriel, the brutal cyborg arena fighter, who angrily complains that he thought he was called in for a gang fight, not to be a glorified delivery boy. Luca smoothly points out that if he were in a real fight, he wouldn't have the luxury of calling for backup, which shuts the giant right up. Seeing Gabriel handle the towering boxes effortlessly, Luca notes that the cyborg's expensive new cybernetic spine was worth every penny. Gabriel spots Kinuan waiting by the gates and asks who this untouchable hotshot is, but Luca bluntly warns the fighter to mind his own business if he wants to keep his head attached to his shoulders. As the orphans rush out to grab the toys, a brawl quickly breaks out over the loot. But Kinuan doesn't step in to play peacemaker. Instead, the Akai's Demini Watcher coldly tells the kids to secure what they want with power, preaching the harsh reality that the world simply doesn't have enough resources for everyone to be happy. Kinuan pulls Luca aside for a private walk, admitting he doesn't even remember which orphanage he grew up in. He just drops supplies at random ones, cynically noting that the corrupt directors probably steal most of it anyway. Watching him, Luca realizes that away from the academy, this terrifying watcher just looks like an aging veteran breaking down from neural overload. It's a grim wake-up call. Becoming a broken, faded soldier is Luca's best-case scenario, assuming he's even lucky enough to survive that long. But the dark reflection is cut short as Kinuan finally gets down to business. Kinuan cuts right to the chase, his eyes glowing with an intimidating aura as he demands to know who ordered Luca to come back to him. He doesn't beat around the bush, directly asking if it was Captain Hala's pulling the strings. The sheer pressure radiating from the martial arts instructor leaves our hero sweating bullets. Standing off on the sun-dappled forest walkway, Luca realizes he's backed into a dangerous corner. He avoids looking the Akai's Demini Watcher in the eyes, terrified that his every micro-expression will give away the truth. Panicking that Kinuan might just execute him right here to protect his secrets, Luca plays dumb while secretly priming his cybernetic arm for a fight. Kinuan sees right through the bluff. He casually tells Luca to relax unless he has a death wish, warning that if our hero attacks with full force, Kinuan will have no choice but to kill him in self-defense. Trapped, Luca falls back on his only excuse, claiming he's just a loyal soldier following orders. Kinuan actually pities him, pointing out that Luca is so deep in the dark he doesn't even know how to respond, making him the exact kind of blind pawn the Empire loves. Then Kinwon drops a bombshell that shatters Luca's entire reality. He reveals that ever since the higher-ups saw Luca use guided ballistics without an auxiliary unit, they realized he was the perfect candidate to inherit the deadly Akai's victima. Luca desperately tries to deny it, insisting he chose to seek Kinwon out to get stronger after the brutal Korate ruins incident. But Kinwon mercilessly shuts him down, explaining that their entire relationship was orchestrated by the military brass from the very beginning. Kinwon drops a harsh truth: everyone in this world is a slave to someone, but only some are completely oblivious to their chains. Seeing the young cadet's internal crisis, Kinwon flashes a warm, almost mocking smile. He tells Luca they should head back, casually leaving it up to him whether or not he reports this conversation to Captain Hollis. Left alone with his thoughts, Luca's mind violently spirals. He desperately wants to reject Kinwon's words and cling to his blind faith in the Empire, but the pieces fit too perfectly. Captain Hollis had been the one pushing him to master the Akai's tactic. Luca tries to force down his doubts, but a terrifying realization bleeds into his mind. What if even his burning desire to climb the ranks and succeed was never his own free will to begin with? Luca knows that reporting his recent clash to Captain Hollis right now would be suicide. The Empire has zero tolerance for subversive thoughts, and a mandatory mental probe in his current conflicted state would definitely flag him as a traitor. One wrong thought could mean dismissal from the Imperial Guard and a life of forced labor. Realizing his instructor Kinwon must have anticipated this exact hesitation, Luca decides he has to find a way to cheat the mental examination before he can safely report anything. To figure out how to beat the system, Luca tracks down Ile in the simulation training room. Finding his friend exhausted and pushing himself to the absolute limit, Luca jokes about Ile's sudden dedication to training. But he quickly shifts to business, bringing up the open secret that renowned noble families somehow forged their screening results. Luca flat-out asks Ile to teach him the trick to passing the mental exam. After ensuring they're alone, Ile reveals a terrifying psychological loophole. He explains that to pass you have to consciously split your personality, projecting a fabricated, fiercely loyal soldier to the outside world, while burying your true ego deep inside as a passive observer. For 2 months before his own screening, Ile mimicked his father, starting every day with a prayer to the Emperor until his brain believed the illusion. But he warns Luca that keeping up the act for too long will fracture a person's identity, making them forget who they really are. Hearing this, Luca realizes he doesn't need to invent a completely new persona. To pass the test, he just needs to bury his current doubts and perfectly act like his old self, the cold, unquestioning cadet he was before Ile and Kinwon started changing his worldview. Ile warns him to be extremely careful, knowing that manipulating the Empire's psychological tests is a deadly game to play. As the Paladin prepares its lethal strike, the story briefly shifts away to a frustrated figure taking a holographic call, cursing the terrible timing. But to see how our hero built the reflexes to survive this nightmare, we have to rewind to a recent training session. Down in the slums of the lower-class zone, Kinwon brings Luca to a surprisingly clean building owned by a local gang, announcing that today's drill is going to be the real deal. Luca is still carrying heavy emotional baggage. Ever since he confessed his dark secret about the civilian at the orphanage, Kinwon has been treating him completely normal. Ironically, this lack of punishment makes Luca feel even worse. But Kinwon doesn't give him time to sulk, laying down a brutal challenge. Luca has exactly 20 seconds to overpower every single gangster inside the hideout. Without waiting for a response, Kinwon casually crushes the electronic security lock with his bare hand and shoves the heavy door open. Inside, a muscular thug with cybernetic implants turns around, completely baffled by the sudden intrusion. In a split second, Luca's watcher training kicks in, mapping the entire room. He clocks the idiot with a gun at the door, 3 armed gangsters at a card table, their heavily scarred boss, and even senses a hidden presence lurking in the bathroom. The door guard smirks, assuming he's just going to blow some little kid's head off. That's his first and last mistake. Luca launches forward like a missile. His head might be clouded with guilt, but right now, taking out a room full of hostile thugs is the perfect way to blow off some steam. Luca violently slams the first guard into the ground, crushing the man's mechanical armor before he can even pull the trigger. The 3 thugs at the card table scramble in shock, raising their futuristic rifles, but Luca is already a blur of motion. He closes the gap in an instant, disarming them so fast that a pistol is left spinning midair as he moves in for the final, ruthless takedown. As his system glitches out against the Paladin's overwhelming power, Luca's mind flashes back to the brutal training that kept him alive this long. He remembers a time Kinwon threw him into a slum gang hideout with zero warning. Amidst deafening gunfire and explosions, Luca easily dodges the sloppy shots from the thugs, mocking their terrible aim. Using his robotic arm and the Akai's tactic, he surges forward with crackling blue electricity, stunning the gangsters into submission before they can even pull their triggers. With the thugs knocked out on the floor, Luca sweeps the rest of the hideout, furious when he finds bound hostages locked in the bathroom. Kinwon steps in, casually praising Luca for clearing the room in just 12 seconds while carrying out a badly beaten red-haired woman. Luca asks why they can't just kill the gangsters, but Kinwon reminds him they're outsiders who can't disrupt the local order, adding a harsh lesson that weakness only invites suffering. Looking at the battered woman, Luca realizes how deeply messed up the Empire's societal structure really is. That raid was just the beginning of Kinuen's unorthodox lessons. Over the following days, the instructor repeatedly drags Luca back down to the lower-class zones, tossing him into random, chaotic brawls without a single word of context. The goal isn't just to win, but to force Luca to instantly read his surroundings and judge his enemy's abilities in split seconds. It is the exact extreme training Luca relies on now to survive when everything goes wrong. Sometime after those raids, Kinuen takes Luca to a local repair shop run by a cheerful mechanic named Gilda. Kinuen casually orders a black coffee topped with oil, while Luca settles for a normal cup, confused as to why they are even here. Kinuen reveals that Gilda is actually the same battered woman they rescued from the gangsters. Luca remembers her tragic file, noting she was kidnapped and tortured for months just because a friend stole gang money and hid at her store. But seeing her back on her feet, smiling and working hard, proves to Luca that the people of the lower class possess a resilience the Empire could never understand. As Luca stands resolute, ready to face the terrifying paladin head-on, his mind flashes to the very people he's fighting to survive for. Before this deadly mission, he had visited Gilda, the mechanic he recently rescued from gangsters. Her friend, who caused the whole mess, is now dead, but Gilda's engineering talent shines brighter than ever, secretly sponsored by Luca himself. Thanks to instructor Kinuen, Gilda is now teamed up with the cyborg arena fighter, Gabriel. She acts as his personal mechanic while he serves as her bodyguard, and the two already bicker like old friends over Gabriel drinking beer and wrecking his nervous system. But the mood turns heavy when Gabriel whispers that the local gang bosses are gunning for Luca. Our hero brushes it off, dropping a bombshell instead. He won't be able to visit them for months, maybe even years. As a cadet, he's strictly forbidden from leaving the training grounds alone, making this their final goodbye for a long time. Gilda and Gabriel are crushed, asking if they should at least throw a send-off party, but Luca coldly reminds himself not to get attached. Cutting ties with the lower-class zone isn't a tragedy, it's a necessary step to keep them safe from the dangerous path he's walking. And that dangerous path leads straight to the top. Called into the captain's office, Luca meets with his adoptive father, Hala's Custoria. The captain brings up instructor Kinuen, revealing that the man's past is a black box even to him. Kinuen joined the Imperial Guard late during a chaotic era, handling off-the-record black ops that no one else would touch. Hala's warns Luca that Kinuen has taken a dangerous liking to him, noting that every other cadet sent to the mysterious instructor was either ruined or didn't last long. Concerned for his new son's sanity under such a dark influence, the captain orders Luca to undergo a mandatory mental evaluation. Then Hollis lays out the brutal truth. Cadets given these shadow missions end up in one of two ways: silence forever or rising to the absolute top of the Imperial Guard. He wants Luca to be the latter. Unfazed, our hero strikes a deal, promising to deliver flawless results as long as the captain backs his rise to power, and with a sinister grin, Hollis seals the pact. Luca manages to survive the brutal clash, and his sheer determination pays off in ways he never expected. Captain Hala's Custoria drops a massive bombshell. He wants to adopt Luca into one of the Empire's most renowned families. Still riding the high of this life-changing opportunity, Luca heads into his mandatory mental examination with a confident smirk, telling the examiners to go ahead and start. Later, during a punishing sparring session, Luca notices his friend Ile pushing himself dangerously hard, going so fast he's literally wearing out his cybernetic joints. When Luca asks what's gotten into him, Ile admits he's going to have a major favor to ask soon. Without hesitation, Luca promises that if Ile is ever in danger on the battlefield, he'll risk everything to save him, even if the odds of success are a mere 1%. For a while, Luca keeps his head down, entirely focused on earning his place in the Custoria family. But everything changes when their commander announces their next mission, a special operation to crush a rebellion led by the Ramons family. Hearing that name, Luca freezes. Lillian Ramons is Ile's love interest, and suddenly Luca knows exactly what his friend is going to ask of him. Realizing that this surreal trial is directly tied to Ile's desperate request regarding Lillian Ramons, the environment shifts, thrusting Luca straight into a recreation of the infamous rebel suppression mission. Standing in a massive, bustling hangar bay, he steps up as the newly appointed commander of Suppression Platoon 21. Taking in his 27-man squad, Luca quickly pieces together the Empire's twisted game. The higher-ups are using an active, deadly revolt as a live-fire training session for the cadets. His second-in-command is a hardened veteran named Master Sergeant Kodrak, and Luca knows these seasoned soldiers won't take orders from a rookie unless he proves he's the apex predator in the room. He could take the easy route and let Kodrak run the show, but our hero never settles for average. Deciding to flip the script and rule with an iron fist, he waits for his moment. When Kodrak steps out of line and casually grabs Luca's shoulder, Luca doesn't hesitate. He violently slams the massive veteran into the ground, furiously demanding to know why a subordinate dares to lay hands on his commanding officer. Standing over the stunned soldiers, Luca lays it out cold. He reveals that he crawled out of the exact same double-digit orphanages and lower-class slums they did, but the only reason he outranks them is because he is simply leagues above them in skill. The brutal display of dominance works flawlessly, and Kodrak immediately bows his head in submission, realizing this cadet is not a kid to be messed with. Shortly after, the platoon touches down at the Imperial outpost just outside the rebel fortress. Word of Luca's aggressive power play has already spread through the ranks, and a heavily stressed Ile Kartika approaches him, holding his head in disbelief that his friend actually picked a bare-handed fight with his own veteran squad on day one. As the dust settles from the previous chaos, the reality of the Empire's massive rebel suppression operation sets in. Luka gears up in his sleek black and red armor, knowing full well the veteran sergeants just see him and the other cadets as kids. At the command podium, the commanding officer skips the formalities and lays out the grim reality of their target. Rebels have holed up in a ruined fortress from the ancient arcane civilization, completely shielded by a high-density force field and 5 anti-air turrets. The Empire isn't holding back, they're throwing massive resources at this, sending in the elite 11th Armored Brigade with their mass-produced mech suits to shatter the fortress walls and take out the turrets. Once the defenses fall, the full siege begins in exactly an hour and a half. Waiting in the desolate ruins, Illy jokes that they're basically just sidekicks on a picnic, but his smile quickly fades. He turns to Luka with a heavy request. If the opportunity arises, he begs Luka to help him save Lillian Ramons. Luka immediately shuts it down, reminding him that the Ramons family are marked traitors, and not even Illy's prestigious Kartika name will save him from the executioner's block if he switches sides. Lay admits Lillian was his first love, but Luka isn't having any of it. He sternly warns his friend to wake up and stop acting stupid, making it crystal clear that this isn't just advice, it's a warning. Illy quietly agrees, but as Luka walks away, a cold sweat drops down his face. Thanks to Hizakai's victim ability, Luka's senses are terrifyingly sharp, and he instantly recognizes the lie in Illy's voice. Luka knows Illy is secretly planning to throw his life away to help Lillian escape. Walking alone down the metallic corridors, our hero makes a dark, desperate wish. For the sake of his friend's survival, he hopes Lillian dies in the chaos of the siege before Illy can ever find her. Sometimes, the only way to save a friend is to let their reason for dying disappear. In this brutal war, the Empire's cybernetic technology can rebuild a soldier as long as their head and chest remain intact. Fully armored and addressed as captain, Luka is suddenly approached by a grizzled veteran with a decade of service. The older soldier admits he's looked into Luka's outstanding record, but asks the young captain to actually listen to his battlefield advice once the fighting starts. Without missing a beat, Luka humbly agrees, proving that a true leader always listens to good counsel, no matter who it comes from. The veteran soldier humbly thanks Luka for his guidance, proving that real experience means knowing when to listen to a prodigy. With their strategy set, the fleet of armored vehicles rumbles across the barren landscape, closing in on a massive, glowing blue energy sphere. Inside the transport, Luka locks his sights on the Imperial Brigade's heavy hitters, the mass-produced Myrmidon mech suits. The plan is straightforward but brutal. The brigade's mechs will lead the charge to obliterate the enemy turrets, paving the way for Luka and the ground troops to sweep in and clean up. The moment the order is given, all hell breaks loose. The Myrmidons unleash a devastating barrage of energy blasts, clashing with the enemy's blue shields in a blinding storm of destruction. The colossal mechs leap directly into the fray, their heavy armor turning them into unstoppable wrecking balls as they tear through the defenses. Massive explosions rip the battlefield apart as the brigade relentlessly bombards the stronghold, turning the area into a scorched wasteland. But as the smoke clears, a terrifying, dark-armored figure steps out of the flames, its glowing red eyes completely unfazed by the absolute carnage. Crimson energy surges around the mechanical behemoth as it zeroes in on the Imperial forces. Before the soldiers can even brace themselves, the enemy mech charges up its core and unleashes a catastrophic, point-blank energy blast right through the front line. Clash of energy triggers a massive explosion that shatters the giant robot into pieces. With the breach successful, the Myrmidons infiltrate the fortress, leaving the suppression forces holding their breath. The tactical computers give them exactly 1 minute to disarm the fortress's automated turrets, or the advancing army will face a total bloodbath. Just in time, the signal flashes green, the turrets are down, and the soldiers cheer as Phase 2 begins. For Luka, the battlefield is a tragic, godforsaken place, but the pure adrenaline is the only thing keeping him sane. Steeling his nerves, our hero gears up in his dark armor, ready to show the rebels exactly what he's made of. Strategy is a total lockdown. Infantry platoons storming the fortress from all sides to cut off any escape routes. But beneath the stronghold lies a labyrinth of tunnels hundreds of yards deep, and the old maps are completely useless. The rebels intentionally narrowed the entrances to block full mech suits, forcing the guards down into a dark, overgrown subterranean maze where robotic sentries already lurk in the shadows. Knowing the high probability of a trap, Luka orders his men to fall back while he takes the vanguard. His subordinate, Kodrak, protests, terrified he'll take the blame and face a pay cut if his captain gets killed. Luka coldly brushes him off, telling Kodrak he couldn't care less about his paycheck, and charges forward into the glowing tunnels. Luka knows he's taking a massive risk, even half expecting a bullet in the back from his own squad, but he has a grim, secret mission. He has to find his friend's lost love, Lillian, and eliminate her before LA gets to her first. While LA is likely treating his own platoon as expendable meat shields to rush the tunnels, Luka refuses to throw away loyal soldiers for his personal goals, leaving him no choice but to shoulder the danger alone. Suddenly, a terrified soldier screams his captain's name. An ambush springs from the darkness, but Luka is already moving, his blade flashing in a deadly arc as he slices through a robotic attacker before it can even strike. Pushing the Akai's tactic past its absolute limit, Luca heightens all 5 of his senses to the maximum, even tasting the raw chemicals lingering in the air. His heart hammers in his chest, flooding his brain with glucose and dialing his reflexes up to a terrifying hyperalert state. But that raw power comes with a dark side effect. A blinding, bloodthirsty rage takes over, making him furious at just how painfully slow his enemies are. As he locks onto his targets, he finally understands exactly why overusing this technique rots a watcher's brain. The enemy soldiers scramble to retaliate, raising their rifles and lighting up the corridor with a barrage of energy blasts. But they aren't shooting at a man anymore, they're shooting at a monster. Luca becomes an unstoppable blur of dark metal and glowing red eyes, weaving through the heavy gunfire with impossible speed. What follows is an absolute massacre. Luca lunges into their ranks, his glowing red blade slicing through futuristic armor like paper and severing heads before the soldiers can even pull their triggers. They desperately try to push him back with heavy artillery, but the dark armored figure just tears right through the explosions, completely unfazed. Channeling his fury, the robotic suit's eyes flare with an intense, demonic light just before he unleashes a massive shockwave of blistering orange energy. The blast vaporizes the surrounding structure, leaving the remaining men screaming in sheer terror as Luca's colossal, shadowy form rises from the smoke and debris like an awakened god of war. Blood paints the walls of the dimly lit hallway as the few surviving guards freeze, paralyzed by the horrific slaughter. Standing amidst the gore and shattered metal, Luca turns his menacing gaze toward the man in charge. With a twisted grin hidden beneath his dark helmet, he taunts Master Kodrak, asking him why he's just standing there while his entire squad gets butchered. Leaving the fierce duel behind, Luca pushes forward through the carnage, ordering his allies to keep up as they breach a massive underground bunker. Realizing the rebels have formed a heavy defense line here, he knows he's finally closing in on the fleeing nobility. Deploying a tactical scout drone, he scans the cavern and spots over 100 armed guards holding the perimeter. He just prays Lillian is somewhere in that crowd before it's too late. His platoon is advancing way faster than the rest of the Imperial forces, so Luca decides to hold their position and let the others catch up. It's a much-needed break, especially since keeping the Akai's tactic active is starting to severely overtax his brain. Suddenly, heavy gunfire erupts from the opposite side of the cavern, but the shots aren't aimed at them. Another reckless Imperial Guard captain has already engaged the rebels from behind, throwing the enemy ranks into chaos. Seeing the enemy forces divided by the sudden ambush, Luca orders his squad to charge. The rebels unleash a desperate storm of bullets, and his men quickly warn him that their shields won't hold for more than a few seconds. But Luca already has a plan to break the stalemate. Knowing the enemy has 8 high-powered weapons that could obliterate him in a single hit, he dives straight into the center of the battlefield to draw their fire. Trusting his armored limbs to tank the lighter rifle rounds, he zeroes in to eliminate their heavy artillery first. Lunging straight into the crossfire, Luca uses the chaos to his absolute advantage. The rebels hesitate, terrified of shooting their own men with him tearing through the middle of their ranks. That split second of fear is all he needs. He lunges forward, unleashing a devastating barrage of explosive strikes that completely breaks their line, forcing the terrified survivors to throw up their hands in surrender. Luca orders his subordinate Kodrak to secure the prisoners. But as the dust settles, Luca spots fallen soldiers on the ground and recognizes their gear. They belong to Ile Kartika's platoon. Realizing his friend really did launch a rogue infiltration from the rear, Luca's fury spikes. He curses Ile for being so desperate that he would throw away the lives of his own men just to reach Lillian Ramon's. Caught between his strict duty to the Empire and his desperate desire to help his friend, Luca knows he can't have both, so he makes a brutal choice. The only way to stop Ile from crossing the point of no return and becoming a traitor is to find Lillian and kill her himself. It's a dark burden to carry, but even if Ile hates him forever, it's the only way to save his life. Before rushing off, Luca leaves Kodrak in charge of the captives until reinforcements arrive. Kodrak praises Luca's terrifying combat prowess but calls him out on a massive flaw. As a commanding officer, Luca gave 0 orders and fought the entire battle alone. Luca coldly fires back that his men were simply too weak to execute his high-level strategies, and they should be grateful he didn't use them as sacrificial pawns. Kodrak warns him that no one can be the strongest forever, and one day he will need the help of those weaker than him. Luca tells Kodrak to laugh in his face when that day comes, but internally, he promises to remember his first subordinate's advice if his own methods ever fail. Watching him go, Kodrak is stunned that someone so fiercely arrogant can still be so open-minded. Luca dashes deeper into the facility, passing scorched walls and the bloody corpses of nobles who died clumsily firing unfamiliar weapons just to buy time. Suppression forces are clearly wiping out the rebels across every single route. But as Luca races through the carnage, he admits one simple truth to himself. Ile wasn't just a comrade in arms, he was his very first friend. As the chaos of the rebellion's suppression rages on, Luca reflects on his bond with Ile, the very first friend he made at the academy. But right now, Ile is throwing everything away, sacrificing the lives of Imperial soldiers on a desperate, hopeless mission to save Lillian. It's a tragic attachment, and it's brutally clear that Ile has already accepted he might die alongside her. Napping back to the present, Luca halts his assault as a beaten Ramon's family member begs for mercy and surrenders. But Luca, cloaked in his terrifying Dark Watcher armor, doesn't care about taking prisoners. He demands to know where Lillian is. When the man stammers that he doesn't know, Luca catches his eyes darting to the side. Calling out the blatant lie, our hero violently grabs the man by the face, completely ignoring his terrified screams. Given one last chance, the broken man points downward, revealing the family fled deeper underground, an odd choice for an escape route. When Luca asks about his friend, the man cries that Illy is actually the one who injured him, raving that the blonde cadet has gone completely feral and is slaughtering anyone in his path. Knowing the suppression forces would eradicate this man anyway, Luca swiftly ends his life to spare him from torture. He usually feels nothing when taking a life, but today, an unnatural coldness grips him as the sound of gunshots and screams draws closer. Walking through a grand hall littered with slaughtered guards and echoing with fresh screams, Luca faces the question that has always haunted him. What would he do if his best friend revolted against the Empire? The time for running from that answer is over. Stepping through the bloody carnage, Luca finally spots the man responsible for the massacre and calls out Illy's name. When the dust finally settles, Luca stares down the wreckage and zeroes in on his former friend, Illy. He is completely disgusted that the noble cadet actually went through with his treasonous plan, sacrificing his own loyal subordinates just to protect Hugo Ramons, the clan head, and his family. And it was all to save one person, Lillian. Luca mocks him for throwing everything away for a worthless little girl, which makes Illy absolutely snap. Realizing our hero isn't going to just let this slide, Illy draws his weapon and vows to put Luca in his place. Unfazed, Luca readies his own glowing red blade for the clash. Luca quickly calculates his odds. Objectively, he knows he can win this duel as long as he doesn't make any stupid mistakes. But real fights are full of chaotic variables, and if this drags on, the Ramon's family will escape. So our hero makes a ruthless choice. He has to kill Lillian first. Even if it makes him Illy's sworn enemy forever, it's the only way to avoid having to kill his friend with his own two hands. But Illy knows him too well, predicting that Luca will ignore him and go straight for the girl. As Luca launches forward, Illy opens fire, trying desperately to suppress him. It's a pointless move. Single shots are useless against someone trained in ballistic prediction. Plus, Luca overclocked his cybernetic signals right before this mission, allowing him to push straight through the barrage of explosions without dropping a fraction of his speed. Panic sets in among the Ramon's family as Luca closes the distance. Someone screams out not to confront him, but it's already too late. A dark explosive is hurled into the chaos, and in the blink of an eye, a deadly red energy blade slices right through the defenses. Despite his severe injuries, Luca forces himself up for one last desperate clash. Sparks fly as a devastating metallic fist connects, followed by the ruthless swing of a red energy blade. A voice screams to wait, but a brutal strike lands perfectly on our hero, sending him tumbling down into a misty, endless void. As the darkness closes in, Luca's fading consciousness drags him back to the darkest day of his past, the rebel suppression. With his squad wiping out the targets, he realizes Lillian Ramons is the only one left. Knowing Illy will soon arrive to protect the woman he loves, Luca decides to finish the job quickly. Lillian was one of the few nobles who ever treated him with genuine kindness, so he resolves to at least give her a painless death. But as he raises his blade, Lillian does the unthinkable. She begins to laugh hysterically through her tears. The eerie reaction leaves Luca completely thrown off. Before he can strike, an enraged Illy screams his name and tackles him, sending both cadets crashing into the dirt in a violent struggle. As they furiously clash, Luca yells that Lillian is a traitor who is actually happy her family was slaughtered. But Illy fires back, revealing the dark truth. Lillian was nothing but a pawn for an arranged marriage, and she's just relieved to be free of her abusive clan. Refusing to believe it, Luca screams that she's just another rebel. That's when Illy drops a bombshell. The Empire fabricated the treason charges just to have an excuse to wipe the families off the map. Hearing this, the pieces finally click for Luca. He remembers how easily they breached the arcane fortress, realizing that the enemy's defenses were way too pathetic to have been a genuine, organized revolt against the Empire. Lillian tries to reason with him, pointing out the glaring holes in the Empire's narrative. If this were a true coordinated rebellion, rival factions would have backed them to split the Empire's power. But Luca isn't here for a politics lesson. Kneeling beside a battered Illy, Lillian warns her lover that if they keep fighting a losing battle, they're both going to end up dead. Then she drops a massive bombshell. She confesses that her father wasn't the innocent victim everyone thought he was. He had secretly hoarded an ancient arcane artifact, and that is the real prize the Empire is hunting them for. Pulling out a glowing blue cube, she reveals it's the exact power source that woke this ancient fortress from its slumber. Luca demands to know why she's spilling her family's darkest secrets now, but Lillian reads him perfectly. She knows Luca didn't pull his fatal strike earlier out of mercy or sudden guilt. He hesitated because he was absolutely terrified of destroying his bond with his best friend, Illy. Knowing Illy can never live freely under the Empire's thumb, Lillian offers our hero a way out that gives everyone exactly what they want. Holding up the glowing cube, she begs Luca to help them escape, explaining that the artifact can power a hidden underground teleportation device. Luca is immediately skeptical, but Lillian is dead serious. She tells him that if he doesn't trust her, he can strike her down right now because she refuses to watch Illy die for her sake. If Luca lets them use the teleporter, they can vanish from the continent forever, and Luca can just report to his superiors that they slipped through his fingers. Luca questions how the Imperial Guard could have missed a massive escape route. Lillian reveals that the path is a bloodline secret, known only to the direct descendants of the Ramon's family. Our hero weighs his options. He honestly couldn't care less if Lillian lives or dies, but Illy is a different story. He knows his friend's rebellious ideals will inevitably get him executed if he stays, meaning letting them run might be the only way to save his best friend's life. Luca realizes that in the chaos of the battlefield, it would be incredibly easy to fake Illy's death and report him MIA, finally giving his friend a chance to escape the Empire. Cutting off Illy's protests, Luca demands a strict promise. If Lillian's teleportation device fails, Illy won't try to stop Luca from doing what has to be done. Knowing Lillian doesn't want to drag him down either, Illy reluctantly agrees. Escorting a wanted target like Lillian Ramon's is pure treason, and Luca is sweating bullets knowing they're dead if another soldier spots them. When Lillian gently stops to wipe the blood off Illy's face, Luca rolls his eyes, sarcastically snapping that they might as well start a family if they're lucky enough to make it out alive. Lillian tearfully apologizes to Illy, blaming herself for dragging him into this mess. But Illy reassures her, confessing that she was the one who opened his eyes to the outside world. Thanks to her, he finally realized he wasn't crazy for questioning the Empire's twisted rules, just different. Listening to them, Luca realizes Lillian is the true source of Illy's rebellious mindset. To Luca, these beliefs are a disease that will slowly eat the Empire from the inside out until it collapses. Clenching his armored fist, our hero makes a dark, silent vow. He will personally execute anyone who poses a threat to the Empire, even if that someone is his best friend. They eventually reach a hidden, maze-like passage where they can finally catch their breath. Lillian reveals that only her family knows about this route. Her father had kept his research on these ruins a secret, becoming overly ambitious the moment he figured out how to activate the ancient fortress. They might think they're sneaking away, but this entire situation is still playing right into the Emperor's hands. As Lillian guides them through the labyrinth, Illy thanks our hero for letting them walk away. But Luca makes it clear he's only repaying a debt, coldly warning Lillian that if they ever cross paths again, he won't hesitate to kill her. Lillian promises that if they manage to escape or get separated, she'll head straight for Border City. She even offers Luca a chance to leave the corrupt Empire with them, but he immediately shuts it down, claiming he has no place out there. Exhausted and battered in his damaged suit, Luca starts to second-guess if helping his friend was a massive mistake. Still, he figures he can spin the official report. Captain Hollis trusts him. He's the only one investigating his rogue instructor Kinuan, and to the Empire, a cadet and a noble girl are nobodies not worth digging into. They finally reach a massive set of doors, but the tension is suffocating. Luca warns Illy to brace himself, knowing that if there isn't a teleportation device waiting on the other side, their escape run is officially over. As Luca hits the door release, his enhanced senses scream that something is horribly wrong. Focusing entirely on his sense of smell, he detects a sickening mix of fresh blood, heavy oil, and iron with absolutely no human scent. The doors slide open to reveal an absolute nightmare. 4 elite Imperial guards standing in full mechanical suits. Just one of them without armor would be enough to kill Luca in his current state, but 4 is a guaranteed death sentence. Panic sets in as Luca realizes the terrifying stakes. If the guards capture Lillian, a girl with 0 military training, she'll easily break under torture and expose their entire treasonous plot. His desperate fantasy of giving Illy a free life shatters right before his eyes. Realizing that Lillian would inevitably break under the Empire's torture and expose their treasonous plan, Luca knows there's only one brutal option left. They have to execute her themselves. But as the towering Imperial guards lock eyes with them, Luca panics, terrified that Illy will snap and attack the soldiers if he's forced to watch the woman he loves die. But Illy makes an unthinkable choice. Before Luca can even react, Illy grits his teeth, raises his gun, and shoots Lillian through the head himself. She instantly drops dead, her white hair spilling into a pool of blood. When the guard commander demands to know what the gunshot was, Illy coldly lowers his weapon and states he was simply disposing of a prisoner who had outlived her usefulness. Suspicious, the commander orders a full report on why a rebel was kept alive for so long, and Illy obediently agrees. As Illy marches off with the guards, Luca is left standing in stunned silence, staring at the lifeless body of the girl his friend just murdered to protect their secret. Later, Luca faces a nerve-wracking debriefing with Captain Hollis Custoria. While Hollis relays high praise for Luca's combat record, suggesting Instructor Kinuan can help him refine his leadership, the captain quickly hones in on a glaring anomaly. He demands to know why Luca brought Lillian all the way to the lowest floor instead of executing her on the spot. Sweating bullets, Luca lies, explaining they needed a weak, non-combatant prisoner to guide them to the rebels' teleportation device. When Hollis presses him about his and Illy's personal ties to the girl, Luca firmly insists they would never compromise an Imperial mission for personal feelings. To completely sell the lie, Luca adds a twisted spin, claiming they only kept her alive to give her the cruel, false hope of survival in exchange for her cooperation. Hollis gives a grim smile, completely buying the ruthless excuse, and officially closes the case. Back at headquarters, Hollis Custoria, the scarred captain of the Imperial Guard, casually reviews the mission report over a mug of coffee. He notes the official cover story. Ilei's platoon was wiped out after hastily pursuing rebels right into a deadly ambush. The sheer pressure radiating from the captain leaves the reporting officers in a cold sweat, terrified of saying the wrong thing about the disaster. Meanwhile, on the long train ride back to the capital, the adrenaline finally wears off and Luca completely passes out. But his mind offers no rest. He is haunted by the image of Lillian, who died before she could ever escape the Empire, struck down by Ilei, the very man who was supposed to be her knight in shining armor. Luca admits to himself that he can barely look his friend in the eye, knowing the bitter truth. Ilei only killed her because Luca was there. If our hero hadn't intervened, Ilei would have gladly thrown his life away to die by Lillian's side. It's a heavy burden to carry, but Luca accepts the guilt, because at the end of the day, he achieved his only real goal, keeping Ilei alive. Once they arrive in the capital city of Akvaran, the survivors are thrown into medical pods to heal and repair their gear. And to officially sweep the absolute disaster of the mission under the rug, the Empire flips the script. Luca and Ilei are hailed as heroes, becoming the only cadets to be awarded the prestigious Level 7 Crossblade Order of Military Merit. Standing on a balcony overlooking the city, Ilei laughs at the sick irony of his new medal. Luca doesn't sugarcoat things, admitting he fully expected Ilei to throw his life away and fight the Imperial Guards for Lillian. Ilei quietly confesses that if he had been alone, he would have. Despite the tragedy, Ilei's noble family is thrilled with his military success, completely ignoring their past ties to the Ramons. Luca warns his friend to quit the military while he still has a pulse, pointing out that a guy who sacrifices his entire platoon for love isn't cut out to be a soldier. But Ilei bitterly replies that he doesn't have a choice. His family will force him into the Imperial Guard even if it kills him. Hearing his friend talk so cheaply about his own life snaps something in Luca, and he drives a brutal, metallic punch straight into Ilei's gut. As Ilei groans that Luca might have ruptured an organ, our hero coldly tells him to stop whining and just swap the broken parts for cybernetics. But Ilei isn't angry at the punch. Staring out at the sky, he reveals that on the entire ride back, he was burning with a deep, consuming resentment, not toward Luca, but toward himself for being too weak to protect the woman he loved. As night falls over the city, Luca meets with Ilei on a quiet rooftop. He can see the toll the recent bloodbath has taken on his friend. Ilei isn't a cold-blooded killer, and the guilt of executing his own subordinates, combined with his failure to save Lillian, is tearing him apart. Luca knows that if Ilei stays in the Empire, the overwhelming trauma will cost him either his sanity or his life. Breaking the heavy silence, Ilei reveals he plans to take a 2-month leave to return home and clear his head. But before he goes, Luca finally asks the question that's been haunting him since the massacre, wanting to know why Lillian smiled right after watching her entire family die. Ilei reveals the dark truth behind her life. Lillian was trapped in an arranged engagement to a man 30 years her senior, but it gets even sicker. The fiancé had sent her parents endless data files of his previous wife, forcing them to raise Lillian as a perfect replica. From her mannerisms to her tastes, and even her name, she was stripped of all autonomy and abused since birth just to satisfy a twisted noble's desires. The only person who ever showed her sympathy was Claude, which leads to a shocking confession. Ilei suddenly bursts into maniacal laughter, admitting that he and Lillian had actually conned Claude. They fed him a massive lie, claiming that Luca was the illegitimate son of Captain Hollis Custoria. Since Luca rose from a filthy orphanage to the Imperial Guard with suspicious speed, Claude swallowed the bait whole, believing that if Lillian had Luca's baby, the Custoria family's immense power would finally set her free. Hearing about this reckless scheme, Luca realizes that his friend is far from a good guy. Ilei manipulates, deceives, and even slaughters his own men when necessary. But in this cutthroat world, the worst people are sometimes the most reliable, and Luca knows he can still count on Ilei to watch his back. Later, Luca pays a visit to Kinwen, who slams a book shut and greets him with a sarcastic smirk, teasing our hero about his new status as a war hero. Luca has been checking in on the martial arts instructor regularly under Hollis's orders to keep him on a tight leash. Kinwen points out that Luca just received a Level 7 Crossblade Order of Military Merit, though Luca brushes it off as a trivial reward. Despite their complicated dynamic, Luca actually doesn't mind his time with the Watcher. Getting down to business, Luca admits the real reason for his visit, explaining that Hollis sent him to learn how to be a better commander. Kinwen laughs off the captain's high expectations but agrees to give some advice based on Luca's battle records. When he asks if Luca's troops were disobedient during the recent bloodbath, Luca shakes his head, explaining that his men were outstanding soldiers who would have gladly marched into the jaws of death for him. Hearing this, Kinwen bluntly diagnoses the problem, stating that Luca is simply too kind to lead. Kinwen isn't there to offer comfort. The martial arts instructor coldly breaks down Luca's recent failure, pointing out that by taking on all the risk to protect his soldiers, Luca overloaded his nervous system and ruined his judgment as a leader. When our hero defensively asks if he was supposed to just let his squad die, Kinwen corrects him. A true commander doesn't send men to their deaths, he makes them willingly walk into the fire on their own. Kinwin uses Gabriel and Gilda as prime examples. Because Luca saved them in the slums, they already feel indebted to him, but if he wants them to gladly die for his cause, he needs to manipulate that bond. The instructor's philosophy is brutal. Make your subordinates love you, but keep your own heart completely distant so you never hesitate to treat them as expendable. Luca is visibly disgusted by the idea, asking what happens when a commander's own guilt gets in the way of throwing lives away. But Kinwin just flashes a menacing smile, warning the young cadet that if he doesn't crush his conscience, he'll never survive at the top of the empire. Realizing he has no choice but to play the part for now, Luca forces himself to agree, promising to treat his future subordinates as disposable pawns. Very next day, Luca is summoned by his adoptive father, Captain Hollis Custoria, who drops a massive surprise. He's sending Luca to the prestigious Craxia Academy for 2 months. It's a traditional honor reserved for the top cadets, though Hollis notes that Ile turned the offer down, still too traumatized by the recent massacre to do anything but go home and rest. Hollis explains that if Luca ever wants to be accepted as a true member of the Custoria family, he needs to learn how to navigate the cutthroat world of high society. Our hero gladly accepts the mission, and Hollis smirks, mentioning that he's already arranged a special guide for the trip, someone he claims Luca will love. Right on cue, a massive futuristic transport ship drops from the sky, kicking up a storm of dust and debris as its doors slide open. But the guide waiting inside isn't exactly a friendly face. It's Giselle Custoria, Hollis's hostile daughter, and she immediately barks at Luca to stop staring and get in the car. Luca meets his assigned guide for the trip to Craxia Academy, but she immediately rubs him the wrong way. Taking in her cocky attitude and mostly unmechanized body, he quickly deduces she's a young noble. When he mentions he's there under Captain Hollis's orders, she just brushes him off. Annoyed by her smugness, Luca decides to flip the script and casually addresses her as Lady Custoria. She freezes, demanding to know how he figured it out, but Luca points out that only a select few would dare complain about the captain's direct commands. He realizes this girl must be the captain's daughter, and her presence is Hollis's way of proving he fully intends to keep his promise and adopt him into the family. Our hero smirks, thinking that the name Luca Custoria actually has a pretty nice ring to it. He finally admits her father sent her and introduces herself as Giselle Custoria, snapping at him to stop acting like he's above her. For a second, Luca considers apologizing to keep the peace, but he stops himself. He didn't claw his way out of the slums and survive hell just to grovel to an arrogant noble. Deciding he'd rather drop dead than kiss up to someone who hates him, he bluntly tells her to just do her job and lead the way. Giselle seethes in silence, and Luca sighs, knowing his new life is going to be a seriously tough road. After a tense flight, they touch down at the academy grounds. Giselle briskly tells him to follow her to his new dorm as they walk past a towering monument dedicated to the Emperor of Acretia, the founding father of humanity. Putting romance aside, Luca finally arrives at the prestigious Craxia Academy, a sprawling, futuristic campus he's only ever seen in videos. But it doesn't take long for the elite veneer to crack. Right in the courtyard, he watches upper-class students using their expensive cybernetics to violently bully a lower-class kid, tossing him to the dirt like trash. Beside him, Giselle Custoria, the captain's daughter who is assigned to guide him, starts panicking because Luca's dull purple cadet uniform doesn't have a color transformer to help him blend in. Luca just grins, realizing that for all her initial hostility, she gets totally flustered over the smallest rule infractions. She's not nearly as tough as he first thought. Before Giselle can scold him further, they're interrupted by Felix Eigen, a fellow Imperial Guard cadet in Luca's year. Felix smoothly introduces himself to Giselle and asks to borrow our hero for a minute, leaving the stressed-out noble girl to finally catch her breath. Once they're out of earshot, Felix is absolutely mind-blown that Luca is casually hanging out with the captain's wild daughter. Luca admits that if they were back on the streets, he would have already broken her nose for her attitude. Felix laughs, joking that Captain Hollis might be grooming Luca to be his son-in-law. But Luca knows the real deal. Hollis already promised to adopt him into the Custoria family in exchange for spying on his martial arts instructor, Kinwin. He doesn't need to marry into the family when he's already securing a seat at the table. Before taking off, Felix slips Luca a VIP club card, winking that cadets are always popular with the ladies, and gives him the rundown on the academy's brutal hierarchy. He explains that their dorm is basically a dumping ground for talented slum kids and broke, fallen nobles who can't afford better housing. Looking up at the massive building, Luca realizes there's a steep social ladder to climb here, but he smiles, knowing it wouldn't be any fun if making it to the top was easy. Luca finally checks into his new assigned dorm, and the place is practically a palace. He realizes that the academy spares no expense. Even kids from ruined families or the absolute slums get to live in pure luxury, as long as they have the talent to back it up. Before he can even unpack, his hostile adoptive sister, Giselle, contacts him. She hands over her personal number for emergencies, making it painfully clear she's only doing this because their father ordered her to. Luca is surprised. He thought she hated his guts, but he has to admit she takes her duties seriously and isn't just a spoiled brat. But before cutting the connection, Giselle leaves him with one chilling warning: stay far away from the dorm leader. She calls this mysterious person the most unhinged being the academy has ever known. Bracing himself for an absolute monster, Luca opens his door only to flinch as a nervous, clumsy girl with massive curly hair stutters out a greeting. This is Barbara, the supposedly terrifying dorm leader. Luca quickly scans her worn clothes and notes her lack of a noble last name. She's a commoner from the lower-class zones, just like him. Seeing how sweet and harmless she acts, Luca figures Giselle's warning was just pure noble classism. He instantly drops the formalities, telling Barbara to just use his first name since they both crawled out of the slums. He praises her for climbing the ranks to dorm leader, and thrilled to meet a fellow survivor, Barbara completely lights up, aggressively insisting on giving him a grand tour of the facility. Heading to the academy's main building, Luca runs into his adoptive sister, Giselle. She's dressed in the same class colors as him, revealing that their father ordered her to stick by his side and attend his classes for the entire week. Luca immediately realizes she's going to be a massive headache. Before they can even make it to class, Barbara, the clumsy dorm leader, nervously approaches to say hello, but Giselle doesn't even try to hide her disgust. She shoots Barbara an icy glare and orders her out of her sight, leaving the poor girl trembling before storming off down the hall. Luca watches Barbara cower, recognizing that same defeated look he used to see on the faces of the slum dwellers in the lower-class zone. He asks Giselle about their history, but she completely dodges the question. While Luca is definitely intrigued by why Barbara keeps clinging to a girl who treats her like garbage, he decides to mind his own business. All he has to do is survive these soft academy classes for 2 months, and his noble status is secured. But after a full week of painfully boring lectures, that mindset starts to crack. The soft life of nobility just isn't cutting it for him. Between the synthetic drugs and his cybernetic remodeling, Luca realizes he's been wired to think like a weapon of war. Spinning a knife out of sheer boredom, he's itching for a real battle, practically begging the universe for someone to pick a fight with him. And the universe delivers, though not exactly how he hoped. A nervous, stuttering voice suddenly calls him out, demanding to know why he's been glued to Giselle's side all week. Luca turns around, knife still in hand, to find none other than Barbara finally stepping up to confront him. When the curly-haired cadet refuses to answer, Luca hits him where it hurts, asking if he has a crush on Giselle. Flustered and furious, the kid lunges, but Luca easily dodges and drops him with a brutal counter. Realizing he's just beating up a small fry, Luca changes tactics. He offers to put in a good word with Giselle if the crying cadet spills the beans. Luca asks why Giselle hates Barbara. The cadet explains the Barbara curse: anyone who gets close to her ends up targeted by rogue androids. Because she still tries to make friends despite the danger, the other students treat her like trash, even forcing the dorm leader roll onto her as a cruel joke rather than a reward for her skills. Right on cue, the cadet points to a group of girls bullying Barbara nearby. They drench her in water and mockingly demand she strip right there so they can wash her clothes, leaving Barbara trembling helplessly as they yank at her uniform. Watching this, Luca realizes this exact kind of harassment was why Barbara was rushing to the showers on his first day. But our hero has zero patience for petty bullies. With a flash of his mechanical arm, he steps in and breaks up the crowd, bluntly telling the girls to get lost and warning them that he has no problem hitting women if they don't back off. After Luca throws a pocket knife to scare off the girls bullying Barbara, the attackers freeze in absolute terror. As they back off, a stuttering classmate named Enrico rushes over in a panic, while Barbara sheepishly thanks our hero for stepping in. Knowing she's secretly a high-tech terrorist hacker, Luca jokingly wonders if helping her is going to get him assassinated by an android later. But Enrico is completely freaking out. He warns Luca that the ringleader he just humiliated is Calissa Cano, and while her family lacks political power, they run a brutal gang in the lower-class zones. Enrico explains that Calissa has been mercilessly tormenting Barbara ever since her boyfriend supposedly fell victim to Barbara's bad luck curse, and her payback is always overkill. But instead of being worried about a gang coming after him, Luca just smiles, hoping they actually try it since he's been getting way too bored. Conversation is cut short when Giselle walks up, causing Enrico to completely freeze. The nervous kid clearly has a massive crush on Luca's ruthless adoptive sister. Blushing furiously, Enrico begs Luca to put in a good word for him before sprinting away at top speed. Giselle just glares at his retreating back with utter disgust, and Luca mentally notes that the poor guy has absolutely zero chance with her. Luca's little stunt doesn't go unpunished, though. He's called into the office of Professor Gid Albern, a stern former Imperial guard with robotic hands. Gid reprimands him for throwing a blade at a student, but Luca figures the old soldier would give him a pass. Instead, Gid drops a heavy warning. He tells our hero that he's acting like a wolf thrown among innocent sheep, but warns him not to get cocky. Because eventually, these academy kids will become the elite bureaucrats who control the military with the flick of a finger, and some of them are atypical monsters far scarier than any wolf. Armed with a new blade and a warning to avoid the academy's hidden monsters, Luca waits behind the gym long past the dorm's curfew. After saving Barbara, he knows the rumors say berserk androids will soon come for him. But our hero isn't just waiting around for mindless machines, he's hunting for a witch's curse. Out of the misty forest, 2 students step into the clearing. They're here for payback on behalf of a girl named Kalisa, taunting Luca that a proud Imperial Guard wouldn't dare report getting beat up by regular students. They demand he get on his knees and apologize. Unfazed, Luca sighs at how dull this is. He gives them one final chance to walk away with their limbs intact, mocking the sheltered newbies who have never even looked death in the eyes on a real battlefield. Furious, one of the students aggressively powers up his mech suit, clearly straining under its high output. Luca immediately prepares to counter the attack, but before a single punch is thrown, a massive shadow looms over them. A towering patrol android interrupts the showdown, blankly asking if they need help. The bullies panic, realizing the robots aren't supposed to be doing rounds this late. Unwilling to risk a fight in front of security, they promise to settle the score later and tell the Tin Man to get lost. But instead of leaving, the android system violently glitches out. It stumbles and crashes heavily to the ground, leaving the students in pure shock as the berserk machine Luca was waiting for finally reveals itself. The peaceful academy forest is suddenly shattered by absolute chaos. A massive, blood-soaked robotic figure crashes into the clearing, instantly obliterating a cadet in a spray of gore and leaving the rest paralyzed with shock. The mechanical beast goes on a blind rampage, blasting devastating red energy beams and violently launching itself at anyone caught in its path. As a panicked student screams that the rumored witch's curse of dorm leader Barbara is actually real, instructor Kinuan steps forward. He scoffs, telling the terrified kids that elite Craxia Academy cadets shouldn't be crying over silly ghost stories. Staring down the giant machine's glowing red eye, the battle-crazed instructor notes it can only maintain this max power output for a few minutes. Seeing the glowing energy strings controlling the beast, he deduces a human puppeteer is behind the attack and flashes a manic, sharp smile, deciding this is the perfect excuse to finally loosen up. But he's not the only one ready for a fight. The android lunges, only to be met by Luca. Wielding a glowing blue blade, our purple-eyed hero effortlessly tracks the machine's highly refined battle programming, dodging its lethal steel claws with ease. After getting completely humbled by Kinuan Zakai's tactic earlier, Luca is hungry to test his limits. He glares at the towering robot, completely unsatisfied. This puppet isn't nearly strong enough to give him the thrill he's craving, and with a swift spin, he slams a brutal counterattack right into the machine. Shortly after his brutal training, a deadly incident rocks the academy. A massive rogue android goes on a rampage, tearing through the campus. Luca throws himself into the chaos, his eye glowing red as he pushes his new Akai's tactic and cybernetic arm to their limits. But the mysterious hacker controlling the machine isn't impressed, taunting our hero for being predictable and weak. The brutal clash leaves a trail of destruction, ending only when campus security drones finally swarm the area. In the aftermath, Luca is approached by campus security investigator Jillian Campbell. Jillian drops a bombshell. The hacker who controlled the rogue android must be a student, and since the attack resulted in a fatality, even the untouchable nobles are prime suspects. When Luca asks why a top investigator wants a mere cadet's help, Jillian reveals a chilling fact. He knows Luca just learned the Akai's Victima tactic, a skill that requires exceptional perception. Even worse, Jillian admits the Academy secretly monitors all Akai's Victima users, leaving Luca to wonder just what instructor Kinuan has dragged him into. Before he can process this new threat, his adoptive sister Jizzle marches up, absolutely furious. She blasts Luca for getting involved in a massive brawl just to protect the clumsy dorm leader, Barbara, reminding him that their father trusted her to keep him safe. But our hero stands his ground, refusing to apologize for defending Barbara from the Academy's bullies. Realizing he won't back down, a frustrated Jizzle decides to take control of the situation, declaring she'll meet with Kalisa to demand an official arbitration. Luca watches the exchange, his mind racing. If Jizzle can just step in and force a compromise, it means she holds some serious leverage over Kalisa. Not one to back down, Luca turns his sights on Kalisa. He calls out her entire scheme, accusing her of sending her own boyfriend to flirt with Barbara just to manufacture an excuse to bully her. He knows her type, sending cronies after anyone who crosses her. Kalisa completely loses it, screaming that she did nothing wrong, but Jizzle shuts her down with a single, chilling command. The sheer authority in Jizzle's glowing eyes forces the furious noble to bite her tongue and submit. Jizzle orders Luca to wait outside so she can handle Kalisa alone. Pacing the halls, Luca realizes that if Jizzle has this much control, she could have simply ordered Kalisa to stop the bullying from day one. Instead, she chose this complicated arbitration. When Jizzle finally emerges, she immediately scolds Luca for stirring up trouble. Luca defends himself, explaining he was testing Kalisa to see if she was the noble controlling the android that attacked Barbara. Jizzle warns him to leave the detective work to the official investigators, claiming Kalisa only backed down out of respect for the Custoria family's reputation. But Luca isn't buying it. He drops a massive accusation, asking Jizzle point-blank if she was the one who ordered Kalisa to target Barbara. He suggests Jizzle just use the angry noble as a convenient chess piece. Furious, Jizzle lunges forward and grabs him by the collar, snarling at him to watch his mouth and demanding to know if his cybernetic enhancements have fried his brain. Putting his newly acquired Akai's Victima tactic to the test, Luca observes his surroundings with heightened perception. He focuses his glowing eye on his adoptive sister Jizzle, convinced she is the mastermind behind the recent Academy conspiracies. But the tactic's advanced reading of her micro-expressions leaves him completely baffled. Instead of malice, he realizes she just looks absolutely terrified. His investigation is interrupted when Barbara approaches him with a stack of homemade sandwiches. Playing the part of the clumsy, grateful dorm leader, she thanks him for saving her from Kalisa and shyly offers to make his lunches every day. Luca immediately shuts her down, warning her that people will get the wrong idea, but Barbara drops her gaze and insists she doesn't care about the rumors. Luca isn't buying the innocent maiden act for a second. Knowing she has ties to the Nemesis hackers, he decides to rattle her cage, demanding to know why she keeps hovering around him when it constantly triggers berserk android attacks. Pushing harder, he reveals that Jizzle was the one who ordered Kalisa to bully her in the first place. But as his enhanced vision locks onto her, Luca realizes something chilling she already knew. When he presses her on exactly why Jizzle hates her so much, Barbara's clumsy facade shatters. She turns her back to him, dropping her lunchbox to the floor as a wicked, glowing smirk stretches across her face. Remembering an old warning about monsters hiding in sheep's clothing, Luca realizes he just found the real predator hiding in plain sight at the academy. Later, Luca reports his findings to his superiors, operating as an official investigator for the ongoing conspiracy. They confirm his suspicions that Kalisa intentionally used her ex-boyfriend to manipulate Barbara. Realizing the web of lies is deeper than he thought, Luca requests authorization to officially interrogate his suspects. He gets the green light to press a couple of targets, with his contact reminding him that the stakes are higher than ever. This is the 6th incident, and this time it has already cost someone their life. Luca is dead set on catching whoever is pulling the strings behind the recent android attacks, but the leading theory has a glaring flaw. Discussing the case over his comms, he points out that there is no way Barbara, a lower-class student, could bypass the Academy's military-grade security to hack an android. His contact counters that noble students, however, could easily interfere with the manufacturing process, since money and power can buy off anyone. Then they drop a crucial bombshell: Barbara is secretly being sponsored by the Castoria family. Luca cuts the connection, frustrated that the pieces still aren't fitting together. A dark part of him wishes he could just torture the truth out of Barbara and be done with it, but since he has to play by the rules, he decides his next best move is to confront his adoptive sister, Jizzle Castoria, directly. Tracking her down to a workshop, he watches Jizzle expertly repair a mechanical arm. He reflects on how intense noble kids are, remembering Ile's warning that nobles who lack skill are treated like absolute trash by their own blood. Still, looking at her intense focus, Luca has to admit she's come a long way from the spoiled brat he first met. When she finally takes a water break, Jizzle spots him and demands to know why he is hovering around. Luca smirks and tells her he just missed her, causing her to instantly spew her drink in shock and disgust. Unamused by his games, she tells him to cut the jokes and get to the point because she has actual work to do. Luca drops the act, his gaze turning deadly serious as he warns her not to lie to him. He reveals that campus security officially put him on the case, and asks if her family's secret sponsorship of Barbara is the real reason she wants the girl expelled. Defensive, Jizzle tries to hide behind her status as the Imperial Guard captain's daughter, admitting she used to be friends with Barbara, but grew to hate her after becoming the second victim of the android curse. Luca isn't buying her deflections, deciding it is time to shake the cage. He hits her with the cold truth. Security believes the androids were intentionally hacked, and right now, Jizzle is their prime suspect. She explodes in rage, arguing that she was a victim herself, but Luca calmly points out that criminals fake victimhood all the time, and she's the only one with the noble backing, knowledge, and mechanical skill to pull it off. As she panics, he tells her to calm down, admitting he doesn't actually think she is guilty, but he needs everything she knows. Before Jizzle can answer, a sudden whirring sound puts Luca on high alert. His combat senses flare up, sending a chill down his spine, but the threat isn't an assassin, it's Barbara. The clumsy dorm leader strolls in with a cheerful smile, loudly complaining that she was worried when Luca wasn't in his usual spot, completely oblivious to the tense criminal interrogation she just walked into. Luca is completely caught off guard. He was absolutely sure he wasn't being tailed, yet Barbara tracked him down with ease. Looking at her smug, laughing face, he realizes her entire bullet victim persona was a complete sham, especially since she's dropping the act right in front of Jizzle. Furious that he has to play these mind games instead of just beating the truth out of her, he snaps, ordering the hacker to wipe the smile off her face. Barbara tries to salvage her innocent facade, putting on a distressed act and stuttering that she only followed him because she likes him. She even brings up how he saved her from bullies, but Luca isn't buying a single word. Completely out of patience, he stomps forward and violently smashes the room's wooden furniture to splinters, proving he is done playing nice. Jizzle screams at him in shock, but Luca ignores her, stepping right up to his target. He tells Barbara that she was a fun distraction, but the game is officially over. Realizing she's been completely made, Barbara's innocent mask shatters. Her eyes glow with a menacing, psychotic light as she drops her stutter, referring to herself in the third person and taunting him with a terrifying smile. Completely unfazed by Luca's hostility, Barbara casually drops a wrapped lunch on the table for him. Then she turns her attention to Jizzle. Walking right up to the terrified noble, Barbara grabs her arm in a vice grip and flashes a bone-chilling grin. She whispers a menacing goodbye, sliding her hand down Jizzle's arm in a twisted display of dominance before cheerfully skipping out of the room like nothing happened. Second Barbara leaves, Jizzle collapses to the floor in pure terror. Looking at her trembling form, the final puzzle pieces click into place for Luca. He finally understands the twisted power dynamic between the two girls, and exactly who the real culprit behind the Academy's shadows is. But when he tries to get answers, a broken Jizzle just begs him not to ask questions, pleading with him to finish his time at the Academy and leave quietly before it is too late. While dealing with the black market's chaos, Luca's mind is still locked on the Academy conspiracy. He tries calling Jizzle, but she's been blatantly dodging him ever since the recent android incident. He had already reported everything to Captain Hollis, fully expecting the Imperial Guard to step in and handle it, especially since Hollis's own daughter is mixed up in the treason. But instead, Hollis just told him to handle it himself according to his best judgment. Luca realizes he's just being used as a puppet by the higher-ups. They clearly have a bigger picture in mind, but to him it's just annoying. Piecing the puzzle together, he knows Barbara is the hacker, but a lower-class student couldn't possibly bypass the Academy's security or control androids alone. However, a noble student could easily interfere with the manufacturing process from the inside. The pieces click into place. Jizzle had to be the one pulling the strings. Knowing this is going to be a massive headache, Luca decides he needs to corner Jizzle directly to confirm his theory. Just then, a fellow cadet named Enrico runs up, nervously asking if Luca put in a good word for him with Jizzle. Slapping on a fake, bright smile, Luca lies through his teeth and assures the guy that he did. In reality, Enrico's confession had gone horribly wrong. When he offered Jizzle flowers, she brutally rejected him, telling him he made her incredibly uncomfortable and ordering him to stay away, leaving the poor cadet sobbing with his bouquet. Nearly apologizing to the heartbroken Enrico, Luca finally tracks Jizzle down on a balcony. When she arrogantly threatens to tell her father about his rude behavior, Luca flips the script. He coldly reveals that he already reported her involvement in the terrorist incident to the captain. Pure panic instantly washes over Jizzle's face. She stumbles back, begging to know exactly how much her father knows, but Luca just tells her he has no reason to share. Elsewhere, Jizzle's world is completely collapsing. Trembling and sobbing, she lashes out at Luca, blaming him for ruining her reputation and destroying her carefully built place within the Castoria family. But our hero sees an opportunity and flips the script. He calmly offers her a deal. He will solve her android problem, but only if she helps him get officially adopted into the Castoria family. When Jizzle scoffs at a mere cadet offering help, Luca reminds her that he's a decorated talent with a Medal of Honor and Captain Hollis already favors him. Promising to stand by her, Luca catches Jizzle as her legs finally give out. Broken and desperate, she makes a massive confession. She admits that she is the one who has been controlling the Academy's androids, and she is the true creator of the infamous Barbara's curse. She explains that 3 years ago, Barbara was the only real friend she had. But when a male student started pursuing Barbara, Jizzle's jealousy took over. Terrified of losing her only friend, she built a robot disguised as an Academy android and programmed it to stalk the boy at night to scare him away. Prank ended in absolute disaster when the terrified student fell and severely injured his head. When the investigation began, Barbara easily figured out Jizzle was the culprit, but instead of turning her in, she offered a twisted cover-up. She handed Jizzle a custom chip to plant inside an Academy android, which then violently attacked Jizzle, making her the second victim and cementing the legend of the curse. Luca realizes Jizzle played right into the hacker's hands. Ever since that day, Barbara's demands escalated, forcing Jizzle to isolate herself and create regular new victims to maintain their perfect crime. But before Jizzle can finish her story, a static-laced voice suddenly echoes from a device, furious that she just spilled their darkest secret to a man. But before Luca can clash with all F cyborgs, a chilling transmission intercepts his comms. It's Barbara snarling through the static, furious that Jizzle leaked their secret. Realizing Jizzle has fallen into a deadly trap, Luca is forced to abandon the standoff at the arena and rush to her location on a city ledge. He wonders how Hacker bypassed her high-grade Imperial security, but before he can figure it out, his instincts scream at him to move. Mechanical whirring echoes, not from the comms, but right in front of them. Jizzle screams his name just as a deadly red laser slices through the air. Luca grabs her, and the two go tumbling off the ledge, skidding hard across the ground to barely dodge the lethal beam. Breathing heavily, our hero realizes he took a hit. Gripping a piece of robotic debris, he forcefully yanks it tight around his bleeding side to use as a makeshift tourniquet, temporarily stopping the hemorrhage. He quickly deduces that a silenced battle drone took the shot. It's a massive dilemma. He could easily destroy the hunk of metal if he activated his high-speed gear, but moving that fast would rip his wound wide open. Plus, all he has on him is a simple pocket knife. Still, his eyes lock forward with pure killing intent, silently swearing to smash the machine to pieces. Seeing him drenched in blood, Jizzle stares in horror, stammering out a question. Do Imperial guards just not feel pain? Luca snaps back that of course it hurts, but a killer drone doesn't exactly give you time to complain. Suddenly, the drone unleashes a rapid-fire barrage of red energy beams. Luca expertly deflects the onslaught with just his knife, sparks flying with every strike. He knows he can't keep playing defense forever. He needs to pinpoint the drone's exact location to take it down. Flashing a confident smirk, he glances back at Jizzle and asks if she has a mirror. She quickly crouches down and hands over a compact lens. Angling the glass, Luca uses the reflection against the starry skyline, locking onto the drone's hiding spot without ever exposing himself. Using the chaos of the firefight to his advantage, Luca blasts his way out of the arena. He channels his digital energy to launch himself through the alien cityscape, dodging massive descending blades and fiery explosions before skidding to a confident halt. Safe for a brief second, Luca realizes his transmitter is completely dead. He checks in with Jizzle, but she confirms the worst. Every single internal and external communication line has been jammed. Suddenly, a deranged enemy confronts them, screaming that Jizzle betrayed her and bizarrely confessing her affection for Luca. But before the disturbed woman can finish her unhinged rant, Luca ruthlessly crushes her core, shutting her down instantly. Ignoring the attacker's dying sobs, Luca decides to keep his own secrets buried for now, grabbing the distressed Jizzle and declaring they need to find a safe house. They retreat to a grand estate where they link up with Felix, an officer securing the perimeter. Felix reveals he didn't get any heads up about this mission, which makes a horrifying truth dawn on Jizzle. She realizes her own father, the captain of the Imperial Guard, orchestrated this entire chaotic operation and treated his own daughter as totally expendable bait. The betrayal shatters Jizzle. She slumps to the ground in tears, realizing she is nothing but a disposable pawn in her family's twisted power games. Watching her break down, Luca actually feels a rare pang of pity for the noble girl. But there's no time to mourn. Luca notices Felix is bleeding out, and the officer grimly admits he will probably be dead by morning. Smirking, Luca tells him he is fine for now and tosses him a heavy weapon since Felix's high-speed gear is busted. Felix tries to radio their position to headquarters, but before he can finish his sentence, a massive pink energy blast rips through the area, cutting the call off with lethal force. But before Luca can even answer Alep's twisted offer in the arena, a frantic transmission intercepts his comms. It's his fellow cadet Felix, frantically reporting his position with Jizzle Custoria right before a deafening gunshot cuts him off. Miles away, Jizzle's real escort is left completely stunned. The sniper managed to bypass the detection of 2 Imperial Guard cadets entirely. Stepping from the shadows, a cloaked assassin with glowing red eyes smugly announces that he just wants to talk, warning them that if he'd aimed for their heads, they would already be dead. Kartika aims his weapon, furious that this terrorist is mocking them. But the assassin brushes off the threat, cutting straight to the chase by demanding they hand over Jizzle. When Ile accuses him of plotting a ransom kidnapping, the assassin reveals a much darker truth. A mysterious princess with a notorious temper has ordered Jizzle's capture. The assassin then looks right at Ile, claiming he hoped the cadet would understand his motives. But Ile is seeing red, screaming at the killer for gunning down Felix in cold blood. Pushed over the edge, Ile charges forward with explosive speed and goes straight for the assassin's throat. He grabs the man's neck, ready to crush it, but his hands phase right through. It's a hologram. The real assassin is standing nearby, completely hidden by a high-tech, full-body invisibility cloak that perfectly masks his presence and energy signature. Realizing they're completely outmatched by a ghost they can't even track, Ile makes a split-second tactical decision. He draws his multi-barreled blaster and grabs Jizzle's hand, swearing to buy her time. He orders her to run the absolute second he gives the signal. Jizzle hesitates, not wanting to leave him behind to die, but Ile fiercely grabs her face, demanding she follow his orders without argument. He's already lost one person he cared about. He refuses to let it happen again. With the invisible assassin closing in, Ile locks eyes with Jizzle and starts the countdown. 1, 2, run. At his command, Jizzle violently pushes off the ground, lunging forward with all her strength to escape. Meanwhile, Ile turns back to face the unseen killer alone, putting his own life on the line to ensure the Custoria bloodline survives. But as Luca stares at the dangerous warning on his tablet, the sheer pressure of the upcoming deathmatch drags his mind back to his most desperate fight, the night the Nemesis terrorists attacked. In a harrowing flashback, Luca stares down the deadly terrorist, Rick Kaiser, counting down from 2 before screaming at his adoptive sister, Jizzle, to run for her life. As Jizzle sprints into the stormy darkness, Luca unloads his handguns on the shadowy attacker, but the man dodges the barrage with terrifying speed. Deflecting the assault with a dark wave of energy, Rick casually mentions that he'd hate to kill 2 of his juniors. The words hit Luca like a truck. This isn't just a highly skilled killer. Rick is a rogue Imperial Guard. Realizing he can crush our hero and still have plenty of time to hunt down Jizzle, the rogue guard goes on the offensive. As Luca is sent tumbling through the air, he knows a head-on fight is guaranteed suicide. Desperate to buy time, he taps into his digital Akai's tactic vision. The world slows down into a grid of green code, allowing him to track everything around him with perfect clarity. Without even looking, he reaches out and snatches up a fallen comrade's sword, spinning his handguns and clashing blades with Rick in a blinding flurry of sparks and pink energy. Rick skids back, genuinely impressed. He realizes Luca grabbed the blade blindly, exposing him as an Akai's tactic user. Suddenly, the rogue guard's murderous aura shifts, and he admits it would be a shame to kill someone with such a rare skill, completely flipping the script on the battle. Bleeding and exhausted, Luca notices the sudden change in his enemy's attitude, wondering why this specific tactic just saved his life, and praying that Jizzle finally made it to safety. Despite being worried about Jizzle's safety, Luca forces his anxiety aside. He realizes his opponent is holding back because of his Akai's tactic, but decides none of that matters. He just really hates this guy's arrogant attitude. Exploding with pink and blue digital energy, Luca launches himself forward. He unleashes a relentless barrage of sword strikes, crashing into the arena floor with bone-shattering force. Hooded Fighter easily deflects the blows, questioning why such a highly trained kid is gladly throwing his life away for the Empire. Slashing Luca and drawing blood, he warns our hero that he won't hesitate to kill him. But Luca snaps back that he couldn't care less about the Empire, he's just sick of the guy acting so superior. Amused, the fighter laughs, noting that Luca's defiant spirit definitely doesn't fit the Imperial Guard. Sensing a kindred spirit, the man finally introduces himself as Rick Kaiser, a proud supporter of republicanism. Luca immediately calls him out as a terrorist, though Rick prefers the term resistance. Unimpressed, Luca dismisses his ideology as complete nonsense. The brief pause ends as Rick begins to levitate, gathering a massive aura. Refusing to back down, Luca charges back in, his blade glowing with intense blue energy as the two clash in midair. But Rick's cybernetic power is overwhelming. He manifests a colossal, dark-armored hand from thin air, snatching Luca right out of the sky. Crushing our hero in its iron grip, Rick gives him one last chance to beg for mercy, but instead of panicking, Luca just flashes a wild, menacing grin. As the giant robotic hand bears down on him, Luca's memories of his harsh childhood blur into his most recent brush with death. He remembers the masked terrorist lifting him by the throat, grinning like a maniac. The man told Luca that if he somehow survived, he needed to give Kinwin a message. He was doing just fine. The sickening crunch of his own neck snapping was the last thing Luca heard before waking up in the capital's hospital. Though he's in agonizing pain, Luca knows he's the lucky one. His fellow cadet Felix was left untreated for too long and suffered severe brain damage. Luca only survived because Jizzle arrived just in time with a squad of Imperial guards to save him. His recovery is interrupted by the heavy footsteps of Hala's Custoria, the captain of the Imperial Guard and his new adoptive father. Hala's orders him to rest, grimly noting that Felix carried out his duties to the bitter end. After taking Luca's report, the captain drops a bombshell. The man who nearly killed him was Rick Silva Nunes, one of the Empire's most wanted criminals. When Luca admits he's never heard the name, Hala's explains that the Empire buries the identities of criminals tied to its own dirty laundry. The revelation sends a chill down Luca's spine. This wasn't just a random terrorist attack. Deciding to pull back the curtain, Hala's reveals the truth about Operation Juliet, a 5-year master plan to infiltrate the decentralized terror group Nemesis. Since cutting down grunts is useless without severing the head, they needed a spy on the inside. Luca assumes the mission failed since Rick got away, but Hala's coldly corrects him. The operation was a massive success. They successfully manipulated Nemesis into recruiting their own undercover agent as a hacker. And that agent is none other than Barbara, the seemingly psychotic dorm leader. Luca is left completely shell-shocked, horrified to realize that Monster is actually on the Empire's payroll. Sickening implications immediately click in Luca's mind. Felix's destroyed brain, Jillian's wasted efforts, and Jizzle being relentlessly harassed by Barbara, none of it was an accident. Hala's used his own loyal subordinates and even his own daughter as disposable pawns just to sell the lie. When a disgusted Luca asks if Jizzle knows the truth, Hala's bluntly states that she doesn't, and he intends to keep it that way. The captain locks his cold, unfeeling eyes on his new adopted son, asking if Luca understands why he's sharing this dark secret. It's a brutal reminder of the world Luca has stepped into, a game of power where even family is just another card to be played. Hearing Hala's Custoria share a massive family secret about Jizzle, Luca braces for the worst, convinced the captain is about to dispose of him. But Hala's flips the script entirely. He pulls up a holographic document and tells the cadet to sign it. In a shocking twist, it's an official declaration of adoption. Hala's is welcoming Luca into the Custoria family. Sometimes, the biggest promotions come disguised as execution. Hala's explains that the adoption paperwork will take time to process through the strict family elders. Luca stops by the medical bay. He checks in on Gabriel, who is enduring painful procedures to integrate his new robotic limbs. The cyborg weakly asks if Luca is leaving, and when our hero confirms it, Gabriel sincerely wishes him luck. With a firm nod, Luca walks out, ready to face his new reality. Back at the Imperial Guard Education Center, Luca reviews classified intel on Barbara. It turns out the clumsy dorm leader is actually a deep cover spy planted by the Empire to infiltrate the Nemesis terrorists. Luca realizes her unhinged, twisted behavior wasn't just an act. She was likely engineered that way specifically for this brutal mission. Alone with his thoughts, the weight of his new position hits Luca hard. He starts questioning his entire life. Was escaping the slums, meeting Kinwin, and learning the Akai's tactic really his own doing, or was he manipulated from the start? But he quickly shakes off the paranoia. Figuring Hala shared these secrets just to test his loyalty, Luca clenches his fist and vows not to waste this perfect chance to reinvent himself. He isn't about to let imposter syndrome ruin his rise to the top. Later, Luca meets with one of his new adoptive brothers, who casually asks if he lived it up at the academy. Luca dryly replies that he lived it up so much he nearly died. His brother just pours a cup of tea, offering some hollow sympathy for Felix, one of the cadets who didn't survive the recent chaos. Sitting across from his master, Luca passes on a message from Rick Kaiser, admitting he never expected the former instructor to become a nemesis terrorist. Kinuen calmly sips his tea, completely unfazed. He reveals that he and Rick were recruited into the guard at the exact same time, and he's honestly just surprised Luca survived a run-in with him. Kinuen then points out that Luca hasn't reported this terrorist connection to the captain yet. Luca fires back that turning his master in could get him executed on the spot, so he figured securing a little leverage was the smarter play. Kinuen smirks, demanding to know what our hero really wants in exchange for his silence. Luca doesn't hesitate. He demands to know the true origin of the Akai's tactic. He reveals that the Empire keeps a strict registry of every single Akai's user, and it's the exact reason Rick spared his life instead of crushing his skull. Kinuen sets his mug down, genuinely impressed that a cadet on the bottom rung pieced this massive conspiracy together so fast. Decides it's time for a history lesson. 200 years ago, the Empire faced its very first massive uprising, led by a brilliant advisor named Noel Muliska. Knowing he couldn't win a head-on war against the Empire's cybernetic armies, Noel turned to brutal guerrilla warfare and invented a specialized combat style, Akai's Victima. Luca realizes the horrifying truth: the very tactic he's been risking his life to master was created by terrorists. It was the perfect guerrilla weapon. Because the rebels were fighting a desperate, irregular war, they didn't care if the technique slowly destroyed their brains. They just needed extreme flexibility to survive any situation. Nguyen confirms it, explaining that the surviving rebels scattered across the continent, recruiting expendable fighters to launch suicide strikes against the Empire's core facilities. The brilliance of the Akai's tactic was that its users didn't need high-performance, illegal mech bodies to be lethal. They could disguise themselves as ordinary, harmless citizens, breeze through random checkpoints, and still tear apart armored guards with nothing but their bare hands. Everything clicks for Luca. This is exactly why Rick saw him as a potential ally, and why the Empire tracks every Akai's user. But when Luca asks how the Empire finally managed to uproot such a perfectly hidden rebel force, Kinuen's answer is chilling. They didn't bother investigating, they just slaughtered every single suspect. Dodging the cyborg's lethal strikes, the missing pieces of the puzzle finally click into place for our hero. He realizes the horrifying truth of how the Empire actually crushed the massive rebel uprising years ago. They didn't bother separating civilians from terrorists. They simply slaughtered everyone, wiping out entire regions and leaving no survivors, not even the Akai's Victima users. This buried history of treason explains exactly how his instructor, Kinuen, managed to master the rebel force's signature tactic. Luca's mind flashes back to a tense confrontation with Kinuen just days prior. He had asked the instructor point-blank if Captain Hollis only assigned him as a student because he suspected Kinuen was tied to the Nemesis terrorists. Instead of denying it, Kinuen just smiled, clapped his hands, and casually confirmed it. He even offered Luca a deadly deal. If our hero could find solid proof of his treason, it would guarantee Luca a one-way ticket into the inner circle of the Imperial Guard. Luca was completely thrown off by how calm Kinuen was about his own execution warrant. The instructor even threw him a bone, hinting that Luca should look for evidence from his time spent in the lower-class region. As the meeting ended, Luca couldn't help but wonder just how much Captain Hollis knew before throwing him into this political crossfire. Sprinting through the city streets later that night, Luca's frustration boiled over. He realized that both the captain and Kinuen were just using him as a disposable pawn to sound each other out. It's a dangerous tightrope, and one wrong step means certain death, but Luca refused to be played like a fool. Knowing that official military channels wouldn't give him any dirt on a man as dangerous as Kinuen, our hero made a choice. To flip the script and survive this chess match, he had to take the instructor's bait. And that is exactly why he followed Kinuen down into the lower-class zone, determined to dig up the bloody roots of his past, even if it means fighting for his life in an underground arena to do it. Luca processes Kinuen's cryptic advice, realizing his instructor practically handed him a map. Kinuen had explicitly told him to look for evidence of his past down in the lower-class region to advance his career. Luca immediately suspects a trap, wondering if Kinuen plans to have Nemesis rebels assassinate him in the slums, or if this is all a massive setup orchestrated by the higher-ups. But our hero refuses to be a pawn. Determined not to be an easy target, Luca takes the first step and goes straight to Captain Hollis. He reports the entire conversation, pointing out that Kinuen is clearly provoking them and is undoubtedly tied to the deceased terrorist, Rick Silva Nunez. Hollis decides to let Luca in on the real secret. He reveals that the order to investigate Kinuen didn't come from the Imperial Guard at all, but from the very top of the Empire. The superiors already know Kinuen might be colluding with terrorists, but they gave him the instructor job anyway, hoping to use him as a Trojan horse to infiltrate the heart of Nemesis. Luca admits that investigating his instructor feels impossible since Kinuen's self-control is entirely flawless. But Hollis shuts down his doubts with a shocking truth. Over the years, Hollis has sent countless cadets to spy on the man, but Luca is the only one who ever got close. Why? Because Kinuen actually likes him. Realizing he's the linchpin of this deadly political game, Luca leverages his position. He demands a massive upgrade in his security clearance, refusing to take on a shadow mission with just a cadet's badge. Soon after, an armored transport descends toward the rocky slums of the lower zone. Inside, Gabriel, the heavily modified cyborg who is now serving as Luca's muscle, asks if our hero is nervous. Luca admits he's on edge, but he's come prepared, having successfully extorted a cross-zone passport, weapons permits, investigation funds, and high-level database access from the captain. Still, Luca knows he's completely expendable in this war, and he swears he won't let himself be killed just for knowing too much. Surviving the arena is only half the battle, and Captain Hollis quickly steps in with a grim reality check. He admits that if the higher-ups give the order, he'll have to sweep this entire incident under the rug, which means disposing of everyone involved, including our hero. But the captain isn't about to let his new asset die. He promises to do everything in his power to protect the boy, revealing that shielding him from the brass is exactly why he adopted him into the Custoria family. With a surge of runic energy, Hollis powers up their transport. Realizing his life is now completely in the captain's hands, Luca asks how he should behave around his new aristocratic siblings. Hollis just flashes a wide grin and tells him to act like his usual self, hoping the boy's gritty nature will serve as a wake-up call to motivate his sheltered children. Luca isn't thrilled about being used as a pawn, but if playing along guarantees his safety, he's willing to endure the headache. Their ship touches down at the massive Custoria estate, a sprawling mansion built right over the slums where Luca spent his childhood. As they step into the grand hall, Hollis tells him to head straight to his room, waving off the immediate introduction since the rest of the family is too busy sucking up to the head of the house. Watching the nobles grovel, Luca can't help but scoff. They look exactly like the desperate sycophants back in the lower zones, leaving him wondering if this aristocratic life is really what he fought so hard for. But he barely has time to unpack before a knock at the door reveals his adoptive sister, Jizzle. To his surprise, she swallows her pride and apologizes for her hostile behavior during the recent chaos, admitting she let her emotions get the better of her. Luca brushes it off, knowing a sheltered noble is bound to panic in a war zone. Amused by his bluntness, Jizzle notes that despite his cold exterior, he burns hotter than anyone else. Prickly hostility is gone, replaced by calculated ambition. Jizzle brings up Luca's old promise to support her if he ever joined the family, and our hero confirms the offer still stands. He actually respects her newfound ruthless pragmatism. After all, true nobility is all about serving your own interests. Recognizing a valuable ally, Jizzle seals the deal, offering to share crucial family intel since she correctly guesses their father has left Luca completely in the dark. Back at the Custoria estate, Jizzle warns Luca that their two older brothers view his sudden adoption as a massive threat. Since Custoria is a strict military family, Luca is the only son actually qualified to be an elite soldier. Flipping the script, Luca asks if she has any ambition to take over the family herself. Jizzle admits she has no desire for the throne, but she absolutely refuses to let anyone step all over her. Luca tells her to seize the opportunity if it arises, casually offering it as advice from her new older brother. Jizzle bursts into laughter at his audacity. Catching her breath, she asks if he'll actually back her claim when the time comes. Luca promises he will as long as she never turns against him. Reaching an agreement, they shake on their new alliance. Jizzle begrudgingly calls him her dear brother to seal the deal, but immediately warns him it's the first and last time she'll ever say it. Luca smirks, admitting the whole thing was pretty embarrassing anyway. Later, the grandfather clock chimes, signaling the start of the Custoria family dinner. As they enter the grand dining hall, Luca comes face to face with his new rivals, the eldest son Nicholas, the second son Jupe, and Lady Eva Custoria. Eva greets him with a polite smile, but Luca immediately senses her pure hatred for him. She coldly orders them to take their seats before the captain arrives. As they sit, Jizzle whispers a final warning to Luca. Their father won't lift a finger to protect him if he makes a blunder. Right on cue, Hollis Custoria enters the room, his presence commanding absolute silence. After leading a solemn prayer to the first emperor of Acretia, the captain orders them to eat, kicking off the most tense family dinner of Luca's life. Shortly after his arena victory, Luca attends a tense formal dinner with his new adoptive family. He realizes all eyes are on him, remembering Jizzle's earlier warning that his new brothers, the politically savvy Nicholas and the conservative soldier Jupe, see him as a threat to their succession and will try to shame his slum background. Knowing his adoptive father Hollis won't protect him if he blunders, Luca decides to flip the script and give the old man exactly what he wants. Instead of playing the refined noble, our hero aggressively devours his steak like a starving beast, drawing a wide, amused smile from Hollis. Right on cue, Jupe takes the bait, arrogantly lecturing Luca on basic etiquette and his low-born manners. Luca inwardly smirks, realizing the insecure soldier completely fell for his act, though he notes that the older brother, Nicholas, remains silently calculating, making him the real threat in the room. Not holding back, Luca fires a brutal verbal shot right at Jupe, mocking him for failing to earn a single military merit in 10 years of service. The savage comeback leaves Jizzle stifling a laugh and Jupe gripping his knife in pure, trembling rage. Twisting the knife, Luca challenges his furious brother to compare actual fighting ability instead of table manners. Before Jupe can explode, Hollis steps in with a grin to stop the teasing, while Nicholas calmly points out that their new brother already knows perfect etiquette. Nicholas reveals that the slum boy was just pretending to be uncultured to humiliate Jupe. Chewing his food with a dark, mocking smile, Luca innocently claims he just made a mistake because he was so nervous to meet them all. Luca's transition from the bloody arena to the suffocating high society of his new adoptive family, the Custorias, is immediate. At a tense formal dinner, Nicholas Custoria brings up Luca's level 7 Crossblade Order of Military Merit, pointing out how rare it is for a cadet to receive one, while taking a thinly veiled jab at his own brother, Jupe, for failing to become a proper soldier. The bait works instantly. Jupe slams his fists on the table, demanding to know if Nicholas is calling him incompetent. Nicholas just flashes a patronizing smile, smoothly claiming Jupe misunderstood and that he's sure Jupe will do great things for the Empire someday. But Jupe isn't having it, venting his frustration that the higher-ups coddle him as the captain's son and refuse to send him into real battles. As the two brothers escalate their bitter argument, Luca quietly watches the family's deep-seated toxicity bubble to the surface. But our hero doesn't care about their sibling rivalry. He realizes this friction is exactly why Hollis brought him into the family, to act as the catalyst that shakes up his complacent sons. Luca knows the captain is probably smiling on the inside watching this play out. Lady Custoria eventually steps in to diffuse the tension, and the dinner transitions into a lavish party. She introduces our hero to the rest of the elites as Lucas Custoria, altering his name to hide his slum origins. Luca couldn't care less about the snobby relatives, but after seeing him hold his ground with Jupe, the rest of the family finally starts treating him as a legitimate threat. After a quick debrief with Jizzle about Nicholas's cunning nature, Luca heads to bed, thinking his exhausting first day as a noble is finally over. But he thought wrong. Late into the night, a figure slips into his dark room. It's Hollis. The captain apologizes for the late-night intrusion, explaining he has to sneak around to keep up the appearance of being strictly neutral in the family's power struggle. Luca immediately notices the captain is drinking, pointing out that alcohol damages the nervous system and ruins combat efficiency. Hollis casually offers him a glass, but Luca flatly refuses, stating that mastering the dangerous Akai's tactic is already risky enough without adding poison to his body. Taking a sip, Hollis drops the captain persona and gives Luca a crucial piece of advice as a veteran. He warns the boy that surviving this brutal life requires holding on to irrational, inefficient human impurities. When Luca coldly questions if human nature is even necessary for soldiers, Hollis gives him a chilling look, warning that soldiers who think like machines are always the first to be corrupted and consumed by the Legion. Unfazed, Luca just tells the old man he's drunk. Hollis laughs it off as a welcome gift to the family, but before leaving, he leaves our hero with one final order: find a hobby completely unrelated to combat, preferably one that actually makes him a worse fighter. Back at the Custoria estate, Luca reflects on Hollis's strange advice from earlier. The captain had urged him to pick up a hobby that would actively interfere with his combat skills. At first, our hero is suspicious, wondering if Hollis is trying to introduce an impurity into his system to make him emotionally unpredictable, just like Ile and Kinwin. But as he stares into the fireplace, a softer realization hits him. Hollis wasn't plotting a grand tactical sabotage. For the first time, the imposing captain was just acting like a normal, caring father, offering genuine advice that gave himself zero advantage. Next day, Luca is eager to head down to the lower-class region to hunt for traces of his old master, Kinwin. But those plans are put on hold for a mandatory tour of the Custoria family's private armory. Jizzle acts as his guide, revealing that her mechanical engineering degree at the academy isn't just for show. She explains that the armory is strictly managed by the women of the household, currently her mother, because outsiders can never be trusted with their arsenal. It turns out that even in arranged noble marriages, handing over the keys to the weapons is a long-standing tradition to prove absolute trust and loyalty. As they walk through the massive hangar, a colossal, heavily modified mech suit catches Luca's eye, its right arm noticeably larger from years of custom weapon upgrades. Jizzle proudly introduces it as Scylla, the one-of-a-kind full mech suit once piloted by the family's founder, Agatha Custoria. It might be an outdated relic compared to modern tech, but it remains a priceless family heirloom. Knowing that information is half the battle, Luca instantly burns every detail of the legendary machine into his memory like a photograph. Meanwhile, miles away in a sun-dappled, secluded forest, Hollis makes a quiet pilgrimage. His companion questions why the powerful Custoria elders are hidden away in the middle of nowhere instead of ruling from the capital. Hollis explains it is entirely by design. Retired veterans isolate themselves to act strictly as advisors, ensuring they never overshadow the current head of the family. And as they step through the massive trees, they finally reach the elders' hidden sanctuary. Hollis brings Luca to the Grand Silver Moon Manor to formally present him to the 7 elders of the Custoria family. The captain casually mentions that just surviving long enough to become an elder in this ruthless family is proof of their terrifying power. Even though the majority of them opposed bringing an orphan into their bloodline, Hollis brushes it off, making it clear that his word is absolute. Pressing a hidden switch, Hollis opens the way to a surreal, misty chamber where the armored and hooded elders reside. They immediately scrutinize the boy, with one chillingly noting that Luca looks like a child ruthless enough to kill his own parents just to survive. Hollis formally introduces him as Lucas, and an imposing figure summons the boy closer. Looming over him, the elder delivers a dark blessing, warning Luca that he must consume the chaos of his new life before it overwhelms him, even if it tears his throat to shreds. Unfazed by the grim advice, Luca takes it as a direct warning about the unseen threats within the family, and confidently replies that he fully plans on surviving. As the elders prepare to move on a highly classified family business, one suggests dismissing the boy. But to everyone's surprise, Hollis insists that Luca stays. The decision sets off alarm bells in Luca's head. As a secret watcher for Kinuan, he knows he's a potential spy, leaving him to wonder what twisted game his new adoptive father is playing by letting him sit in on their most guarded secrets. Luca's tense 3-day stay at the Custoria estate is finally coming to an end. He's still chewing on the cryptic advice he received to find his own answers, but right now, he just wants to pack up his gear and leave this snake pit of a family behind. Leaving is never that easy. On his way out, he runs into Emilio, the sadistic young son of his adoptive brother, Nicholas. The kid is pointing a loaded gun dead at him, giggling that his dad told him low-class filth like Luca could dodge bullets. Luca casually reminds the brat that he's technically his uncle and warns him to put the toy down before he gets a spanking. The kid is an absolute psychopath and actually pulls the trigger. The bullet whizzes past and Luca doesn't even flinch. He knew the boy's aim was trash. Pissed off that his target didn't dance for him, Emilio tries to fire again, but our hero isn't playing games anymore. In a flash, Luca closes the distance, disarms the brat, and terrifies him into a sobbing mess, coldly telling the kid to run and tell his daddy that his new uncle tried to kill him. Right on cue, Nicholas storms into the grand hall. Seeing his son bawling his eyes out, Nicholas draws his own weapon and glares daggers at Luca. As the boy cowers behind his father, Nicholas steps directly into Luca's path and demands to know what the hell is going on, a dangerous snarl creeping across his face. The tense situation with Nicholas Custoria finally clicks into place for our hero. Nicholas had just used his young son, Emilio, to stage a fake conflict, using the boy's mistake with a gun as the perfect excuse to pull Luca aside without raising suspicion. Leading Luca into an empty hall, Nicholas drops the hostile act and smirks, noting that everyone outside now assumes they are having a bitter argument. Luca is disgusted that Nicholas would risk his own child's life just to avoid rumors of an alliance. But Nicholas brushes it off, chillingly echoing their adoptive father Hollis Custoria by stating that children are completely replaceable. The Custoria family's cold-blooded nature runs deep. Heading down to business, Nicholas reveals he already knows about Luca's secret alliance with Jizzle, but warns him he is backing the wrong horse. Nicholas predicts that their brother Jupe is poised to become the next head of the family, and if that happens, Nicholas will be executed as a political obstacle. Intrigued by the sheer desperation, Luca takes a seat and tells his brother he has his full attention. Nicholas lays out the family's fractured politics. Even though Jupe lacks their father's overwhelming presence, he has the most backing because the family is deeply divided. The elders are split between wanting a pure soldier, preferring Jupe's blunt nature over Nicholas's scheming, or simply being too terrified of Hollis to ever let another tyrant take his place. Flip the script, Nicholas proposes a brilliant, twisted strategy. He wants Luca to publicly fake a massive feud with him. By playing the enemy, Luca will automatically absorb the supporters who want a soldier and siphon off anyone who hates Nicholas, effectively crippling Jupe's political base. Luca is genuinely impressed by the ruthless calculation, finally understanding why Jizzle warned him that Nicholas is a mirror image of their terrifying father. Testing the waters, Luca asks what happens if he just takes the head position for himself once he absorbs all that power. Nicholas doesn't flinch, confidently stating that even if Luca took the throne, he would still need a master strategist to actually run the empire. Luca can't help but laugh, realizing that the nobles he used to envy from the slums are all trapped in their own deadly games. Sealing the pitch, Nicholas offers his full political backing and even dares Luca to tell Jizzle everything, knowing the deal is simply too good to pass up. Sometime later on a transport aircraft, Luca watches his adoptive father, Hollis Custoria, tirelessly working at the ship's glowing console. He remembers the warnings he received that disrespecting his new brothers would cost him the family's acknowledgement, but observing Hollis now, Luca realizes the man is completely different as a father than he was as a captain. He wonders if he's missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Suddenly, the ship's systems violently glitch out and the aircraft forcefully alters its course. But Hollis doesn't even blink. He calmly reveals that the ship has been hacked exactly as he expected. He warns Luca that terrorists will be waiting at their inevitable crash site, but with backup arriving in 10 minutes, they just need to survive until then. Luca is blown away by the captain's mastery over electronic warfare, watching as Hollis casually smashes the compromised console with his mechanical hand. As the plummeting aircraft deploys a pink shock absorption gel to cushion their impact, Hollis tests Luca's tactical awareness, asking what he makes of this setup. Surrounded by the protective gel, Luca pieces it together. The captain is intentionally acting as a decoy. Hollis confirms it, revealing this elaborate crash is all a ploy to help the clumsy dorm leader, Barbara, gain deeper trust within the Nemesis terrorist organization. Before Luca can even process his exasperation at Barbara being involved again, the aircraft violently slams into the earth. Meanwhile, miles away, a massive explosion rips through the barren wilderness, sending a military transport crashing into the dirt. A lone guardsman stumbles from the wreckage, panicking over how he and his captain are supposed to survive for 10 minutes in an open field with zero cover. But Hollis Custoria, captain of the Imperial Guard, isn't worried in the slightest. As the enemy forces converge on their downed vehicle, Hollis simply notes that it's a beautiful day for a clear line of sight. His cybernetic eye glows a piercing red, syncing directly with a massive orbital weapons platform hovering high above the Earth. With a single command, Hollis calls down a devastating blue energy blast from orbit, obliterating the incoming threat in a blinding pillar of light. The guardsman watches in pure awe, finally realizing that the captain didn't just crash by accident. He intentionally made himself a decoy to draw the enemies out into the open. Grinning through the smoke, Hollis tells his subordinate to pay close attention, because it's not every day you get to watch the captain of the Imperial Guard go to work. Luca's strategic mindset wasn't just theory. It was forged by watching the absolute peak of human strength in action. He remembers a time on the battlefield with his adoptive father, Captain Hollis Custoria. Surveying a dusty wasteland, Hollis notes how many enemies survived their initial assault, then casually tells Luca he has exactly 21 seconds to spot them. But before Luca can even track the targets, Hollis fires, wiping out soldiers completely out of visual range. Luca is completely stunned, realizing the captain is firing based purely on satellite coordinates. Hollis casually confirms it, explaining that once you reach his rank, the Empire hands you the keys to your own military-grade satellite. Luca's mind is blown by the sheer scale of it, an entire orbital processor acting as a personal tactical weapon for just one man. Suddenly, the enemy forces lock onto their position and they aren't messing around. They completely ignore the small fry and immediately target Hollis, screaming out for the head of Akresh's hound. Heavily armored mechs and elite soldiers swarm the wasteland, desperate to take down the legendary captain. But Hollis just flashes a savage grin and readies his massive spear. He declares he'll handle the mechs himself, giving Luca one simple, terrible instruction: just don't die. When Luca complains about the incredibly vague command, Hollis tells him that if he ever wants to reach the top, he has to learn how to survive bad orders. Because, as Hollis puts it, the world is full of people who do wrong and you can't expect them to play fair. With that, the captain launches himself directly into the enemy swarm like an absolute demon. He effortlessly tears through their armored ranks, swinging his weapon with terrifying force and leaving nothing but a bloodbath in his wake. But theory is one thing and a live battlefield is another. Luca is immediately thrown into a massive, chaotic skirmish on a desolate plain. Hollis had ordered him to hang back and just watch, but the bloodbath unfolding in front of him makes sightseeing impossible. The enemy forces are completely unhinged, firing blindly and slaughtering their own comrades just to land a hit. Refusing to get caught in the crossfire, Luca's eyes glow with digital patterns as he activates Akai's Victima, overclocking his brain to map the chaos, lock onto 3 distant targets, and open fire. Suddenly, a spiky-haired rebel charges through the barrage, dodging Luca's bullets without even looking. Luca instantly recognizes the movements. This guy is using the rebels' bootleg version of the Akai's tactic. To hold his own against mechanized soldiers without a mech body of his own, the rebel has to be highly skilled, but Luca notices a fatal flaw in his rhythm. Deciding to test his theory, Luca rushes in and locks the enemy in a brutal grapple. Just as he predicted, the moment the rebel is grabbed, his brain freezes in panic. Luca mercilessly slices him down, coldly noting that a true Akai's master would have severed their own arm just to escape. As the dust settles and the remaining forces mop up the battlefield, Luca reveals to his cyborg ally Gabriel that the nemesis terrorist Rick Kaiser was watching the whole fight from a distance, just waiting to pick Luca off if he got injured. When Gabriel asks why they didn't just set a trap to catch him, Luca explains the brutal reality of their shadow war. Catching one terrorist wouldn't destroy Nemesis, and worse, it would tip them off and get Barbara killed for leaking their intel. Blasting away the last of the debris, Luca bitterly remarks that he has to play the long game, because to the Empire's higher-ups, he's still just a replaceable cog in the machine. Staring down the captain, Luca has a chilling realization about the Empire's true hierarchy. Even a high-ranking powerhouse like Hollis is just a replaceable pawn. In this brutal system, countless lives are completely expendable as long as they protect the one irreplaceable figure at the very top. Despite clawing his way out of the slums, our hero realizes he's still just another disposable cog in the Imperial war machine. Soon after, Luca makes his official debut as the adopted son of the Custoria family. The other cadets swarm him, begging for the secret behind his miraculous rags-to-riches success story. But inside, Luca feels absolutely sick. He only accepted Hollis's protection to avoid being thrown away, but now he knows that safety is a complete illusion. There's no free lunch in the Empire, and Luca knows he will soon have to pay the price for his new noble status by taking on a deadly mission to uncover Kinuan's true identity. To prepare, he pushes his body to the absolute breaking point. He dives into endless combat training and endures agonizing, bloody upgrades to his cybernetic implants, leaving piles of discarded, blood-stained metal in his wake. With less than a year left before he officially graduates as an Imperial Guard, Luca prepares for his final hurdle, a dangerous return to the lower-class zone. But just as he gears up to face his past, a mysterious figure steps onto the Academy grounds. Rumors are spreading through the Imperial Guard lounge like wildfire. Luca overhears the other cadets whispering about his friend Ile Kartika. Ile was never the ambitious type, always hiding his true potential behind a carefree smile. But word on the street is that he just fought his older brother, paralyzed him for good, and is now the undisputed favorite to inherit the Kartika family. As Ile finally returns to the Academy after his long absence, Luca knows exactly what triggered this sudden, ruthless power grab. Ilay is still haunted by Lillian Ramons. He gave everything to save her, only to lose her in the worst way possible, forced to end her life with his own bullet. That kind of trauma changes a man forever. Spotting Luca on the stairs, Ilay flashes his usual grin, teasingly asking if he should start calling him by his fancy new noble name, Lucaus. Luca brushes it off, insisting he's still just Luca, and the two head off to drop their gear and catch up. Looking out over the city skyline, Luca asks if the rumors about him pulverizing his brother are true. Ilay casually confirms it was a formal duel, admitting he provoked his hot-headed brother by stealing his girlfriend. He jokes that it was easy because he's better looking, though he does feel a little bad about it. Luca just shakes his head, calling him the absolute worst. Flipping the script, Ilay asks how Luca is handling being adopted into the terrifying Custoria family. Luca admits his life has always been a tightrope walk. He knows that even the most gifted walkers eventually fall headfirst, but that doesn't mean he can just stop moving forward. Hearing that, Ilay stands up, his eyes burning with a new resolve. He declares that he's done running. To fix his family's deep-rooted issues, he has to become its head. And if the empire itself is broken, he's going to climb high enough to fix that too. Knowing just how insanely skilled Ilay is, Luca doesn't doubt him for a second. He silently welcomes his friend back to the grind, warning him that if he wants to conquer his family, he's going to have to work twice as hard. Ilay refuses to back down from the challenge. Smiling confidently, he tells Luca that they should team up and work 4 times as hard instead, reminding him that this is exactly what they became cadets for. Luca pulls his friend up and clasps his hand, knowing full well that if he wants to survive the dangerous political tightrope he's walking, he's going to have to fight like hell. Proving he isn't all talk, Ilay ships out the very next day, taking on a brutal mission to subdue hostile indigenous lifeforms on the planet Novus. Meanwhile, Luca heads back down into the gritty underbelly of the city. He immediately gets into a scrap, effortlessly shattering a street thug's mechanical arm and sending him running. Smiling, our hero notes that the chaos makes him feel right at home. But when he checks his phone, he sees a missed call from Gabriel, the cyborg arena fighter who swore loyalty to him. Luca tries calling back, but gets no answer. Sensing something is wrong, Luca tracks Gabriel down and pushes open the door to his hideout. Inside, he finds the massive cyborg sprawled out on the floor in a pool of his own blood, his armor completely trashed. Luca assumes the battered fighter is dead, but Gabriel manages a weak twitch, groaning that he isn't finished just yet. Later, Luca heads up to a high-end Imperial workshop to pick up a custom order. The eccentric craftsman excitedly presents him with his new weapon, and the moment Luca grips the hilt, he realizes it's an absolute masterpiece. The intense strain forces him to keep his power output maxed out just to hold it, exactly the kind of brutal training tool he asked for. To top it off, the craftsman even added a perfect, unrequested blade. Smirking at the lethal new addition to his arsenal, Luca dubs the sword Crucis. Picking up his newly crafted gear from the Imperial workshop, Luca is handed a custom gun named Ruina, an ancient word for total annihilation. The eccentric craftsman tells him to treat his new deadly weapons like lovers, and Luca knows he will need every ounce of their power. He realizes that when the day comes to face an enemy vastly stronger than himself, these weapons and his improvised Akai's tactic will be his only lifeline. Later, Luca visits the hospital where his cyborg ally, Gabriel, is recovering from brutal gunshot wounds to the chest and stomach. Luca immediately deduces the shots weren't meant to kill, but to send a message. Gabriel confirms it was a violent warning from local gangs who are forcing unaffiliated fighters to pick a side in an escalating turf war. When Luca points out that staying solo in the slums is a death sentence, Gabriel stubbornly refuses to ever work for those street thugs, even if it kills him. Annoyed by the lecture, Gabriel asks why Luca is suddenly visiting after months of silence. Luca cryptically mentions he has business to handle, telling Gabriel to load up on the strongest painkillers and wait for his return tomorrow. Gabriel yells after him, furious at the cold treatment right after surgery, but Luca leaves without a second thought, knowing the hospital's heavily armed guards will keep the cyborg safe from the street gangs. Stepping back out into the neon-drenched streets of the lower-class zone, Luca shifts his focus back to his espionage mission. He needs to uncover exactly what his instructor, Kinwan, was doing down here. Remembering that Kinwan was close with Aleph, the old manager of the arena, Luca hopes that retracing the Watcher's steps will give him the leverage he needs to survive the deadly political games of the Custoria family. Wandering through the dark, hopeless alleys, Luca is momentarily lost in thought until he realizes his feet have unconsciously carried him right back to his old neighborhood. But his nostalgia is instantly shattered when he overhears 2 men in the shadows, laughing about how the local orphanage director is pocketing the donation funds again, the very same orphanage Kinwan just supplied. The corrupt orphanage director is back at it, happily pocketing the massive donation funds while the starving kids watch helplessly through the window. He smugs to himself that the world never changes and that a bunch of weak, hungry kids could never stop him anyway, but he's about to learn that karma hits hard. A hooded figure steps into the alleyway and the director's hired thugs immediately try to shake him down. Big mistake, it's Luca. With a flash of his glowing red eyes and a blur of brutal, bone-crushing strikes, our hero completely dismantles the thugs in seconds, leaving the director shaking in his boots. Recognizing the boy he used to starve, the director drops to his knees, crying and begging for his life. He pathetically reminds Luca that he gave him a few extra rations right before he left the orphanage. Luca coldly admits that those extra scraps are the only reason he isn't snapping the man's neck right now. The director swears he's a changed man who just needed to be punished, but Luca isn't taking any chances. He delivers a brutal crack to the man's jaw anyway, ordering him to make sure the kids eat their fill tomorrow before walking off into the neon-lit alley. The next day, Gabriel is whining about the pain from his recent gunshot wound, but Luca is in a surprisingly good mood. He realizes that finally getting enough sleep and violently smashing in the face of someone he deeply hates does absolute wonders for his mental health. The two head over to the underground arena to meet with Aleph. The bouncer is confused to see Gabriel walking around so soon after taking a bullet, but he quickly recognizes the guy standing next to him. He realizes it's the same kid who humiliated Gabriel in the ring months ago under the alias Good Boy. They head down the stairs and are warmly greeted by Aleph, the arena's manager, who praises Gabriel for his street clout. Aleph then welcomes Good Boy back to the underground, but our hero finally drops the alias. He tells Aleph to call him by his real name, Luca, ready to get down to his own business now that Kinuan isn't hovering over his shoulder. Luca tells Aleph he's here on personal business and suggests the manager dismiss his armed bodyguards. Aleph smugly refuses, claiming he needs the muscle since he isn't much of a fighter himself, and warns Luca not to use his connection to Kinuan as a free pass to act arrogant. But our hero just corrects him on his name and gives Gabriel a simple order to block the door. The room instantly erupts into chaos as the bodyguards draw their weapons and open fire. Gabriel tanks the assault with his massive cyborg frame, while Luca moves like an absolute blur, effortlessly dodging bullets and dismantling the armed men before they even realize what hit them. In a matter of seconds, the elite guards are completely wiped out, leaving a stunned Aleph to sigh and wonder why he even pays for security. Later, as heavy rain washes over the neon-lit city, Gabriel undergoes some much-needed mechanical repairs, groaning about his joints aching because he skipped his waterproofing maintenance. Meanwhile, Luca reflects on how incredibly useful his Castoria family name has become. Intimidated by the young Imperial cadet's overwhelming display of power, Aleph agrees to help him gather information, casually brushing off the fact that Luca killed his friend Tora since the underworld is a dog-eat-dog business anyway. To decide if Aleph is trustworthy enough to join his official retinue when he comes of age next year, Luca digs into the arena's bloody history. He starts by investigating Tora, the previous owner, knowing he has to keep a close eye on Aleph while the manager tries to prove his worth. At the mechanic's shop, Gabriel throws a fit over the cost of waterproofing his cyborg body, but the eccentric mechanic Gilda warns that his performance will tank without it. Knowing the value of a top-tier fighter, Luca shuts Gabriel down and pays for a complete overhaul, sealing the deal over a batch of Gilda's dangerously industrial-baked cookies. Back to the investigation, Luca uncovers a chilling detail. When Aleph took over the arena, every single one of Tora's associates was wiped off the map, leaving only one survivor, a man named Ken Noma, who is currently locked up in a psych ward. Luca and Gabriel head out into the rain to question him, but they don't even make it to the hospital doors before a massive explosion rocks their car. As they scramble from the wreckage, Gabriel curses his still-healing gunshot wound. Spotting the attackers in gang colors, Luca immediately suspects his cyborg bodyguard is hiding something. The armed thugs scream that Gabriel chose the wrong side, accusing him of making a secret deal with Aleph and ignoring their warnings. Gabriel frantically denies it, but Luca finally pieces together exactly why this gang is hunting his man. Needing answers, Luca asks Gabriel for a spare pistol, casually mentioning that his own weapon is way too powerful to take these thugs alive. The gang leader sneers at their boss, Big Sis, sends her regards and opens fire. But Luca doesn't even flinch. His eye glows a menacing red as he calmly calculates the trajectory, ready to show them what a real monster looks like. Quiet doesn't last long before the hallway erupts into absolute chaos. A massive explosive shockwave rips through the corridor, sending attackers flying and forcing their weapons to misfire. But these thugs picked the wrong targets. Gabriel easily overpowers the ambushers with sheer brute force, holding the line while Luca calmly notes that their hired security detail is running late. When Gabriel grabs one of the surviving punks by the throat, the truth spills out. They were sent by Martina, the boss of the Lavian Rose gang. Gabriel assumes she's still furious that he rejected her offer to become her personal bodyguard, but the thugs reveal a hilarious twist. Martina is completely in love with him. She only wanted him to join her gang so she could treat his battle wounds, and was heartbroken when he partnered with Aleph instead. Not wanting to deal with a scorned gang boss's endless ambushes, Luca steps in and promises the thugs that Gabriel will pay Martina a visit soon. Honestly, our hero can't help but grin, highly curious about what kind of wealthy boss falls for a massive cyborg fighter. Leaving the ambush behind, Luca and Gabriel head to a shady neon-lit clinic in the pouring rain. They step inside a secure room to find Ken Noma, a former associate of Tora, the previous owner of the arena. Luca needs answers about Tora to help him track down his elusive instructor Kinuan. But one look at the kneeling, purple-haired man tells them everything. Aleph has tortured Ken so severely that his mind is completely shattered. He's practically a living corpse. With Ken completely unresponsive, Luca's hopes for an easy interrogation vanish, but he isn't giving up yet. He decides to use a temporary Imperial Guard remedy designed to jumpstart a damaged nervous system. As he prepares the treatment, our hero stays on high alert, remembering the intel. Ken is a lethal close combat expert, specifically deadly with a knife. If this remedy works, Ken might wake up swinging. To bypass Ken's damaged nervous system, Luca resorts to a brutal Imperial Guard field remedy, forcing the man's brain into overdrive through pure combat. He engages the purple-haired knife expert in a blistering spar, clashing blades amidst a shower of sparks to jumpstart his failing synapses. The violent therapy works and Ken's mind finally emerges from the fog. As Gabriel looms menacingly behind him to keep him in line, Luca demands intel on a secret acquaintance of Tora, the former gang boss. When Ken hesitates to spill his old crew's secrets, Luca offers a deal he can't refuse, a one-way ticket out of the hospital. Luca immediately orders Gabriel to stash Ken in a safe house, but he doesn't stop there. He tells the bewildered cyborg to gather trusted men because Gabriel is going to be the boss of a brand new gang. Luca knows that to survive the lower-class zone and match his enemies, he needs his own personal army. With time running out, Ken reveals a massive secret. Tora had a hidden backer who operated entirely outside the slums, known only to his absolute inner circle. The truth hits Luca like a freight train. Kinuan was Tora's backer. The instructor had built a gang to run unofficial missions from the shadows, which means Luca is perfectly reenacting Kinuan's dark past. Digging into the restricted archives, Luca confirms that Kinuan safely transitioned to an academy instructor right as Tora's empire collapsed. It's a chilling realization. If Luca walks away after his mission, Gabriel's new gang will inevitably crumble just like Tora's did. But as Luca stares at the data, he doesn't blame his mentor, because without Kinuan pulling the strings, a street rat like Tora would never have tasted power in the first place. To survive the Academy's brutal hierarchy and secure his own safe zone, Luca realizes he needs to adopt the ultimate survival mindset. He remembers Kinuan's cold philosophy: make your subordinates love you without loving them back, stay willing to expend anyone, and always be the strongest and craftiest in the room. If our hero wants to navigate this chaos, the person he has to become is exactly Kinuan. Right on cue, his instructor confirms that Luca has finally mastered the basics of the Akai's tactic, and it's time to move on to the next level. The Imperial Guard Physical Training Facility. Kinuan praises Luca's rapid growth, noting he's already reached the level of a Mista, a master capable of teaching the Akai's tactic to others. But Luca isn't here for a history lesson on long-lost hierarchies. He's itching for a fight, practically dying to beat his instructor to a pulp. Kinuan just laughs at the kid's nasty attitude, agreeing that it's always easier to learn by catching a beating rather than talking. Luca is confident. He knows Kinuan is a master, but assumes the old man's ordinary robotic body gives him a massive physical disadvantage. But the script instantly flips. Kinuan's right arm suddenly sparks with high-powered blue electrical energy, and he casually warns Luca to guard his head and torso unless he wants a trip to the hospital. Luca is stunned. Kinuan actually swapped his arm for a military-grade battle mech, and despite his ruined nervous system, his control is absolutely flawless. Knowing this is a rare opportunity to test his limits against a true monster, our hero powers up and launches his attack. Clash is over in a flash. Luca gets completely wrecked, sent tumbling through the air until he crashes flat on his back, staring up at the ceiling lights. He can't believe he lost again. Despite having every physical advantage, Kinuan effortlessly blocked his full-force strike with just one arm. Frustrated, Luca asks if the old man can see into the future. Kinuan just scoffs, firing back that if he had clairvoyance, he wouldn't be stuck dealing with this mess in the first place. Kinuan wraps up the brutal training session, telling Luca that the only way to truly master the Akai's tactic is to unlock his brain's untapped potential and steal the technique himself. When the exhausted instructor stumbles, our hero steps in and offers his shoulder to support him. As they walk back, they keep things casual, joking about girls and avoiding emotional attachments. But internally, Luca knows their bond is fragile. He realizes that as watchers bound to the Empire, they might one day be ordered to turn on each other, and he just hopes he won't be the one forced to execute Kinuan. Later, Luca heads to a gritty factory hideout in the lower-class zone. He's paying off a local crew to act as his private muscle, though he's totally unimpressed with the drunken slackers they've gathered. His contact complains that smuggling their target, a man named Ken Noma, out of the hospital has left him completely broke. Luca tosses him a loaded credit chip, tells him to introduce him to the crew as their new sponsor, and barks at the slackers to get back to work. Luca heads upstairs to check on their prize. The contact brags that he bribed the hospital staff so well that nobody even realizes Ken is missing. Impressed by the hustle, Luca pulls out a syringe. He injects the unconscious Ken, violently shakes him awake, and demands to know if the man recognizes him. Luca corners his main target, Ken Noma, and gets straight to work on his violent rehabilitation. He doesn't hold back, using a knife and his bare fists to snap the broken man back to reality. The two clash in a brutal sparring session that pushes Ken to his limits. Ken fights like a maniac, proving he was incredibly skilled before his hospitalization, but his weakened body eventually gives out and he collapses to the floor. Shocked that the heavy fog in his mind has finally cleared, Ken asks what kind of magic Luca used. Our hero casually reveals he just mixed a few drugs together, leaving Ken completely stunned by his unexpected medical expertise. Getting down to business, Luca demands to know who sponsored the late Tora in the lower-class zone. Ken complains about Luca's strict soldier attitude, but reveals that Tora's backer went by the name Noel, an alias that immediately makes Luca suspect Kinwin's involvement. Ken adds that Tora was never talented enough to run the arena on his own, meaning Noel was pulling the strings and siphoning the revenue. Before giving up the money trail, Ken asks Luca to turn a blind eye so he can finally get revenge on Aleph for ruining his life. But Luca shuts that down instantly, warning him that he's currently allied with Aleph and under Gabriel's protection, so any backstabbing will end badly. Ken swears he's trustworthy, though Luca knows better than to take a criminal at his word. Satisfied for now, Ken tells him to check Tora's old ledger for any shell companies starting with the letter B, since that's where Noel's dirty money ended up. But before Luca can act on the intel, agonized screams echo through the building. One of Gabriel's armored enforcers begs for his life as a newcomer in heels crushes his head into the floor, proving that the local gangs prefer to negotiate with their fists. After utterly humiliating the grunts, Luca asserts his dominance over the hideout. A higher-ranking woman with an eye patch tries to scold him for barging in, but quickly realizes she's outmatched. Luca leaves the battered thugs with a strict order to guard the place and stay sober while he and Gabriel head out to meet their real boss. As they navigate the neon-lit lower city, Gabriel explains the dangerous turf they're entering. It belongs to La Vie en Rose, a syndicate formed entirely by lower-class women for self-defense, meaning their boss is always a woman. Gabriel reveals he actually used to moonlight as their security, hired specifically because his massive cyborg build intimidated their enemies. Luca knows the stakes are razor-thin tonight. He can't let their leader, Martina, kill Gabriel or forcefully recruit him. If Luca loses his cyborg enforcer, his tenuous business alliance with Aleph at the arena will shatter and Aleph will sell him out in a heartbeat. They arrive at an ornate, lantern-lit headquarters where the eye-patch woman gives Gabriel a chilling warning. This time, he better not reject the diva. Stepping inside, the pair is immediately engulfed by a thick red mist. Luca realizes the overpowering incense isn't just for atmosphere, it's a narcotic designed to dull their senses. Before anyone can react, a gunshot shatters the tension and blood splatters across the room. But Luca flips the script instantly. Drawing his own weapon, he drops one of the armored thugs with a silenced shot and barks a lethal warning. If anyone twitches a finger, he'll blow their brains out. The chaotic standoff halts instantly when a commanding voice echoes through the red smoke, ordering everyone to stand down. A woman steps forward on a raised platform, elegantly fanning herself as she scolds her subordinates for being so rude to their guests. This is the diva herself, Martina, the boss of La Vie en Rose. The chaos grinds to a halt as Luca and Gabriel come face to face with the true leaders of the local syndicate. Gabriel drops in from above, completely covered in blood and ready for a bloodbath, while Luca keeps his gun trained dead on the executives. Leader, a white-haired woman known as Diva, steps onto the platform and demands to know who attacked her guests. Her subordinate quickly takes the fall, apologizing for acting out of line. Gabriel is furious at the ambush, but Luca tells him to stand down. Our hero knows Diva is just shifting the blame for her own assassination attempt, but he decides to play along to keep their mission on track. Diva then asks why a privileged noble like Luca is sticking his nose in the lower-class zone. When Luca tells her to back off, her subordinate introduces their syndicate as La Vie en Rose, warning him that his high-class status means absolutely nothing down here in the slums. They think he's just another arrogant kid playing hero. After a quick whisper from her subordinate, Diva sighs, turns on her heel, and orders Luca to follow her deeper into the compound. Inside her lavish private quarters, Diva cuts right to the chase with a single, massive demand. She wants Gabriel to become her lover and join La Vie en Rose. Luca is honestly stunned that a woman this beautiful is interested in his cyborg meathead. Diva assumes Gabriel works for the young noble, but Luca quickly clarifies that he's just a patron, a technicality Gabriel eagerly backs up to avoid being ordered around. Seeing an easy way out, Luca quietly suggests that Gabriel just date her temporarily to keep the gang off their backs. But Gabriel is absolutely horrified. When Luca points out that she's a total beauty, Gabriel drops a bombshell. Thanks to modern plastic surgery, Diva is actually older than his dead grandmother. He begs Luca to just kill him instead of forcing him to date a fossil, leaving our hero clutching his head in frustration. Realizing Gabriel would literally rather die than romance the syndicate leader, Luca pinches the bridge of his nose and steps up to the plate. He looks Diva dead in the eye and declares that Gabriel has already started his own gang, meaning he is officially off the market. To legitimize his new crew, Luca sets up a meeting with Martina, the eccentric leader of the La Vie en Rose faction. While she doubts the young cadet's underworld knowledge, Luca brings Aleph along to smooth the negotiations. But Martina's attention quickly shifts to the massive cyborg, Gabriel, promising him the world if he stays by her side. Gabriel is absolutely terrified. He practically begs for mercy, completely overwhelmed by her intense advances, which leaves Martina momentarily disappointed. Pivoting back to business, Martina admits she doesn't want an enemy as gutsy as Luca. But she hasn't given up on her new toy. She reveals a deeply twisted quirk, confessing that she gets a thrill when ugly men desperately cling to her. Watching the bizarre exchange, Luca realizes the wealthy elites just get weirder as they age. Thanks to Alepht's silver tongue, the alliance is forged. Gabriel's gang officially links arms with both the Arena and La Vie en Rose, a massive power move that will instantly attract ambitious recruits looking to climb the ladder. As a bonus, Aleph hands Luca an old accounting ledger, giving him a massive financial advantage in the underworld. As part of the deal, Martina lends Luca her subordinate, a woman named Grace, while Gabriel's crew agrees to run security for her faction. Walking the neon-lit streets, Grace questions if Luca actually trusts Aleph. Luca bluntly replies that he doesn't, but he trusts the erratic Martina even less. He knows Grace is only here to spy on him, but since she's a former Imperial Guard cadet, her elite combat skills make her infinitely more useful than the street thugs they already have. Stunned that a teenager could overpower her so effortlessly, Grace asks if Luca comes from a military family. She fiercely defends her own pride, stating she was at the top of her cadet class and didn't quit because she lacked skill. When Luca presses for the real reason she dropped out, she refuses to share her private affairs. Amused by her stubbornness, Luca casually dismisses her for the day, leaving the former top-tier cadet flustered as she heads off. Luca needs to track down the phantom companies Kinnuan uses to launder money, but the lower-class zone's database is a mess of corrupted files and dummy data. To cut through the noise, he realizes he needs access to the Empire's highly restricted central network. No other choice, he taps into an expensive, secure line and calls his adoptive brother, Nicholas Castoria. Nicholas is a high-ranking government official, and while he can't just hand over his access codes, he agrees to run the list of businesses himself. He asks if this little side project will help Luca climb the family ranks, and when Luca confirms it might, Nicholas promises the results in 2 hours. Luca knows his brother will eventually demand payback with interest, but right now, he just needs the intel. After surviving 3 straight days of non-stop, life-or-death battles against gangsters, cyborgs, and underground elites, Luca's brain is completely fried. He collapses onto his bed, praying that no one calls him so he can finally get some sleep. The universe has other plans. A notification chimes, pulling up the cadet mission logs, and Luca is stunned to see his friend Ile's name flooding the screen. Ever since the tragic death of his love, Lillian, Ile has been throwing himself into a reckless rampage, completing an insane number of trivial missions just to keep moving. Realizing he hasn't seen his friend in days, Luca decides to take the initiative and track him down. Before he can even leave, the other cadets swarm him. They warn Luca that Ile is on track to break the all-time record for trainee missions and might even steal his spot at the top of the class. The cadets start mocking him, assuming that since Luca was adopted by Captain Hollis Castoria, he's just coasting through the academy on his new noble status. Luca just stares at them, knowing these sheltered kids have absolutely no clue about the bloodbaths he's been surviving in the slum. Reflecting on his bloody new life, Luca wishes he could just be a mindless weapon, pulling the trigger on command without having to judge friend from foe. But in this treacherous world, one wrong step means execution. He refuses to back down, vowing to claw his way up and become just as ruthless as Kinnuan and Hollis if that's what it takes to survive. Back at the academy, his new status is already paying off. Noble cadets who used to look down on him are now walking on eggshells, nervously apologizing for not seeing him around. Luca plays it cool, claiming he just hasn't slept much, but internally he is thrilled. He realizes this tiny taste of authority is just the beginning, and he plans to snowball it into absolute power. Later, he drops by the personal maintenance rooms and finds Ile covered in blood and mechanical grease. Luca points out that the young noble is overworking himself, but Ile just laughs it off. He admits he got a late start and has to push himself to the absolute limit if he wants to catch up to our hero's level. Luca knows he hasn't exactly been slacking either, but his recent clandestine missions are completely different from direct arena combat. Watching Ile's insane progress, Luca realizes he needs to figure out the next step for his dangerous Akai's tactic before he gets left behind. Ile flashes a tired but genuine smile, joking that becoming Luca's friend was totally worth it if it means getting checkups from the top cadet. Luca just smirks and calls him an idiot, but Ile isn't just grinding for nothing. He motions for Luca to follow him, eager to show off his latest prize. Leads Luca to containment chamber holding a captured mech beast, a rare metallic creature from Novus. Ile explains that despite being made entirely of machinery, these beasts have internal structures as complex as living organisms, complete with electromagnetic shields that make them incredibly hard to capture alive. Luca asks if it is connected to the ancient arcane civilization, and Ile admits there is a high chance, especially since these machines can somehow grow and reproduce on their own. Staring at the mechanical monstrosity, the two friends share a grin. The academy is a viper's nest, but with Ile pushing his limits and Luca snowballing his newfound authority, they are both gearing up to flip the entire hierarchy on its head. Meanwhile, the researchers examining Gabriel doubt the deadly cyborg can ever be tamed. Hollis informs Luca that his mechanical bodyguard is being transferred to the Emperor's personal research lab, though Luca bluntly points out that it sounds a lot more like a prison transfer. Changing the subject, Hollis presents Luca with a rare gift to celebrate his official adoption into the Castoria family, a commander's dagger called Graken Butt. Forged from the bones of an extinct alien beast, the blade pulses with a strange, magic-like energy when struck. Hollis explains the name translates to immortality, admitting it wasn't easy to part with such a priceless weapon, but Luca promises to put it to good use. Later, alone in the quiet of his room, Luca examines the glowing blade. In a universe slowly marching toward destruction, he reflects on how fleeting life is and why people desperately cling to the dream of eternity, quietly realizing this dagger is the first truly meaningful gift he has ever received. But sentimentality won't help him survive the Empire's deadly politics. Checking his device, Luca reviews a data file sent by his new adoptive brother, Nicholas. The intel is flawlessly detailed, exposing a phantom company and verifying the identities of everyone involved, proving Nicholas is incredibly efficient when it comes to gathering underworld secrets. Viewing the latest intel, Luca is seriously impressed with his new adoptive brother, Nicholas Castoria. Nicholas has already mapped out the shady phantom company's funds and promises to track down their final destination within days. Luca realizes that if he actually ends up taking over the Castoria family one day, Nicholas would make the perfect advisor. He decides to sit back and wait for the final report, but that report never comes. Out of nowhere, a grim notice drops: Nicholas is dead. Standing in the pouring rain at Nicholas's funeral, Luca listens to the official story. Authorities claim it was a freak accident, stating that a flying vehicle fell from the sky and crushed Nicholas on his way home. Luca isn't buying it. The timing is way too perfect to be a coincidence. If Nicholas was silenced right before delivering the intel, it means he found the final destination of those ghost company funds, and the truth is dangerous enough to get a high-ranking official assassinated. Luca is eaten alive by guilt, wondering if his investigation got his new brother murdered, or if it was just a ruthless power play ordered by their rival brother, Jupe. Knowing he has to get ahead of the fallout, Luca resolves to come clean to Hollis about his secret deal with Nicholas. If he waits too long and the truth comes out, he could be framed as an accomplice. Plus, if his ruthless instructor, Kinuan, is somehow tied to this murder, even the captain of the Imperial Guard will have to step in and interrogate him. But before Luca can make his move, a hand grabs his arm in the rain. It's Giselle Castoria. Pulling him aside, she reveals that the pieces aren't adding up. She tells him Nicholas's death makes no sense right now, and more importantly, she is certain that Jupe isn't the one pulling the strings. Back out in the rain, Giselle's suspicion deepens, knowing Jupe isn't smart enough to pull off Nicholas's murder alone. She asks Luca if he knows anything, but our hero's poker face is flawless, and he smoothly deflects the question. He warns her that she should be worrying about Jupe instead, especially since she humiliated him so recently. Speak of the devil, Jupe suddenly interrupts, grinning under his umbrella as he asks what his dear siblings are whispering about. Luca covers their tracks, claiming he was just asking for advice on funeral etiquette since he is new to high society. Jupe plays along with a sickly sweet smile, offering to help them however he can. But the pleasantries drop fast when Jupe warns them to bury any thoughts of betrayal if they want him to overlook their history. Giselle snaps at him for being so disrespectful before the funeral is even over, but Jupe just mocks her for sneaking off to conspire behind his back. Deciding he has heard enough, Luca steps up and stares Jupe down, reminding the noble that unlike Nicholas, they are both soldiers. He coldly declares that if he takes Jupe down, it will be purely through superior skill, leaving the arrogant heir trembling with rage at the blatant challenge. Jupe is about to put the street orphan in his place, but a subordinate interrupts with an urgent summons. Captain Hollis wants to see Luca immediately. Swallowing his pride, Jupe tells our hero to go, but promises he will not forget this insult. Inside the estate, Luca finds his adoptive father waiting in the shadows. Hollis calmly warns him not to provoke Jupe so much, prompting Luca to ask if he was only summoned to prevent a family brawl. But the captain's voice turns dead serious as he orders Luca to shut the door tight. In a blur of motion so fast Luca's heightened senses do not even register it, Hollis appears right in his face, demanding to know exactly why his son is dead. Sweating under the monstrous pressure, Luca realizes one wrong lie right now could cost him his life. Staring down our hero's overwhelming aura, the veteran sergeant freezes in pure terror, realizing Luca could have killed him before he even blinked. Flashback reveals the dark truth behind this military operation. Earlier, Luca reported to Hollis that after tracing funds from a gang backed by Kinuan, he had asked his adoptive brother Nicholas to investigate the Ghost Company, a move that got Nicholas assassinated. Despite the heartbreaking loss of his eldest son, Hollis remains fiercely composed, telling Luca he fully trusts him to take over the mission as both a skilled subordinate and his true son. Hollis warns that the enemy must be deeply rooted in the Empire's high bureaucracy to have tracked Nicholas's secure database history, meaning the assassins will definitely come for Luca next. But our hero doesn't flinch. Knowing that Nicholas's death proves they are striking the heart of the rebellion, Luca vows to use his late brother's data to track Kinuan's dirty money and rip the corruption out by its roots. Following the funeral, Hollis deliberately holds off on interrogating Kinuan, choosing to quietly bide his time. With the official mourning period over, Luca finally heads back to his secret underground hideout, the headquarters of Gabriel's gang. He walks in on absolute chaos, finding Gabriel furiously throwing one of his own men across the room for secretly getting high on the job. Spotting Luca, the bruised thug begs his master to save him, but the cyborg mercilessly slams the man's head into the floor. Annoyed, Gabriel demands to know why Luca has been ignoring his calls for days, to which our hero calmly replies that he was busy attending a family funeral. Luca has been busy securing his new noble status and commanding troops. A massive problem has brewed back at his base. Checking in with Gabriel, our hero finds the cyborg in a total panic. It turns out that while Luca was away, the man they were secretly guarding, Noma, has vanished without a trace. Gabriel explains that the hired muscle completely dropped the ball. One guard went missing entirely, and the other was found high out of his mind. Disgusted by the incompetence of the street thugs, Luca investigates the room himself and finds the heavy glass window completely shattered. But he quickly deduces this wasn't an outside hit. The room is far too high up for anyone to climb into, and an intruder using the front door wouldn't need to smash a window to escape. The only logical conclusion is that Ken broke out on his own. Realizing they need a massive information network to track the escapee down, Luca orders Gabriel to hit up their underworld contacts at La Vie en Rose. Gabriel instantly protests, knowing the steep price for their help. He'll have to spend the night with Martina, an older woman with a notorious appetite. But Luca has zero sympathy, coldly reminding the cyborg that it was his fault for hiring the useless guards in the first place. Cornered and desperate to make up for his blunder, Gabriel swallows his pride and makes the dreaded call. Meanwhile, Luca contacts Aleph, the manager of the arena, to loop him in on the disaster. Aleph rubs his temples in frustration, assuming Luca secretly moved Ken behind his back and warning him that he should have communicated better. Realizing he's unfairly taking the blame for the escape, our hero keeps his cool and promises to alert the manager the second they track the missing man down. Balancing his military duties with his clandestine operations, Luca gets a call from an underworld contact demanding that a rogue named Ken be brought in alive. Hanging up, Luca sighs, realizing he's racking up favors and debts with everyone in the city. But right now, he has more immediate discipline to hand out. On a secluded balcony, one of his underlings, Pugnose, drops to his knees and begs for mercy after a massive failure. With his loyal cyborg enforcer Gabriel standing by, Luca decides to spare the man's life, but not without a brutal lesson. He violently maims Pugnose, leaving him a bloody, wheezing mess, and coldly declares that as long as the man fears him, his hatred means absolutely nothing. The ruthless moment is cut short when Gabriel delivers grim news. The La Vie en Rose gang just found their missing operative, Baldy, dead on their turf. Arriving at the grisly crime scene, they find Baldy's artery slit with surgical precision. They immediately suspect Ken, but Gabriel points out that Ken was so badly injured he shouldn't even be able to walk. To uncover the truth, they pull the footage from a nearby security camera and project a holographic playback of the murder. The digital reconstruction reveals a wounded Ken stumbling into the alley. When Baldy moved in for the kill, Ken flipped the script, pinning Baldy to the wall by the shoulder and delivering a lightning-fast, fatal slash. As the playback fades, Luca steps into the physical alleyway, kneeling beside the bloodstains to examine a strange trace of pollutants left smeared against the wall. Back in the city, Luca stares down at the bloody aftermath of a brutal clash, his eyes fixed on the corpse of a recruit named Orgo. He realizes he completely misjudged the man. Orgo fought to the bitter end and completed his duty without hesitation. Knowing he owes a debt to more than just his adopted brother Nicholas now, Luca orders his cyborg bodyguard, Gabriel, to track down Orgo's family and ensure they are taken care of for life. There's no time to mourn. A report comes in regarding Noma, a man who was supposedly paralyzed but was just seen swinging knives like a seasoned killer. The intel suggests Luca's rehabilitation sessions miraculously cured him, but Luca knows a few therapy sessions don't magically fix a shattered body. When another report confirms a local drug dealer was found dead with his arteries brutally slashed, Luca realizes Ken has been hiding his true, lethal strength this entire time. Before he can piece it all together, an emergency transmission blares from Aleph, the manager of the arena. Panic drips from Aleph's voice as he screams that Noma just busted into the facility and is tearing the place apart. Hearing the chaos in the background, Luca wonders if Ken brought an entire gang with him, or if the madman is launching a solo assault on one of the most dangerous places in the city. Luca decides to figure out Ken's secrets on the way and hails a black taxi to rush to the arena. But in this city, a black taxi doesn't just pull up to the curb, it violently crashes right into them, sending debris flying everywhere just to make a pickup. Dusting himself off, Luca calmly tells the driver their destination and hops in to see Ken's true colors for himself. What follows isn't a drive, it's a natural disaster. The massive, heavily armored vehicle launches into the sky and violently plows through the city streets like a meteor. It literally crushes buildings, shatters the ground, and sends terrified civilians flying in its wake as it takes the absolute most direct and destructive route possible. Dust finally settles, and the taxi's automated system calmly announces their arrival at the arena. But black taxi drivers make a lot of enemies, and they absolutely will not unlock the doors until the fare is settled. As terrified bystanders cower from the towering vehicle, the system demands its payment. And in this brutal city, nobody wants to find out what happens to passengers who skip the bill. Meanwhile, far from the front lines of the fortress siege, Luca, his cyborg ally Gabriel, and an operative named Grace step into a completely massacred room. Gabriel offers to take point, but Luca insists on handling this himself, telling Grace to stay back. But Grace refuses, revealing that her boss, Diva, ordered her to keep Gabriel safe, a comment that leaves the hardened cyborg visibly disgusted. Crouching over the mangled bodies, Luca pieces together the slaughter. He realizes their target, Ken, killed a local drug dealer to steal and inject a massive lethal dose of combat stimulants, but something doesn't add up. Ken tore through heavily armed men using only a knife, a feat that requires way more skill than any slum gangster or first-year cadet should possess. Gabriel warns Luca to stay on guard, realizing they are walking into a meat grinder. Suddenly, a scream echoes out as one of the surviving thugs gets brutally stomped. Ken finally reveals himself, fully cybernetic and completely unhinged. Moving with terrifying speed, he launches a glowing projectile that tears through the room, dropping the remaining men to the floor in a pool of their own blood. Luca confronts him for breaking their previous deal. Ken just laughs it off, declaring he doesn't need Gabriel's gang's protection anymore. He holds a gagged hostage at his mercy, gloating that he's finally here for cold, hard revenge. Luca is stunned that Ken's mind is still intact after pumping his veins full of drugs, but he quickly formulates a plan. Since a dead man can't spill any secrets, our hero realizes he has no choice but to take this overpowered maniac alive. Luca's allies finally catch up to him, furious that he ran off into the fray without them. But our hero doesn't have time for a team huddle. He orders them to stay back, bluntly stating that they'll only get in his way because he plans to take the attacker Ken alive. When one of the men gets offended and tries to argue, a quick, brutal strike to the chest shuts him up, forcing the team to hang back and guard Gabriel instead. Ken, looming over his gagged captive, warns Luca that taking him alive is a pipe dream. With his eyes glowing a sickly yellow, the crazed fighter drops his scabbard and declares he's as deadly as a venomous insect. But Luca just smirks, relieved that his opponent isn't a total pushover. He draws his own blade, a glowing high-tech weapon humming with energy. Luca reveals his brand new toy, Crucis. It's a highly compressed gun forged into the shape of a sword, and he's been dying for a strong enough punching bag to give it a proper debut. Without missing a beat, Luca activates his Akai's tactic. His eyes glow blue as his perception expands, mapping every single object and movement in the office directly into his mind. Analyzing Ken's stance, Luca realizes the man must have been a top-tier soldier before whatever crippled him. Knowing his own cybernetics are outmatched by Luca's gear, Ken decides he has to strike first. He lunges, aiming to slice straight through the desk and sever Luca's arm in one brutal motion. But thanks to his heightened perception, Luca sees it coming perfectly, dodging the lethal strike with terrifying speed and countering with a heavy slash of his own. Skidding back, Ken is absolutely stunned. He realizes Luca didn't just dodge, he moved with impossible foresight. Recognizing the Akai's tactic, the pieces finally click into place for the attacker. He realizes Tora was nothing but a puppet boss, and Luca is the true mastermind running the arena. Ken couldn't care less about arena politics right now. Driven entirely by his thirst for revenge, he offers Luca a deal. Just give him 1 hour alone with the gagged and bloody Aleph and he'll walk away content. Luca casually agrees on the condition that Aleph consents. He looks down at the battered manager, who screams in muffled, panicked terror through his gag. Smirking, Luca tells Ken that it sounds like a hard no, before mercilessly calling the bleeding manager a crybaby. Deep in the underground fortress, Luca corners his target, a purple-haired rogue named Ken. While a hostage violently thrashes in a vat of dark liquid nearby, Ken arrogantly taunts our hero. But Luca isn't here to play games. He draws his blade, making it clear he has unfinished business with the arena manager Aleph and won't let anyone stand in his way. As the captive continues to drown in panic, Luca steps right up to the smirking swordsman. Staring Ken down, Luca finally pieces the conspiracy together. When Ken doesn't deny the accusations, it all clicks. Ken is secretly backed by Kinuan, and another operative named Tora was just a disposable shield used to cover their tracks. Because of this hidden relationship with Luca's own martial arts instructor, slicing Ken's head off is no longer an option. Realizing he has to take him alive, Luca launches forward, closing the distance in a blinding blur of motion to apprehend his target. But Ken is quick to catch on. He starts desperately dodging every single strike, knowing that if his weapon directly clashes with Luca's special blade, Crucis, it'll shatter instantly. Since Crucis relies heavily on the element of surprise, Ken's evasive maneuvers are completely neutralizing Luca's deadly advantage. Frustration boils over. As the underground room gets torn apart by their high-speed clashes, our hero briefly considers just ending Ken's life right there. He even manages to grab the rogue by the throat, the urge to snap his neck nearly taking over. Luca forces himself to snap out of it. Capturing Ken is too valuable an intelligence asset to waste on a temper tantrum. To pull this off without a lethal blow, Luca realizes he has to read much deeper into the flow of Ken's movements. He remembers Kinuan's old lessons about unlocking his brain's untapped potential beyond basic visual data. Pushing his mental limits, Luca activates this deep calculation mode, ready to completely break his opponent down. To gain the absolute upper hand, Luca pushes his brain's untapped potential to the limit, splitting his consciousness into 2 distinct mental spaces. His primary combat mind handles immediate physical reactions, while his new tactical mind builds a real-time, 3-dimensional simulation of the battlefield to predict his opponent's every move. But rewriting his thought process mid-battle slows him down just enough for his target. a fierce fighter named Ken, to launch a surprise attack, mocking our hero for getting distracted. Luca quickly refocuses, his tactical mind now fully optimized to capture Ken alive. As they clash in a flurry of blades, Luca's mental simulations run faster than reality. When Ken launches a desperate all-or-nothing strike, Luca just smirks. It's the exact same suicidal move Luca once used to survive against the terrorist Rick Kaiser, and with all the brutal experience he's gained since then, he knows exactly how to break it. Effortlessly slipping through the attack, Luca exposes Ken's completely defenseless neck and back. With a devastating counter, he viciously slams his opponent into the ground, neutralizing him in an instant and leaving him bound on the floor. Standing victorious in the bloody aftermath, Luca orders his loyal cyborg, Gabriel, to haul the captured Ken and the exhausted arena manager, Aleph, straight to the medical ward. Still catching his breath, Aleph can only stare in awe, completely stunned by the sheer brilliance of Luca's tactics. Luca's brutal combat prowess doesn't go unnoticed. Grace, a sharp subordinate of Diva Martina, figures out he's an Imperial Guard cadet based on his fighting style. Luca quickly shuts her down, deciding it's too dangerous to let her boss know his true identity, though he can't help feeling a little jealous of Diva for having such capable, loyal underlings. Looking ahead, Luca asks Grace if her gang, Levi and Rose, could take over the arena. But Grace rejects the idea, explaining that seizing it would paint a massive target on their backs and unite rival gangs against them to prevent a monopoly. With Gabriel lacking the skills to run it and Aleph severely injured, Luca realizes the arena is completely leaderless, and it's his own interference that caused this massive power vacuum in the lower-class zone. Sending Grace ahead to help Gabriel, Luca turns his attention back to the aftermath of his battle. He looks down at the broken blade of Ken Noma, the man he just defeated. Knowing that his own instructor Kinwin was the one who taught Ken the Akai's tactic, Luca realizes they were technically fellow students. He feels a twinge of regret, wishing he could have fought Ken in his peak condition with proper gear, rather than the desperate state he was in. But karma is ruthless. Luca shatters the remnants of the enemy's blade, offering a final, quiet farewell to the fallen warrior before walking away from the carnage. In the aftermath, Ken Noma is locked up in a detention hospital, but between his missing limbs, acute drug poisoning, and constant suicide attempts, getting any intel on Kinwin out of him proves impossible. Meanwhile, Aleph survives his surgery, but it's too late. The underworld is like a pride of lions, a weakened leader is instantly cast out. By the time Aleph wakes up, his surviving executives have already carved up the arena for themselves, sparking a brutal new turf war for control. But to Luca, that's no longer his problem. 3 days pass since the bloody incident, and the dust finally begins to settle over the shattered streets. For the blood-soaked chaos of the tunnels, we cut to a completely different kind of crisis. Gabriel is throwing a massive tantrum, absolutely traumatized after being dragged away the night before to deal with the boss of Levi and Rose. He aggressively slurps down a juice box, complaining that Luca is way too frigid, especially since the cyborg just took one for the team. Luca casually thanks him, but Gabriel insists he didn't suffer through that just for the payout. Luca realizes the hulking cyborg actually wants to be genuine friends, but in his mind, that's a dangerous line to cross. He remembers how his watcher mentor Kinwin treated his own subordinates as nothing more than disposable pawns. Luca coldly resolves that Gabriel must remain just as expendable, knowing that if they get any closer, he won't be able to ruthlessly use him as a tool when the time comes. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echo as a cloaked figure in a gas mask bypasses all their missing security and steps into the room. Luca instantly recognizes his adoptive sister, Jizzle, who pulls off her mask and complains about the stench. When a confused Gabriel asks who she is, Jizzle introduces herself as Luca's younger sister. The cyborg is incredibly hurt that Luca never mentioned her, but our hero just kicks Gabriel out of the room, realizing that if Jizzle came all this way in person, things must be deadly serious. Jizzle worries that Gabriel might eavesdrop, but Luca brushes it off, unintentionally showing Jizzle just how much he actually trusts the guy. Getting down to business, Jizzle slides over a highly classified data chip from their father Hollis, admitting even she doesn't know what's on it. Luca deduces it contains the missing Ghost Company funds, and since the enemy is likely a high-ranking official, the Imperial network is completely compromised. Hollis sending his most trusted daughter as a physical courier proves he's taking zero chances. When Luca asks about the political fallout back home, Jizzle admits that with both Luca and Nicholas out of the picture, their brother Jupe is rapidly seizing control of the Custoria family. The tension is heavy and Jizzle reaches for a bottle of liquor. Luca tries to warn her it's alcohol, but she brushes him off, declaring that they aren't children anymore and this isn't a conversation meant for fruit juice. Deep in a seedy bar in the lower-class zone, Jizzle Custoria knocks back a terrible drink and vents her frustrations. With her father Hollis and Luca constantly away on duty, her brother Jupe is rapidly seizing control of the family's allegiances. She admits she's completely powerless until she officially comes of age and can legally form her own retinue, and she makes it clear she already has a specific talented cadet in mind. While Luca analyzes the specs of a nervous system transmitter she brought him, the drunk and unsteady Jizzle suddenly loses her footing. But with lightning reflexes, Luca catches her by the waist before she hits the floor. When he insists on escorting her back to the safer, drone-patrolled areas of the city, she confidently pulls out a gun, bragging about her top marks in shooting class. But in a flash, Luca yanks the weapon right out of her grip and points it squarely at his own head. He bluntly reminds her that a single gun won't save her down here, and he refuses to let anything happen to her. Properly chastised, Jizzle pulls her hood up and apologizes for being a nuisance. She admits she only meant to hand him the data chip and leave, but got a little too excited about her first solo trip down into the slums. As they navigate the dark, oppressive alleys, Jizzle asks if this is really where he grew up. Luca's voice drops as he reveals that he never went out after dark because the kids who did simply vanished. Staring into the shadows of his past, he's hit by a chilling reminder of the stakes. Unlike Jizzle, he isn't true nobility, and if he makes a single mistake, this bottomless pit is exactly where he'll fall back into. As the dust settles in the underground fortress, one of his female companions playfully asks if she can come see him just for fun next time. She quickly gets flustered, masking her obvious crush with a flimsy excuse about not wanting to visit such a dirty place anyway. Luca knows exactly how she feels, but he coldly shuts the door on any romance. As an adopted member of the treacherous Custoria family, one tiny mistake could get him killed. He's seen firsthand how love broke his elite friend Ile, and he refuses to let emotions cloud his judgment. Pushing aside all distractions, Luca heads straight to the desolate outskirts of the Akvaran abandoned district. His adoptive father, Hollis, had sent him classified files tracking the missing funds from the arena's ghost companies. The trail leads right to these ruins, which used to house a premium underground security service called Dedrinin. Because they dealt exclusively in untraceable assets like artwork and intel, they were the perfect money laundering hub for the arena, and exactly why his brother Nicholas was so desperate to investigate this place. As Luca navigates the rubble, a seemingly harmless old man approaches, nervously offering to be his guide. But Luca doesn't hesitate for a second. He instantly launches a devastating kick straight at the man's head. The disguise shatters, revealing a grotesque, heavily modified cyborg with glowing red eyes laughing maniacally in the debris. Luca realizes the assassin must have undergone intense illegal surgeries to have the reflexes to survive a lethal strike, but he stands his ground. If nothing else, his brutal opening move will make anyone else hiding in the shadows think twice before trying their luck. With Ile safe for now, Luca pivots back to his main mission. Activating his digital interface, he locks onto his next target, the office of an informant named Dedrinin. Without hesitating, our hero leaps straight into the fiery, shattered ruins of the destroyed city. Navigating the desolate, debris-strewn streets, he finally tracks down the right building. Brushing the dust off a worn map with his armored hand, he confirms Dedrinin is on the 9th floor and scales the ruined skyscraper in a series of massive, gravity-defying leaps. Stepping into the dark, wrecked corridors, Luca manages his expectations. He knows that whatever shadow organization had the power and resources to assassinate his adoptive brother Nicholas wouldn't be sloppy enough to leave hard evidence behind. Still, as he spots the nameplate for Dedrinin's office, he reaches out, determined to pull a lead from the wreckage. The enemy is already one step ahead. Desperate to scrub every last shred of evidence, they rigged the room to blow. A massive explosion instantly rips through the office, but Luca easily tanks the blast. Crouching amidst the smoke and rubble, he relentlessly rummages through the destroyed room, scooping up any surviving files he can get his hands on while wondering exactly how far these assassins will go to stop his investigation. While deciding to cover up his friend's brutal massacre, Luca pieces the real conspiracy together. He realizes that to completely destroy the evidence, the enemy will target the investigator. The lingering energy particles in the dust confirm his suspicion. If the terrorists were willing to kill his adoptive brother Nicholas, they are definitely coming for him next. And right on cue, a heavily armored figure steps out of the shadows. It's Rick Kaiser, the nemesis terrorist who previously broke Luca's neck and paralyzed his squadmate Felix. Rick taunts our hero, revealing he brought personal weapons specifically designed to put Luca in the ground. But Luca isn't the same rookie he used to be. He remembers the eccentric lab director, Gao Jin, explaining the mechanics of his new shock pistol, Ruina. It requires preheating and overheats after 2 shots without a cooling cartridge, but it packs the absolute highest destructive punch of any personal firearm. Luca whips it out and fires a massive blue energy blast right at the terrorist. Rick predicts the shot and dodges, but Luca uses the distraction to close the distance, swinging his red energy blade and slicing straight through Rick's heavy armor. Rick is genuinely impressed that Luca has grown strong enough to pierce his suit in such a short time, but Luca just glares back, promising he'll be even happier once he finally kills the man. The battle tears through the metallic building, lighting up the ruined cityscape with massive explosions. Luca's strategy is flawless. Because Rick's battle suit can't block the ruinous shock bullets, the terrorist is forced to dodge every single shot. By completely taking away Rick's ability to block, Luca makes the enemy's movements totally predictable. Rick lunges forward, warning Luca that he needs to be faster. But that's exactly what Luca wants. Our hero pushes Izakai's tactic to the absolute limit, cramming his brain with an overwhelming amount of sensory information. The massive flood of chemicals and hormones paralyzes all his unnecessary emotions, erasing mercy and fear, and leaving nothing but pure barbaric aggression as Luca fully transforms into a ruthless killing machine. Pushed to the absolute brink, Luca's overhauled suit kicks into overdrive, splitting his mind into pure combat logic. He feels zero disconnect from the heavy metal, it moves like his own flesh and blood. Declaring that he is leaving absolutely everything on the battlefield, he lunges forward with a massive, ground-shattering strike. Explosions rock the area as Luca unleashes a vicious barrage. Screaming that this is for his fallen comrade Felix, he drives his glowing blade right into the enemy of the Empire, sending the shadowy figure crashing hard into the rubble. Our hero revels in the absolute thrill of the hit. The adrenaline spikes so hard he can't help but smirk, his dark thoughts taking over as he imagines how much more satisfying it would be to sever the terrorist's head instead of just his arm. But the bloodlust fades when Luca realizes something is deeply wrong. His opponent, the nemesis terrorist Rick Kaiser, is on the level of a full-fledged Imperial Guard. Yet even after losing an arm, Rick still isn't using a single weapon. Suddenly, Rick's eyes glow, and he coldly congratulates Luca on his growth, offering to show off a very special talent. System warning flashes just a split second before Rick literally evaporates. This isn't just high-speed movement, he is teleporting. Reappearing in a blinding flash of blue energy, Rick launches a brutal counterattack, mocking Luca that cheap cliches about the Empire's corruption won't work on a selfish individualist like him. Taking the hit, Luca recognizes the terrifying ability immediately. It's the Force. Rick threatens to completely crush his brain, warning the cadet that he won't get lucky twice. Running the combat calculations, Luca realizes with grim certainty that he stands absolutely zero chance against a teleportation skill. Looming over him, Rick offers one final ultimatum: live as a machine or die as a human. Luca knows that refusing means instant death. Staring down the barrel of his own execution, he admits his past loyalty to the Empire was as naive as a child trusting their parents. He knows the system is deeply corrupt, but at the end of the day, the Empire and his adoptive father Hollis were the only ones who ever accepted him. Luca stands his ground. He knows the Empire is rotting from the inside, but to him, it doesn't matter. Hollis took him in from the slums. Jizzle became his family. Gabriel and his squad became his loyal comrades. Raising his blade, he proudly declares himself Lucaus Custoria, the sword and shield of the great Empire. One of the masked hunters mocks his blind loyalty, asking if he's really prepared to spend his entire life doing the Empire's dirty work only to be exterminated in the end. Without hesitation, Luca says he'll gladly die if it serves the Empire. Hunter just sighs and calls out to someone hiding in the shadows, complaining that the kid is a hopeless cause. A tall figure leaps down from the upper ledge and Luca's blood runs cold. It's Kinuan, his martial arts instructor and a fellow Akai's Demini watcher. Luca always knew this day might come, but seeing it confirms his worst fear. His mentor is an enemy of the state. Kinuan ignores the hunter and stares Luca down, demanding to know right here and now if his student is a friend or a foe. Gripping his sword tight, Luca gives a dangerously ambiguous answer, telling his master that he truly wants to be on his side. Hunter scoffs, wondering why Kinuan didn't just recruit Ile, since the noble is already completely disillusioned with the military. But Kinuan explains that while Ile is an outstanding soldier, he doesn't have the mental fortitude to wield the Akai's Victima. That dangerous technique requires the exact calculated mindset of a double agent, a role Luca was practically born to play. Still, the hunter warns that Luca can't walk the tightrope between two sides forever. Lowering his massive weapon, Kinuan takes a seat and calmly tells his student that it's time they had a little talk. As Ile's desperate laughter echoes through the blood-soaked hall, Luca's mind flashes back to another life-altering confrontation. The day he finally cornered his instructor, Kinuan. Determined to get the truth, Luca demands to know if the man is a friend or a foe. But Kinuan just gives a frustratingly ambiguous answer, claiming he only wants to be on Luca's side. Knowing his instructor can't dodge the question forever, Luca stands his ground. Sitting calmly in the shadows, Kinuan suggests they talk things out, hoping they might still reach an understanding. The masked nemesis terrorist, Rick Kaiser, interrupts, annoyed that Kinuan is wasting time trying to recruit the boy. But Kinuan asks for a favor as a friend to continue the chat, dropping a heavy truth. His time is running out and he desperately needs a successor to take over when he's gone. Luca flat-out refuses, making it crystal clear that he will never betray the Empire. Kinuan acknowledges his loyalty but warns Luca that his current path is a trap. Sure, becoming a full-fledged Imperial Guard comes with fame, wealth, and status, but the ultimate price is becoming a literal cog in the Empire's machine. Luca tries to argue that the guards just use the Legion mech suits as tools, but Kinuan shatters that illusion. He reveals the dark truth behind the military. The Legion system can't be controlled by a normal human brain. The brutal Imperial Guard training is specifically designed to strip away a soldier's humanity, turning them into an emotionless living computer to act as the suit's core processor. The Empire doesn't just want loyalty, it wants your very soul. Kinuan reminds him of Hollis's past advice, that a soldier needs irrational emotions to endure, leaving Luca wondering if his adoptive father was genuinely trying to protect him from this horrific fate. Still, Luca stands firm, declaring that even if the system is corrupt, it doesn't justify treason, and he refuses to let the Legion consume him. Seeing that Luca won't budge, Rick steps in and tells Kinuan to drop it, confirming the boy is a lost cause to their rebellion. Realizing his student won't carry on his legacy, Kinuan sighs in disappointment, and the two men prepare to end the conversation the hard way. Before the dust can even settle, a blade violently tears through flesh. Kinuan stands over Rick Kaiser's bleeding body, coldly stating that he didn't want to have to kill him here. Luca watches in absolute shock as his martial arts instructor stands over the dead terrorist. When Luca demands to know what just happened, Kinuan simply replies that he executed an enemy of the Empire. Reaching into the bloody remains, the instructor pulls out a glowing orb, noting that Rick tried to take the rare arcane artifact to his grave. Kinuan reveals a chilling truth. If Luca had accepted Rick's offer to join Nemesis, Kinuan would have let the terrorist live just to keep tabs on Luca as a collaborator. Stunned, our hero asks if his teacher is a double agent. Kinuan smiles, explaining that his hatred for the Empire's flaws is completely genuine, but destroying the dam just because of a few cracks would be absolute madness. The Empire cannot be allowed to fall. Gripping his weapon, Luca demands to know who this man really is. Before answering, Kinuan praises the young cadet. He knows Luca has been wading through a thick fog of chaos, completely uncertain of the future, yet he never lost his way. Even knowing the Empire is wrong and corrupt, Luca still chose to stand by it. Our hero silently admits his reasons weren't nearly that noble, but he keeps his guard up. And Kinuan drops the ultimate bombshell. Praising the founding father, he reveals that he works directly for the current emperor Yuri Kraxia. He's the emperor's eyes, the Akai's Demini. Speaking with absolute imperial authority, he commands Luca to kneel. But as our hero stares down the Watcher, he realizes he still doesn't know what's right or wrong in a world completely blinded by corruption and class warfare. Taking in the blood and despair around him, Luca realizes this sickening corruption isn't just an Empire problem, it is a universal constant. His mind flashes back to the day he was officially branded an Akai's Demini. He was stripped of his old identity, reborn as Lucas of Castoria, and commanded to become the invisible eyes of the throne, existing nowhere and everywhere all at once. The Watchers are the ultimate ghost operatives. There are zero records of them, and even the Emperor would publicly deny their existence. Luca figures the ranks must be incredibly small to maintain absolute secrecy, meaning it might literally just be him and his ruthless instructor, Kinuan. Kinuan had once explained the Empire's twisted method of control to him. If you squeeze a society too tight, it explodes into chaos, so the Emperor actually allows terrorist groups like Nemesis to run amok. They act as a pressure release valve, causing just enough trouble to vent the public's anger while their actual power is strictly capped. Luca realizes the horrifying truth that the Empire's greatest enemies are just pawns used to justify mass surveillance. Kinuan's philosophy is as dark as it is effective. He teaches Luca that humans run on hope, not despair, and by giving the masses a fake belief that things are slowly getting better, the Empire keeps them docile enough to endure their hellish reality. This makes Luca question everything about his recent deadly clash with the rogue guard Rick Kaiser. If the Empire controls its opposition, he wonders if Rick's rebellion was just another sanctioned act. Kinuan instructs Luca to take Rick's corpse back as a trophy, guaranteeing Luca's promotion to the top of the Imperial Guard Academy. It proves that even Halas, the captain of the guard, is completely in the dark about the Watchers because he is simply too rigidly loyal to handle the Empire's dirty secrets. Luca connects the dots to a darker tragedy, confronting Kinuan about the recent assassination of Nicholas, Halas' eldest son. Kinuan coldly admits he let Nicholas die on purpose, because sacrificing a high-ranking but easily replaceable noble gave the terrorists a false sense of victory, pacifying them. When Luca pushes further, Kinuan just gives him a chilling warning that Luca is still just a trainee, and digging too deep into the Empire's shadows will get him killed. Left alone with his thoughts, Luca is drowning in guilt. He never even liked his adoptive brother, but knowing his death was a calculated political move makes him sick. The lines between right and wrong have completely vanished, and Luca no longer knows who the real enemy is, the terrorists, his mentor, or the Empire itself. Amidst the rubble, Luca tries to bottle up his swirling emotions and process the heavy burden Kinuan just placed on him. By officially naming him an Akai's Demini, Luca is now the Emperor's Watcher, a ghost operating with absolute authority. He can't help but wonder about the origins of his combat style and its creator, Noel Muliska, questioning if the leader of the First Rebellion was truly a traitor, or just another secret agent playing politics for the Empire. Finding a spot with a working signal, our hero calls in his report to headquarters. To ensure Kinuan's presence remains an absolute secret, Luca boldly lies, claiming that he was the one who tracked down and killed the Nemesis terrorist Rick. Soon, Imperial aircraft swarm the ruined city to secure the perimeter. The recovery team is stunned to find Rick's body, praising Luca for an impossible achievement. They predict he'll be awarded a Level 4 Crossblade Order, a prestigious military honor completely unheard of for a mere cadet. But as the officers congratulate him, Luca's vision is suddenly flooded with classified data. His new Watcher authority automatically upgrades his privileges, granting him access to the Empire's highest intelligence network and exposing the secrets of even the top-ranking guards. The sheer volume of information overwhelms his nervous system, forcing him to shut down the display before stumbling away. Completely drained by the ordeal, he collapses into bed and sleeps for 16 straight hours just to recover. Waking up from a massive 16-hour crash, Luca reflects on the insane web of deception he's now tangled in. Kinuan completely played both Captain Halas and the terrorist Rick, acting as the Emperor's ultimate tool to control everything from the shadows. Even worse, Hollis has no idea his own martial arts instructor is a secret watcher. Getting a direct message from the captain to gear up and report to his office, Luca realizes his only play is to keep lying to his adoptive father. Heading into the Imperial Guard main building, our hero activates his Akai's Demini abilities, seeing the world through the exact same digital, data-scanning lens that Kinwin uses. He knows the Emperor will summon him soon, so until then, he has to bite his tongue, suppress his questions, and walk this deadly tightrope without slipping. Stepping into Hollis's high-tech office, Luca casually tries to use his new Watcher Eye to scan the captain's stats, but instantly gets hit with a glaring access denied warning. Turns out, the captain's security clearance is just too high to hack. Hollis demands the mission report, asking if it was really just Luca and Rick down there. Sticking to his fabricated story, Luca claims Rick tried to recruit him, and when he refused, a brutal fight broke out. Hollis points out that Rick was a legendary former Imperial Guard who evaded capture for years, so Luca credits his survival entirely to the Akai's tactic he learned from Kinwin, claiming he barely scraped by. He even throws in a lie that he couldn't find any dirt linking Kinwin to the underworld. But Hollis isn't a fool. He stares Luca down with a terrifying, scarred glare, noting that a rookie cadet taking down a veteran like Rick feels completely unnatural. Luca can feel the intense suspicion radiating off the captain, but he swallows his guilt. He knows deceiving his adoptive father is the only way to survive the Emperor's grand game. Luca knows that if Hollis discovered the full truth about the teleportation device, even his adoptive father would betray him. So he plays it perfectly, crediting his survival entirely to Kinwin's Akai's tactic and reminding the captain that a soldier's grand achievement shouldn't be met with an interrogation. The deflection works. Hollis reveals that Luca is being awarded the Level 4 Crossblade Order of Merit, an unprecedented honor for a mere cadet. To capitalize on the prestige, the Castoria family is throwing a massive celebratory banquet, and Hollis warns Luca he better have paid attention in dance class. To Luca, receiving the medal is just a trifling line to add to his resume, but the banquet is the real battlefield. He invites all his academy peers, including a still-grieving Ile, and soon, the grand Imperial Banquet Hall is filled with the Empire's elite, all gathered with our hero at the absolute center. On the dance floor, Jizzle tests Luca to see if he memorized the guest list. She admits she never expected a cadet to earn such a high merit, and when Luca modestly claims he was just lucky, she smirks, noting he's never been the modest type. As they dance, Jizzle points out that their brother Jupe is wandering around in an anxious sweat. Jupe hasn't achieved anything despite his immense privilege, and Jizzle predicts he'll be pulling every string he can tonight to avoid being overshadowed by Luca's success. Luca knows the harsh truth. In a family led by the legendary Hollis, being ordinary is a death sentence. Jizzle compliments Luca's formal uniform, admitting he finally looks like a true young aristocrat. Luca jokes that he was always treated like a young master back in the slums, but their banter is cut short as the other guests begin to make their moves. Watching from the sidelines, Hollis notes Jizzle's sharp intellect. He knows she desperately wants to become the head of the Castoria family, but he casually dismisses her chances. The family's strict military traditions demand a soldier at the helm, a brutal requirement that even her brilliant brother Nicholas struggles to overcome. Hollis assures Luca that there's no need to be on edge tonight. They are here to celebrate his accomplishments. But Luca cuts straight to the chase. Knowing that Jupe sees him as a threat, Luca offers to step aside and drop out of the succession race if Hollis prefers his biological son to take over. Hollis simply pats him on the shoulder. To him, blood doesn't matter. The head of the Castoria family must be willing to lead and protect it, and right now, neither Luca nor Jupe is ready. Hollis drops a harsh truth. He knows Luca wouldn't lay down his life for the family, so he shouldn't talk so lightly about leading it. As the captain walks away, the words hit our hero hard. Hollis is right. If Luca still views himself as an outsider, he has no right to talk about who is qualified to inherit the estate. More than anyone else, Hollis is the one who acknowledged his skills and took him in as an equal to his own sons. Suddenly, Luca's political maneuvering just feels incredibly petty. Later that evening, the grand banquet kicks off, and it's a completely different kind of battlefield. Luca is forced to navigate a sea of nobles and military brass, shaking hands and exchanging fake smiles with high-ranking captains. Nicholas pats his brother on the back, reminding him to keep it together. Tonight, Luca is the face of the Castoria family. But the endless small talk is nauseating. Luca realizes that Hollis is a warrior by nature, a man meant for the blood and dirt of the battlefield, yet he endures these suffocating gatherings purely out of duty to his family. If Luca truly wants to be a Castoria, he has to learn to do the same. Just then, Hollis pulls him aside to introduce him to a very eccentric guest, Gao Jin, the director of the Emperor's fourth lab. But the mad scientist completely ignores the introduction, his eyes wide with manic excitement as he demands Hollis look at whatever he's brought with him. The high society banquet, Hollis introduces Luca to one of the most influential and eccentric figures in the Empire, Director Gao Jin of the fourth lab. The childless scientist enthusiastically shows off a palm-sized raw gem, bragging that it packs enough energy to power an entire spaceship. He casually reveals he coated the highly dangerous stone in a new liquid-based energy shield, making it completely safe to handle for short periods. Alice immediately scolds the director for bringing classified imperial technology to a public party where spies from rival nations like Korra or Bellotto could be lurking. But Gaojin brushes off the rules. As fireworks erupt outside, the eccentric scientist declares that if they can stabilize this energy extraction, it will change the world, and he doesn't care about protocol because he just wants to see the final product before he dies. Luca watches the director laugh like a maniac, amazed that a man with so much power can act so freewheeling. When Hollis assures Gao that he looks healthy enough to live another 100 years, the director's smile fades. He grimly admits that his mind is deteriorating and that he's becoming polluted, before quickly changing the subject and bidding them farewell. Suddenly, a striking older woman approaches, making a wildly inappropriate joke about how the venue's automatic toilets left her squeaky clean. Gao Jin doesn't miss a beat, matching her crass humor and pulling her into a tight hug as he introduces her to the shocked nobles as his girlfriend, Martina. Hollis leaves Luca to enjoy the party, but our hero is already analyzing the room. Using his watcher abilities, Luca scans Martina and realizes she isn't a noble at all but a famous diva from the lower-class zones. It hits Luca just how untouchable Gao Jin really is. The man wields so much absolute authority that he can flaunt a commoner at a high society gala, and the elite just have to smile and tolerate. And the director isn't done pushing boundaries. Completely drunk, Gao Jin suddenly leaps off a high balcony, sending the crowd into panic while the veteran nobles just sigh, entirely used to his wild antics. Luca can only watch in disbelief, realizing the man is a total wildcard. Standing alone with a heavy, intense expression, Luca's brooding is interrupted when a peer approaches to clink glasses. The guest teases our hero for being the supposed star of the banquet, yet looking so intimidating that he's scaring away all the girls who desperately want to talk to him. Luca asks Ile about director Gao Jin, the eccentric head of the Emperor's fourth lab. Ile confirms Jin is a leading researcher on the arcane civilization, but warns that despite his genius, he's impossible to talk to because he gets blind drunk way too fast. But that genius comes with serious perks. Ile reveals that Jin is one of the few people legally permitted to travel to Bellotto, a potentially hostile faction, proving that the Empire will gladly bend its own rules and share research to keep from falling behind in the technological arms race. As the music swells through the banquet hall, Ile claps Luca on the shoulder, telling the star of the night to go find himself a pretty lady before wandering off into the crowd. While the rest of the high society guests pair up and hit the dance floor, our hero is left standing awkwardly by himself. He can't help but wonder how many more of these suffocating banquets he has to endure, wishing he was back in his cramped, familiar dorm room instead of playing dress-up. Suddenly, Jizzle taps him on the shoulder, scolding him for just standing around and warning that it's bad manners for the guest of honor not to dance. When Luca admits he has 2 left feet, she blushes and stammers, shyly hinting that she could be his partner. But before she can get the words out, the sharp clack of a heel shatters the moment. A striking woman with stark white hair smoothly steps between them, boldly asking the young master for a dance. Caught completely off guard, Luca nervously glances back at Jizzle, and judging by the icy, murderous glare Jizzle is shooting the newcomer, our hero is about to learn that navigating a battlefield is way easier than surviving high society politics.